This kid was literally a pile of shattered bones a second ago. But after absorbing a pool of fresh blood, his flesh starts violently knitting back together. The muscle fibers wrap around his face, his hair grows back in seconds, and suddenly, he goes from a sleep-deprived skeleton to looking like a K-pop idol who has never tasted carbs in his life. He stares at his newly formed hand, feeling the absolute cheat code power of his mutated heart, while these massive, fully grown thugs are collectively wetting their pants in the middle of the street. One bald idiot decides his best option is to swing a wooden baseball bat at him, but our guy doesn't even flinch. He catches the swing with his bare face and lands a counterpunch so incredibly fast, it literally warps the air around his fist. The sound of skull meeting metal is absolutely beautiful, as the thug is sent flying straight into the side of a minivan, leaving a massive human-shaped dent. Our regenerated king looks back with glowing red eyes, ready to turn the rest of these clowns into paste. Our story starts with a very clear, very warning sign about high voltage. Naturally, our main character is currently being chased by some sketchy guys in suits, and he decides that getting captured is a massive L he is not willing to take. So, what does he do? He grabs the live, sparking high voltage wires, and lets enough electricity course through his body to light up a small country. His skin literally vaporizes on the spot, showing his skeleton in a flash of blinding blue light. But inside his chest, a weird, fleshy heart starts glowing like a cursed RGB fan. He stands up, completely unbothered by the fact that he is now 50% bone and 50% vibes. This is Kim Geo, and he literally cannot die. See, in this world, some people are born with mutated, special hearts. These are not your average cardiovascular systems. They look like something out of a Resident Evil boss fight. A tiny fraction of the population gets these weird mutations, giving them insane, godlike powers. Normal humans call them heart mutants and treat them like lottery winners. They think it's a blessing from God, but they clearly haven't seen our guy who is currently dumpster diving like a raccoon on a budget. He's wearing a red polka dot scarf on his head to hide his bare skull, looking like a cursed grandma. He's so hungry he's contemplating his entire life choices in a trash heap. And then, jackpot. He finds a piece of stale bread that someone threw out. It doesn't even smell like garbage yet, so he starts shoving it down his skeletal jaw like it's a 5-star meal. Suddenly, a random stray dog appears, giving him the classic, "Are you going to finish that?" look. Since Geo is a softie underneath all that exposed bone, he offers the dog a piece of his treasure. The dog happily eats it, and our guy gets a temporary wholesome moment. But because the universe refuses to let him rest, a pack of other dogs starts running away, as voices echo nearby. Geo peeks around the corner, thinking the creepy lab scientists have finally tracked him down. Instead, he sees 3 local thugs cornering a high school girl in the alley. He realizes they aren't government agents, just some low-tier neighborhood trash. The girl is terrified, holding onto a bag of dog food while these creeps get uncomfortably close. Geo stares at the bag of dog food, completely ignoring the gravity of the situation because his stomach is screaming. He decides to intervene, stepping out from the shadows with a polite, "Excuse me." The thugs look back, assuming he's just some homeless guy trying to ruin their fun. But as Geo gets closer, the light hits his face, revealing a terrifying half-skeleton, half-human monstrosity. The blonde thug starts screaming like a little girl as Geo casually picks up a sharp, broken metal pipe. He tells them to get lost before things get messy, and honestly, the skull face does 90% of the talking. The thugs immediately panic, screaming about ghosts, and run away faster than a Discord mod leaving his house. The girl falls to the ground, shivering and thanking her savior. But then, she looks up, and Geo is standing over her, like the Grim Reaper's malnourished cousin. She lets out a blood-curdling scream, telling him to stay back. Geo, however, does not care about her fear. He is currently on his knees, vacuuming the spilled dog food off the dirt. The girl stops screaming, completely bewildered by the fact that this terrifying ghost is eating kibble. She stares at the dog food bag, her brain trying to process the sheer absurdity of the moment. Geo looks at her, munching on a green kibble, and asks if she minds sharing. The realization hits her. This thing can talk. She screams again and runs away, leaving him with the local strays. Geo sighs, knowing his face is a natural repellent for any normal human interaction. But hey, free food is free food, so he keeps eating the dog food in peace. Meanwhile, the girl is peeking from behind a wall, wondering if he was actually a living person. She watches him feed the dogs, realizing he is incredibly gentle, despite looking like a Halloween prop. She remembers rumors about heart mutants, who possess bizarre, monstrous abilities. She starts feeling incredibly guilty for screaming at the guy who literally just saved her from a horrific situation. Geo is sitting with the puppies when he sees a pair of clean white sneakers step into his field of vision. He looks up and sees the girl, trembling but holding out a freshly wrapped Subway sandwich. He stares at it, completely stunned that someone is offering him actual human food. She apologizes for running away, and our guy hesitantly reaches out his shaking, skeletal hand to take it. He takes a massive bite, and his eyes go wide. It's an absolute flavor explosion. His brain is literally short-circuiting from the taste of fresh ingredients. The bread, the fresh meat, the crisp vegetables, to a guy who is eating literal trash. This is a Michelin star meal. He looks at her, and she suddenly has a literal halo and angel wings in his eyes. She sits down, petting the dogs, and asks what she should call him. He covers his face shyly and introduces himself as Kim Jio. She flashes a beautiful smile and says her name is Song Hyeji. She asks why he's living out here like this, and Jio casually drops a massive bombshell. He's hiding from a research lab. Hyeji's smile instantly vanishes. He explains that there is a secret facility that hunts down heart mutants to perform illegal experiments. She asks what they did to him, her voice trembling. Jio looks down, his skeletal hand touching his face, as the dark memories flood back. For 10 agonizing years, they kept him chained up like an animal. They fed him lethal poisons to test new drugs, and harvested his organs daily to check transplant compatibility, knowing his body would just force itself to heal. Because of his heart of resurrection, he was the ultimate, indestructible lab rat. He explains that the constant, forced regeneration is the exact reason his body looks so hideous now. Hyeji stares at him, her eyes filling with tears of pure anger and sadness for what this guy had to endure. Jio covers his face, feeling ashamed of his monstrous appearance. But Hyeji suddenly stands up, grabs him by the hand, and demands that he comes with her. Jio is dragged along, completely confused by her sudden burst of energy. He looks down at their hands. Even though he is a terrifying monster, she is holding his cold, skeletal hand without a hint of disgust. His face starts heating up, and a cute cartoon blush appears on his skull. He warns her that if she pulls too hard, pop! His entire arm detaches from his shoulder, leaving her holding a severed skeletal limb. She screams in absolute horror, and Jio casually explains that it's fine. His limbs just fall off sometimes. He tells her if he lines up the bone right, it'll just reattach itself, like Lego bricks. A few minutes later, Jio is standing in a brand new, oversized streetwear hoodie. Hyeji smiles, explaining that his old clothes were too worn out and made him stand out. She bought him some cheap clothes and a black wig to cover his bare skull. Jio is incredibly touched, feeling the warmth of the hoodie fabric against his bones. He starts sparkling, thinking these are the absolute greatest clothes ever made in human history. But Hyeji says they aren't done yet and reaches into her bag. Since he doesn't have ears to hold a face mask, she decides to cover his exposed bone with makeup. She finishes and proudly says, "Ta-da!" showing her masterpiece. Jio looks like a cursed, pale clown with drawn-on lipstick. She immediately blushes and apologizes, admitting it's her first time doing makeup on a literal skull. But Jio doesn't mind at all. He genuinely loves it, because it means he can walk around without scaring people. Suddenly, Hyeji checks her phone and panics. She's late for her private academy lessons. She bids him a hasty goodbye, waving as she runs off into the evening. She calls back, asking him to take care of the stray puppies until she returns. Jio watches her leave, repeating her name in his head, Song Hyeji. The puppies start licking his face, and he wonders if her asking him to watch them means she's coming back tomorrow. He thinks about his past, how the scientists only viewed him as a piece of meat to be sliced open, and how every civilian he met while running away screamed and threw things at him. Hyeji is the first person in his entire life to treat him like a human being. He pets the brown dog, thanking him, because if he hadn't shared his bread, he never would have met her. The dog happily licks his face, and Jio decides to give him a name. He names him Gamja, which means potato, and the dog barks in approval. Jio sits under the night sky, thinking about how delicious the Subway sandwich was, and how Hyeji is a literal angel sent from heaven. He starts looking forward to tomorrow, hoping he'll get to see her again. But as he sits there with the dogs, the reality of his situation crashes back down. He stops smiling, his empty eye socket staring into the dark. He remembers that he is a hunted man. The lab will never stop looking for him. If he stays here, he will eventually lead those ruthless monsters straight to Hyeji and put her in extreme danger. He decides he has to leave, walking away under the full moon. He leaves the alley, returning to the dark, empty streets where he belongs. He wanders into a concrete drainage tunnel near the river, seeking shelter. His skeletal body is exhausted, and his energy is completely depleted. He collapses face first onto the cold concrete, passing out next to some trash bags. The next morning, he is startled awake by a squeaking sound, sitting up in a panic as a mouse runs past. He sighs, realizing he shouldn't just sleep anywhere, but his body is just too weak. His stomach growls, and he reaches into his hoodie pocket, searching for anything to eat. He pulls out a handful of the dog food he took from the alley yesterday. He stares at the kibble and decides to use his imagination, pretending it's a delicious Subway sandwich. He tells himself the green bits are fresh lettuce, the yellow bits are warm bread, and the brown bits are juicy meat. He crunches down on them, and surprisingly, his brain actually tricks him into tasting the sandwich. Suddenly, a massive wet tongue licks the kibble right out of his hand, and he screams in horror. It's Gamja. The dog has a cheeky smile, chewing on the stolen food. Jio is completely bewildered, wondering how the dog managed to find him. He realizes that if Gamja is here, then that means he looks up, his eye widening. And for once, he is glad his face is a bare skull, because if he had skin, she would have seen just how incredibly happy he was. Hyeji is standing at the entrance of the tunnel, holding a bag of supplies and looking slightly annoyed but relieved. She tells him she's been looking for him all day, explaining that the dogs remembered his scent and tracked him down. She gently scolds him for wandering off in his fragile state crate, and Geo looks down, feeling incredibly guilty. He mutters that he thought he would just become a burden to her, but she softly smiles and says she's just glad she found him. She picks up Gamja, showing how worried even the little puppy was about him. She tells him it's time to eat, spreading out a massive feast of convenience store food on the concrete. She bought milk, sodas, hot dogs, and sandwiches, knowing he only had one meal yesterday. She pours milk directly into a tray of chocolate chip cookies, creating a sweet, milky soup. Geo is horrified by this bizarre culinary creation, but she insists it's incredibly delicious when eaten this way. He hesitantly takes the spoon, staring at the soggy cookies. He takes a bite, and tears literally start streaming down his face. It's so sweet and delicious he feels like his brain is melting. He excitedly tells her she needs to try some, and she laughs at his dramatic reaction. Suddenly, crack! A sound echoes from his left arm, and he looks down to see fresh bone and muscle tissue rapidly regenerating. Geo is shocked, and Heiji runs over, asking to see the healing process. She inspects the red, pulsing muscle tissue wrapping around his bone like a sci-fi virus. She asks if his body always regenerates this slowly, wondering if it will take several days to fully recover. Geo casually replies that regenerating through normal food actually takes several years. She is stunned, and asks if there is another, faster method to heal. Geo's heart pulses in his chest. He knows the secret. He could just drink a massive amount of blood to regenerate instantly. But he decides not to mention it because it would probably scare her away. He lies and says it's a special method only possible inside the high-tech equipment at the laboratory. So for now, eating well is his only option. Heiji realizes that the lab only helped him recover, so they could keep dissecting him, which is why they are chasing him so relentlessly. She asks if the real reason he ran away last night was to protect her from them. Geo looks down, admitting that getting involved with him will only put her in extreme danger, so she doesn't need to be nice to him anymore. But instead of running, Heiji stands up with absolute determination and says they need to go to the police right now. Geo tells her it won't work, normal people view him as a monster, and the police almost shot him when he first escaped. Heiji tells him not to worry, because her older sister is actually a police officer, and just like him, her sister is also a heart variant with mutated abilities. Geo's eye goes wide, completely shocked to hear that her sister is a high-ranking mutant working in law enforcement. He looks at Gamja, still hesitant to trust anyone else. Heiji kneels down, begging him to trust her just this once, promising that her sister is incredibly kind and will keep him safe. Geo stares at her sincere face, his defenses finally starting to crumble. She gathers the stray puppies, telling them she has to go home early today, but promises she'll see them soon. She tells Geo that they will contact an animal shelter to help the puppies, and asks him to be on his best behavior. Gamja lets out a cute bark, looking incredibly happy. Geo gently pets Gamja, thanking the little dog for bringing Heiji back to him. He whispers that this time, he won't run away like a coward, promising to return and see them again. As they walk away, the stray dogs stand at the fence, howling and waving them goodbye. Geo pulls his hood down, thinking about how after 3 long years of running and hiding in fear, someone has finally reached out to help him. The image she2_040 shows Geo standing in front of a speeding car, but let's build the tension. Suddenly, a massive black SUV screams around the corner, its headlights blinding him as it drives straight toward him. Geo barely has time to look back before the vehicle hits him. The impact is devastating. He is thrown into the air, his wig and glasses flying off as his skeletal body is shattered. The SUV screeches to a halt, leaving deep tire marks on the asphalt. Geo hits the ground hard, his bones cracking and splintering from the brutal force. Before he can even process the pain, a bald giant grabs Heiji, covering her mouth as she screams for help. A group of heavily armed thugs steps out of the vehicles, wielding baseball bats and weapons. They pin Geo to the ground, grabbing his broken limbs before he can even attempt to crawl away. The scarred thug boss steps forward, lighting a cigarette with a smug smile, calling him a skeleton bastard. He coldly orders his men to take him, looking at Geo like he's just a walking pile of cash. They throw Heiji into the back of a second SUV and speed away, leaving the main vehicle to drag Geo behind them. They tie a thick rope around Geo's neck, dragging his body along the asphalt like a piece of cheap garbage. He screams in agony as his fragile bones are scraped against the rough road, leaving a trail of black dust and blood. He curses his weak body, his empty eye socket staring at the road ahead. He claws at the asphalt with his remaining skeletal fingers, desperate to stop the car. His mind is screaming because he knows this is all his fault. Heiji is being dragged away to some horrific fate just because she showed him basic human kindness. His fingers snap off one by one as he tries to grip the road, leaving bloody scratches. His body is falling apart and his strength is completely gone. He starts crying, hating himself for having such a useless, garbage ability. He can't protect the only person who ever cared about him. He starts begging for someone, anyone, to help him. And then, a miracle happens. The stray dogs leap onto the road, chasing the SUV with furious snarls. They grab the dragging rope with their teeth, using their collective weight to slow down the vehicle. The thick rope starts fraying under their sharp teeth. The SUV's tires screech as the weight of the dog pack forces the car to a sudden halt in the middle of the road. The dogs surround the car, barking and growling like a pack of wolves protecting their alpha. The thug boss grunts in annoyance, stepping out of the car, completely furious at these annoying mutts. The rest of the mercenaries step onto the asphalt, holding heavy wooden bats. They look at the dogs with cold, sadistic eyes, ready to turn them into street grease. One of the thugs kicks a puppy, and a painful whimper echoes through the street. They start swinging their bats, brutally beating the defenseless dogs who are trying to shield Gio. Gio tries to lift his head, his vision blurring as he hears the painful cries of his animal friends. He screams at himself to get up, telling himself he has to do something, anything, to save them. He watches as a thug strikes Gamja with a heavy blow, sending blood spraying onto the cold concrete. At the sight of the blood, a realization hits Gio's brain like a lightning bolt. Blood. He can absorb blood to regenerate instantly. He drags his half-shattered torso along the asphalt, crawling toward the pools of blood. He begs his useless body to move just a few more inches, desperate to reach the life-saving fluid. He looks up and sees Gamja lying motionless in a pool of his own blood. Gio's eye goes wide, his mind completely snapping from the sheer shock and horror. He calls out to Gamja, but the dog doesn't move, his tongue hanging out of his bloody mouth. The smaller pug is also lying in a pool of dark blood, unconscious. The entire street is covered in the blood of the dogs who sacrificed themselves to save him. The thugs keep beating the remaining dogs, laughing as they break their small bodies. The trauma of the last 10 years flashes in Gio's mind. The endless days of being chained up, dissected, and treated like an object. The scientists smiling as they injected poison into his veins and cut out his organs day after day. He remembers how he finally escaped, hoping he could find a peaceful life, only to be treated like a monster by every human he met. They threw trash at him, screamed in disgust, and treated him like filth. He was completely alone in the world, forced to rot in trash heaps. But inside his chest, his mutated heart starts beating like a war drum. He remembers Hyeji's warm smile and how she and these dogs treated him like a real human being. They gave him a reason to live, and now these monsters are trying to take them away. His heart explodes with a blinding crimson light, and a massive vortex of dark, bloody energy erupts from his body. The spilled blood on the street starts defying gravity, swirling around his skeletal frame like a crimson hurricane. He lets out a primal, bone-chilling scream as the blood of his allies is absorbed directly into his heart. The vortex spins faster, creating a violent red tornado in the middle of the road. Inside the storm, fresh human muscle and skin rapidly wrap around his bones. His skeletal arms are replaced with powerful, muscular limbs. Continuing the battle sequence from the hook transition point, the bald thug's face is literally flattened by the sheer force of Gio's punch. Our guy stands tall, his body steamrolling through the thugs with terrifying speed. The remaining mercenaries watch in horror as their strongest fighter is completely embedded in the van's crumpled metal door, unconscious and bleeding out. Gio ignores the rest of the thugs, dropping to his knees to pet a severely injured Gamja. He wraps his arms around the bleeding dog, holding him close as his chest rises with heavy, angry breaths. He slowly stands up, his long black hair casting a dark shadow over his face. The remaining thugs back away, sweating profusely as they look at the terrifying aura radiating from him. Gio looks at them with cold, glowing red eyes, his voice low and dripping with pure malice. I know the method to die in the most painful way. We cut to the outskirts of the city, at a shady, secluded meat processing warehouse. Several black SUVs are parked outside, meaning the entire recovery squad is currently gathered inside their main hideout. Inside, a black hood is violently ripped off a head, and Song Hee-ji finds herself tied to a metal pipe, demanding to know who these people are. She looks around the room, and the color instantly drains from her face. A dozen heavily armed thugs are standing in a circle, looking down at her with smug, predatory grins. But it is not the thugs that terrify her, it is what is happening in the background of this warehouse. Behind them, men in blood-soaked aprons are using chainsaws and butcher knives to carve up human bodies on metal operating tables, surrounded by puddles of dark blood. Before she can even process the horror of this human meat factory, a massive hand grabs her by the hair, violently pulling her head back. The scarred thug boss kneels in front of her, blowing cigarette smoke into her face, and asks if she thinks she has extra lives to play with. He shoves a mugshot of test subject 10101 in her face, showing Gio's horrifying skeletal form, and tells her she is in this mess because she helped a monster. He tells her that if she wants to leave this room alive, she needs to shut her mouth and tell them everything she knows. Because in a place like this, nobody is going to care if a high school girl suddenly goes missing. Suddenly, a vibrating ringtone cuts through the tense silence, coming straight from the boss's pocket. The boss pulls out his phone, visibly annoyed, and demands to know why his cleanup crew is calling instead of returning. On the other end of the line, a panicked voice explains that the stray dogs halted the vehicle, and the skeleton has somehow transformed into a fully grown human. The boss's face contorts in pure confusion, screaming at his subordinate to speak clearly and explain what happened to the target. Haiji listens closely, her eyes widening, as she realizes the stray dogs actually went back to save her friend. The thug on the phone hesitates, stuttering out the worst possible news. They completely lost the skeleton. The boss goes absolutely ballistic, screaming into the receiver, calling them useless pieces of trash who have no idea how much money that target is worth. He slams his foot down, shattering his own phone against the concrete floor, declaring that if they do not bring him back, they are dead meat. He turns his absolute fury back onto Heiji, grabbing her collar and screaming at her to spit out where the skeleton's hideout is. His face is completely bloodshot with rage, veins bulging on his forehead as he demands she speak. Heiji whimpers, crying that she genuinely does not know, but the boss is far past the point of listening to excuses. He draws a massive tactical knife from his belt, warning her that maybe a few extra breathing holes will help jog her memory. Heiji stares at the cold steel pressed against her neck, realizing too late the sheer scale of the danger she walked into. Tears stream down her face as she grits her teeth, completely terrified, wondering what she can possibly do to survive this. Before the knife can cut, a thunderous crash echoes through the warehouse, shaking the concrete walls. A massive double door is blown completely off its hinges, and a thug's body is launched through the air, sliding across the floor. The entire room freezes, the butchers stopping their chainsaws as everyone turns to look at the entrance. Standing in the bright light of the doorway is a tall, shadowy figure clad in a torn, dirt-stained black shirt. The scarred boss narrows his eyes, his cigarette nearly dropping from his mouth as he tries to identify the intruder. He asks his men who this brat is, completely failing to recognize the handsome young man standing before them. A tattooed thug with a knife steps up, grabbing Gio's shoulder, mocking him as a homeless beggar who wandered into the wrong neighborhood. Before the thug can even raise his blade, Gio's hand moves like lightning, instantly clamping onto his throat with a vice-like grip. The thug is lifted off his feet, gasping for air, his face turning purple as he realizes the sheer, inhuman strength of this kid. Gio tilts his head up slightly, his face cold and expressionless, his eyes hidden beneath his messy black hair. He says, in a flat, chilling voice, that because of these people, all the stray dogs had to die. The other thugs snap out of their shock, drawing their weapons and charging forward to back up their comrade. A massive punch lands directly on the side of Gio's face, the impact throwing his head back. A drop of blood trickles from Gio's nose, and the thug who punched him grins, thinking he has easily subdued the intruder. But Gio doesn't even flinch. He immediately counters with a devastating elbow to the thug's jaw, sending him spinning. Before he can recover, another mercenary tackles Gio from behind, pinning his arms to his sides. A third thug steps up, landing a heavy blow to Gio's head, trying to knock him unconscious. Gio slowly raises his head, revealing a chilling, mocking smile, his eyes glowing a deep, predatory crimson. With a single, effortless flex of his muscles, he throws the man off his back, slamming him headfirst into the hard concrete floor. The remaining thugs back away in terror, realizing this kid is not human. Gio looks down at them, his aura completely suffocating the room. He asks them, in a low voice, if they were sent by the Hermes lab. Heiji stares at him from across the room, her jaw dropping as she begins to recognize those eyes. The image of the terrifying skeleton she met in the alley flashes in her mind, and she whispers out, "Mister?" The scarred boss's eyes widen as he finally connects the dots, realizing this handsome kid is actually the skeleton they were hunting. He remembers the black market brokers mentioning that high-class mutants can look completely different once they fully regenerate. Without another word, the boss pulls out a silencer-equipped pistol and fires, a bullet tearing clean through Gio's chest. The boss smirks, thanking him for being stupid enough to crawl right into their main hideout. He yells at his men to pull out every gun they secured from their recent smuggling deals. A dozen pistols are drawn and aimed at the single target standing in the center of the warehouse. The boss orders them to shoot him repeatedly, aiming to drain his regenerative cells until he can no longer heal. A continuous hail of gunfire erupts, muzzle flashes illuminating the dark warehouse as bullets rain down on Gio's body. Gio's head is thrown back under the constant impact, blood splattering across the concrete floor. The sheer physical sensation of his flesh tearing open sends a sharp jolt of agony through his nervous system. He can feel his bones shattering into tiny fragments as the lead bullets pierce through his limbs. His lungs are completely punctured, making it functionally impossible for him to even draw a single breath. Heiji screams at the top of her lungs, begging them to stop as she watches her friend get brutally executed. Gio's body finally collapses to the floor, motionless, surrounded by a pool of rapidly expanding dark blood. The thugs stop firing, laughing as they assume the target has finally been neutralized for good. But on the floor, Gio's fingers twitch, sliding through the blood of the butchered corpses nearby. His heart of resurrection begins to beat with a thunderous, heavy rhythm. The blood on the floor, spilled from the meat tables and the dead bodies, begins to defy gravity, flowing toward his hand. His mutated heart flares with a blinding, radioactive crimson light, violently vacuuming the surrounding blood to fuel his cells. A thug points in absolute horror, screaming to the boss that the kid is somehow coming back to life. Gio's spine arches off the floor as tendrils of dark blood wrap around his body like a cocoon. He stands up with an unnatural, jerky motion, looking like an immortal zombie rising from the grave. The boss yells at his men to stop standing around and keep shooting until the target is reduced to ash. Another round of gunfire erupts, bullets tearing through his face and neck, splattering blood behind him. He can feel every single bullet shattering his skull and tearing his facial muscles apart. But the moment a bullet passes through, the dark blood instantly seals the wound, regenerating the tissue in milliseconds. Gio takes a step forward, realizing that despite the constant pain, something is very different. He looks down at his chest, where his flesh is rapidly knitting back over his exposed ribcage. He realizes this agony is nothing compared to what he endured daily inside the Hermes lab. The image of a massive hydraulic press crushing his limbs under tons of pressure flashes in his mind. The endless torture, the chemical burns, and the daily dissection he survived make a few bullet wounds feel like mere insect bites. With a terrifying burst of speed, Gio blitzes forward, landing a devastating punch directly on a thug's face. The sheer kinetic force of the impact launches the mercenary across the room, crashing into a stack of metal barrels. Gio wipes the blood from his cheek with his sleeve, his eyes cold and focused. He tells them he can easily endure as many bullets as they have in their magazines. Another mercenary swings a heavy steel pipe, but Gio effortlessly steps inside his guard, his fist already moving. A clean, straight right hand connects with the thug's jaw, shattering his teeth. The force of the punch is so immense, it creates a shockwave, blowing away the surrounding dust as the thug is knocked out instantly. Another thug tries to attack from the side, but Gio's reaction time is simply on a different level. He delivers a brutal kick to the man's chest, folding him in half and sending him crashing through a wooden table. We see a brief mental image of the friendly brown dog Gamja, wagging its tail happily in the alleyway. The memory of his only animal friends being brutally beaten for his sake sends a wave of pure, unadulterated fury through Gio's veins. He turns his gaze toward the scarred boss, who is backing away toward the corner of the room. In a desperate panic, the boss grabs Haiji by her hair, pressing his gun tightly against her temple, screaming at Gio to stay back. But Gio does not stop. He moves so fast, his body becomes a blur, bypassing the hostage entirely. His fist connects directly with the center of the scarred boss's face, the impact folding the man's nose completely flat. Gio's eyes are pitch black with rage, completely devoid of any mercy or human emotion. The sheer momentum of the punch launches the boss backward, his body crashing violently into a massive steel pressure tank. The steel tank dents heavily under the impact, and the boss slides down, coughing up a mouthful of dark blood. He looks up, his vision blurry, staring at the terrifying silhouette of the young man standing over him. The boss reaches his hand out, his voice trembling as he begs Gio to spare him, promising to do whatever he wants. Gio looks down at him with cold, dead eyes, whispering a single, chilling phrase, "Too late." He raises his fist, channeling every ounce of his blood-fueled strength into his arm. The first punch lands with a sickening crunch, shattering the boss's jaw completely. The second punch follows immediately, crushing his cheekbones and driving his head deep into the cracked concrete. A brutal, relentless barrage of punches echoes through the warehouse, each strike landing with the force of a wrecking ball. The dust rises around them as Gio continues to strike the unconscious man, completely painting the floor in blood. The scarred boss's face is completely unrecognizable, his body twitching feebly before going completely still. Gio slowly stands up, his fists dripping with blood, his breathing heavy as the adrenaline begins to fade. The entire warehouse is a graveyard of unconscious and broken bodies, the threat completely neutralized. Gio stands in the silence of the room, steam rising from his regenerated body as his heart rate slowly stabilizes. He hears a soft, trembling voice behind him call out, "Mister." He slowly turns, his bare feet taking a heavy step across the blood-stained floor. Each step feels incredibly heavy, the physical and emotional toll of the transformation finally catching up to him. He walks past the hanging meat carcasses, approaching the trembling high school girl tied to the pipe. Haiji looks up at his handsome, fully regenerated face, asking him with tears in her eyes if he is genuinely okay after being shot so many times. Without waiting for an answer, she breaks free from her loose ropes and throws her arms around his neck, hugging him tightly. As she squeezes him, she weeps, crying out how thankful she is that he survived this nightmare. Gio stands frozen, his eyes widening in shock at the warmth of her embrace, a sensation he hasn't felt in 10 long years. He slowly buries his face in her shoulder, his voice cracking as he tells her that all the puppies died trying to protect him. He tells her he was so incredibly terrified that she might have died too, leaving him completely alone in this world again. Tears stream down his face, and he whispers a quiet, broken thank you to the only girl who didn't run away from him. Haiji looks at him with deep, sorrowful eyes, wondering why he is the one thanking her after everything he did to save her. She places her warm hand gently over his beating heart, feeling the rapid, powerful pulse of his mutation. She squeezes him tighter, whispering back that she is the one who should be thankful to him for coming back for her. Later that night, the flashing blue and red lights of police cruisers illuminate the dark alleyways outside the warehouse. Detectives move through the crime scene in absolute disbelief, looking at the smashed concrete, shattered steel tanks, and dozens of broken gang members. Up on a nearby hill, hidden behind the thick trees, Gio and Hyeji watch the police load the thugs into transport vans. Hyeji explains that her older sister, who is a police officer, told them to stay out of the area for now to avoid complicated questions. Since her sister has promised to handle the official investigation, she tells Gio they should slip away before anyone spots them. As they walk away into the dark woods, the emotional dam finally breaks, and Hyeji begins to sob uncontrollably, covering her face. Gio stands beside her, clutching his head in pure grief, his shoulders shaking as he quietly weeps. They look down at the grass, where the bodies of the brave stray dogs lie still, their lives cut short. Hyeji calls out their names one by one: Baduki, Siru, Choco, and the others, her heart completely breaking. She cradles the lifeless body of Gamja, crying that this is all her fault for leading them into this danger. She says she only gave them food and warmth for a brief moment, yet they risked everything to save her when she was taken. Gio grits his teeth, violently biting his own finger, drawing a fresh drop of bright crimson blood. Hyeji gasps in shock, asking him what on earth he is doing to himself in his state. Gio kneels beside the dog, wondering if his blood has unique properties that can bring them back to life. But as his blood drips onto the dog, his own finger instantly heals, leaving not even a scratch behind. He punches the ground in frustration, cursing his body for healing so fast when he needs to share his life force. Hyeji grabs his hands, begging him to stop hurting himself, warning him that the dogs would be even sadder if they saw him like this. Gio looks up at her with tears in his eyes, asking if she genuinely thinks they don't resent him for their deaths. Hyeji shakes her head, telling him with absolute certainty that these dogs loved him more than anything. She reminds him that normally, these stray dogs kept a safe distance from all humans, but they ran to him without hesitation. Gio looks down, realizing he never knew their past before they met in the alley. Hyeji explains that these dogs had numerous scars on their bodies from being abused by cruel humans in the neighborhood. Gio holds Gamja's head gently, his heart aching as he realizes they were not just naturally docile. She tells him that if he blames himself and stays miserable, the hearts of the dogs who saved him will only ache in the afterlife. He sits in the quiet forest, stroking the soft fur of the dog who gave its life so he could stand here as a human. Hyeji looks at him, her voice soft, as she explains why the dogs approached him without any fear on that first day. She says they likely recognized that he was a survivor who had suffered through the exact same kind of pain and isolation. Gio nods silently, whispering a quiet thank you to his fallen friends as the wind rustles through the trees. Suddenly, a tiny rustling noise comes from the bushes behind them, and both of them turn around in surprise. A tiny, fluffy puppy waddles out into the light, and Hyeji gasps, realizing it is Gamja's surviving baby. The tiny puppy barks softly, its tail wagging as it walks past Hyeji and straight toward Gio. Hyeji smiles through her tears, pointing out that the little guy is looking up at him with absolute trust. Gio kneels down, asking the puppy if it genuinely doesn't hate him, even though its mother died because of him. The puppy licks his hand affectionately, its warm pink tongue tickling his fingers, showing zero fear. Hyeji giggles softly, noting that the little one seems to like him just as much as its mother did. The puppy yawns, curling up into a tiny ball in the palm of Gio's hand, instantly falling fast asleep. Hyeji ponders what they should do next, realizing they cannot leave a newborn puppy alone in the cold woods. She looks at Gio, knowing the dangerous operatives from the laboratory will not stop hunting him. She tells him to wait a second while she makes a phone call to her older sister to secure a safe place. We cut to her talking on the phone, explaining the situation while Gio watches her from a distance, holding the sleeping puppy. Later, under the cover of night, the two walk down the quiet city streets, heading toward a modern apartment complex. They arrive at a high-rise building, a place that feels completely removed from the grimy alleyways of the city. Hyeji opens the door to her apartment, welcoming him inside, telling him to make himself completely at home. Gio stands at the threshold, looking down at his torn clothes, asking if it is genuinely okay for a dangerous mutant like him to enter. Hyeji smiles warmly, throwing her backpack onto the counter, asking how he could be dangerous when he risked his life to protect her. She adds that her older sister is currently investigating a high-profile case related to the illegal lab and wants to meet him. She reassures him that everything is going to be fine, urging him to take off his shoes and step inside. As Gio walks into the hallway, his eyes land on a large glass mirror, and he freezes in absolute shock. He lets out a loud scream, falling backward, pointing at the mirror in pure panic. Hyeji runs over, terrified, as Gio grabs his own face, screaming that he has actual cheeks, a nose, and lips. He explains, with wide eyes, that he had no idea what his own face looked like because his regeneration was kept at a crawl in the lab. He stares at his reflection, touching his smooth skin, realizing for the first time in his life that he looks like a normal human. Hyeji sits at the kitchen table, drinking a bottle of water, watching him with a mixture of amusement and curiosity. She notes that now that he is fully regenerated, he looks incredibly young, asking him how old he actually is. Gio looks down, counting his fingers, realizing it has been years since he even thought about his age. He calculates he was taken to the lab at age 7, took the comprehensive test 7 times, and 3 seasons have passed since he escaped. He declares that he is 17 years old, and Haiji instantly does a hilarious spit take, spraying water everywhere. She lunges forward, grabbing his shoulders, screaming that they are the exact same age. She demands to know why he let her call him Mr. all this time, and Gio blushes furiously, scratching his head. He admits, in a quiet voice, that he just liked that she was addressing him like a real person instead of an object. Haiji stares at him, her expression softening, finding his reason both incredibly sad and unexpectedly cute. She tells him they are dropping all formal titles from now on, ordering him to go wash up while she prepares food. In the corner, the puppy is happily eating a bowl of food, its tail wagging as it gobbles up its meal. Gio sits at the table, taking his first bite of a simple bowl of soy sauce egg rice, and his face lights up. Hiji blushes slightly, apologizing that she is not a great cook and only made a simple, home-cooked meal. But to Gio, who has spent 10 years eating experimental paste and trash, this is the most delicious food he has ever tasted. She explains that her sister got called into an emergency investigation and won't be able to make it home tonight. We see their empty bowls on the table, meaning Gio has completely polished off every single scrap of food. Haiji points to the large, comfortable sofa in the living room, telling him he can sleep there for the night. Gio offers to sleep on the hard floor, but she hands him a soft, warm blanket with cartoon characters on it. She bids him goodnight, heading into her bedroom to finish her school homework, closing the door behind her. Gio stands alone in the dimly lit living room, clutching the soft blanket, looking around in awe. He touches his clean clothes, looking at the modern, peaceful apartment, feeling like he has stepped into a different dimension. He marvels at how thin and large modern TVs are, and how people actually bring beautiful flowers inside their homes. He slowly sits on the sofa, sinking into the cushions, amazed that a piece of furniture can be this soft and comfortable. Nearby, the puppy finishes its bowl of food, looking extremely content with its new life. Suddenly, the puppy arches its back, letting out a small strain as it drops a tiny piece of poop on the clean floor. Gio's eyes widen in pure horror, his face turning pale as he looks at the dark shape on the floor. Having never seen a normal animal function, he assumes the puppy's organs are failing, screaming out in a panic. He lunges off the sofa, throwing his blanket aside, scrambling across the room to save the dying puppy. He skids to a halt, hovering over the puppy, trying to figure out how to perform emergency medical treatment. The puppy looks up at him with a happy, innocent expression, completely unaware of the chaos it just caused. Gio sighs in relief, realizing it was just a normal biological function, wiping his brow in embarrassment. Later, Gio lies down on the sofa, the tiny puppy sleeping peacefully right beside his head on the pillow. He pulls the warm blanket up, feeling the incredible comfort of the soft fabric against his skin. He looks at the sleeping puppy, smiling as he asks the little guy if it likes sleeping in a warm home too. He wonders what he should name the puppy, trying out names like French fries before coming up with something better. He decides to name him Twigum, which means fried food, and the puppy licks his hand as if agreeing to the name. Twigum closes his eyes, drifting off to sleep with a happy, contented expression. Gio closes his eyes too, realizing that this warm, peaceful feeling is what people refer to as true happiness. He remembers the delicious meal he ate, the warm water of the bath, and the soft bed. Every single normal human experience he had tonight feels like an absolute miracle compared to his dark past. He curls up, holding the puppy close, enjoying the quiet serenity of the night. But as he lies in the dark, a cold, realistic thought creeps into his mind, his expression turning serious. He knows that in his world, peaceful things like this are incredibly fragile and can easily be snatched away. His mind flashes back to the day of his escape, running through the dark corridors of the Hermes lab, alongside other test subjects. He remembers the elite tactical recovery squads chasing them down, armed with high-tech military gear. A massive explosion ripped through the escape corridor, separating the group of escaping variants. Gio fell to the floor, his skeletal body trapped under a massive slab of fallen concrete as the dust settled. A recovery operative pointed a heavy, specialized containment weapon directly at him through the smoke. Suddenly, a massive vortex of pure fire erupted from the side, incinerating the operative's weapon. The other tactical officers backed away, shielding their faces from the intense heat of the flames. A female variant with ice manipulation powers stood in front of him, freezing the floor to block the guard's advance. A male variant with wood manipulation powers used thick tree roots to lift the heavy concrete slab off Gio's body. He remembers the intense, desperate faces of his fellow class of mutants who risked everything to escape that hellhole together. The ice variant screamed at him to get up and run, pointing toward the bright light of the surface exit. Gio reached out, grabbing her hand as they ran toward the light, desperately trying to survive. Though they managed to break through the final security gates, the chaos of the chase split them up. Gio survived, but he has no idea what happened to the others who helped him escape. He lies on the sofa, realizing that somewhere out there, his fellow variants might still be trapped and suffering in other labs. His expression hardens, his fingers clenching into a tight fist as his resolve solidifies. He swears to himself that he will never allow his small piece of peace to be stolen from him again. Deep inside his chest, his mutated heart pulses with a dark, intense red light, the organic eye on the heart opening. Gio opens his eyes in the dark, his gaze filled with a chilling, absolute determination. He vows that no matter who tries to threaten his new life, he will make them pay a terrifying price. The next morning, the bright blue sky is suddenly split by a loud, desperate scream echoing through the neighborhood. A foot clad in a black and white sneaker hits the pavement, sprinting down the concrete steps of the apartment complex. Gio runs down the street, his face pale with panic as he screams out the puppy's name, Twig'em. Tears stream down his face as he realizes his tiny piece of happiness has already vanished, leaving him completely devastated. Haiji is tying her shoes by the front door, getting ready for another normal day of high school. She reminds Gio that her older sister will be back by this evening, so he needs to keep an eye on the apartment. Gio repeats the words like he is trying to translate a foreign language, still not used to the concept of a schedule. As she heads out, he watches her leave and quietly thinks to himself that school must be incredibly fun. But the quiet moment does not last, because Twig'em is currently scratch attacking the front door like his life depends on it. Haiji looks down at the tiny ball of fluff, wondering why he is suddenly throwing a tantrum. Gio kneels down, asking the puppy if he is bored, and if he wants to go outside for a bit. Haiji is running late, but asks Gio if he should maybe take the puppy for a quick walk around the block. She immediately hesitates, worried that the dangerous recovery agents might still be lurking in the area. Our guy just smiles and waves his hands, pointing out that in his fully healed human form, nobody is going to recognize him anyway. Haiji concedes the point, because he genuinely went from looking like a walking biology poster to a K-pop star. She tells him the dog leash is in the second drawer, and reveals the apartment door code is just 4 simple X's. And with that, she sprints out the door, leaving our heavily traumatized main character alone with a drawer. 10 minutes later, Gio is in the middle of a high-stakes wrestling match with a puppy that weighs less than a single shoe. He has somehow managed to wrap the strap around Twig'em's body in a way that violates several laws of physics. Twig'em is letting out a tiny, high-pitched scream, looking like a poorly packaged parcel. Gio freezes, his hands trembling as he looks at the tied-up puppy. The sight of the strap immediately triggers a dark flashback of his own body, tied to a metal chair with high-voltage wires. He covers his face in guilt, remembering that society doesn't like loose dogs, but his trauma is currently calling the shots. He quietly apologizes to the puppy, completely undoing the leash, because he cannot bear the thought of trapping him. The absolute second the strap is loose, Twig'em does what any self-respecting puppy does. He sprints out the door like a rocket. Our guy's soul instantly leaves his body as he charges down the apartment stairs, screaming for Twig'em. He is crying real tears, yelling into the empty street, wondering how his life went from fighting literal gods to losing a puppy in 5 seconds. Twig'em is currently living his absolute best life, flying through the neighborhood with zero thoughts behind those eyes, and thus begins the official mission to find the lost puppy. Gio is sprinting through the streets, his speed making the local pedestrians think they are witnessing a track meet. He rips open a public trash bin, screaming inside to check if the puppy is looking for a snack. He crawls completely under a parked car, surprising 2 local mice who were just trying to enjoy their cheese in peace. He collapses against a blue recycling bin, his face buried in his hands as the panic completely takes over. He is scratching his head in absolute despair, wondering what will happen if his only family gets hurt. He starts imagining the worst-case scenarios, like Twig'em getting run over by a truck or captured by bad guys. He cries, realizing he promised to protect this little guy just last night, and he did not even last a full day. As he sits on the pavement crying, he hears a distant sound of shouting and laughter coming from across the street. He looks up and spots a massive school fence, with high school kids playing soccer on a bright green field. And right there in the bushes bordering the field is Twig'em, happily scratching his ear. Gio's eyes light up as he realizes the puppy must have literally tracked Haiji's scent all the way to her school. A school security guard holding a wooden rake spots a random teenager trespassing on the property. Before the guard can even open his mouth, Gio moves past him like a literal gust of wind. The guard is left staring at the empty air, wondering if he just witnessed a glitch in the Matrix, because no human should move that fast. Gio is already halfway across the courtyard, his focus entirely locked onto the bush. On the main field, the high school boys are running around, completely invested in their lunch break soccer match. Other students are walking along the tracks, laughing and gossiping about their classes. Gio peers out from behind a concrete wall, watching a group of boys sitting on the steps playing mobile games. He grips the brick wall, a look of quiet longing on his face, as he realizes how incredibly normal and peaceful this place is. But his attention is suddenly caught by the dialogue of the boys sitting nearby. One of the students is talking about how the rumored heart mutants actually originated from illegal research facilities. The other boy pulls up a video on his phone, showing a dark, industrial lab, and mentions the government is offering a 1 billion won reward for reporting unregistered mutants. They joke about how they would hit the jackpot if they caught one, completely unaware that a literal mutant is standing 3 feet behind them. Gio shrinks back behind the wall, realizing the outside world views people like him as literal lottery tickets. He decides he needs to grab Twigum and get out of this place before anyone starts asking questions. But Twigum has already moved on, currently wandering toward 3 high school girls who are in the middle of recording a TikTok dance. The girls finish their dance, crowded around a phone screen, hyping up their friend Minyoung for looking gorgeous. Minyoung flips her hair, giving a smug, confident smile as she enjoys the praise. Suddenly, Twigim waddles straight into the center of their circle, letting out a tiny squeak. Minyoung instantly drops her phone, scooping up the puppy and squeezing him, squealing about how cute he is. They immediately decide they need to take a selfie with the dog to post on their Instagram stories. Minyoung holds the phone up, but as the camera focuses, the dark, intense face of Geo suddenly appears right behind them, like a horror movie jump scare. The girls let out a synchronized scream, instantly backing away and accusing him of being a hidden camera perv. Geo panics, waving his hands frantically, apologetically explaining that he was just trying to retrieve his puppy. He has a literal leaf stuck in his hair from the bushes, looking incredibly flustered as he points at Twigum. The girls stop yelling, their eyes focusing on his face, and their anger instantly melts into pure admiration. They start whispering to each other, wondering if he is a handsome transfer student, because they have never seen a first year look this good. Minyoung recovers her composure, giving him a sweet smile, and asks if he wants to join their TikTok video. Geo politely declines, backing away as he explains that he really cannot be filmed or put on the internet. Minyoung doesn't take no for an answer. She pulls out her phone and slides her screen, asking for his Instagram ID instead. She holds the phone out with one hand while holding Twigum in the other, completely confident she is about to make a move. The other 2 girls whisper behind their hands, noting that Minyoung never asks boys for their social media first. They tell Geo he should hurry up, because Minyoung has over 100,000 followers, which is basically royalty to these kids. Minyoung smiles, thinking this shy tracksuit boy is going to be perfect arm candy for her next story. She assumes he is just playing hard to get and is about to fold. Our guy just scratches his neck, completely deadpan, and reveals he doesn't have anything like that. Minyoung's smile freezes, her hand trembling slightly as she tries to process the concept of a teenager without social media. Geo does a full, respectful 90-degree bow, thanking her for the offer, but firmly declining. The 2 friends behind her are clutching their faces in absolute disbelief, realizing the school's most popular girl just got rejected. A vein literally bulges on Minyoung's forehead as her sweet influencer persona cracks under the weight of pure embarrassment. Geo has no idea he just committed social suicide. He simply reaches out and takes Twigim back, thanking them for watching his dog. He cradles the puppy, whispering that he is so sorry and will never lose him again, completely ignoring the fuming girl in front of him. But across the yard, a massive, red-haired kid named Taegu is currently vibrating with pure, unadulterated rage. Taegu is staring at Geo's back, his face turning a deep shade of purple. His friends behind him fuel the fire, asking Taegu if that isn't his crush Minyoung getting hit on by some random kid. They mock Geo for using a cute puppy to get a girl's number, calling him an absolute scammer. Taegu's red hair is practically smoking as his jealousy reaches a boiling point. He snarls, clenching his teeth as he watches the tracksuit bastard act close with Minyoung. Without a word, Taegu reaches out, snatching the soccer ball from his friend's hands with a heavy slap. His friend yells at him to wait, reminding him that he literally broke someone's nose the last time he got angry with a ball. Taegu doesn't care. He winds up his leg, his soccer cleat digging into the turf. He launches a devastating, full-power kick, sending the ball flying across the courtyard like a literal cannonball. The ball streaks toward the back of Geo's head at a terrifying speed. But Geo's inhuman reaction time is already active. His pupils dilate as he registers the incoming threat. He realizes that if he dodges, the ball will hit Twigum, who is currently cradled in his arms. So instead of moving, our guy turns and takes the full, explosive impact of the ball directly to his own face. The ball bounces away, and Geo stands there with his back slightly bent as the girls scream in horror. A heavy stream of dark blood instantly drips from both of his nostrils, splattering onto the concrete floor. Taegu jogs over, putting on a fake, overly dramatic apology face, claiming the ball just slipped from his foot. He laughs it off as a total accident, looking smugly at Minyoung to show off how tough he is. Geo slowly raises his head, his eyes cold and dark under his messy bangs. He tells Taegu to watch his step because his puppy almost got hurt, and flatly demands an apology. Taegu points at him and lets out a booming laugh, mocking him for trying to act tough while sporting a massive double nosebleed. But as Geo continues to stare at him with dead, unblinking eyes, Taegu's laugh slowly dies in his throat. One of the other boys whispers to Taegu to calm down, warning him that Minyoung is watching, and he shouldn't take it too far. Geo simply wipes his nose, repeating that he is fine, but they need to be more careful around animals. Taegu rolls his eyes, muttering a sarcastic apology about how precious dogs are, clearly just trying to save face in front of the girls. Geo accepts the fake apology without a single complaint, turning around to take Twigim home. The moment Geo's back is turned, Taegu's friendly act vanishes, and he whispers to his lackey to find out which class this kid belongs to. As Geo walks down the quiet school pathway, he squeezes Twigum, incredibly relieved that the puppy didn't take any damage. He starts smiling, thinking that despite the soccer ball, he actually got to see a real high school and see kids his own age. He wonders to himself if he would have been able to make a lot of friends if his life hadn't been stolen by the lab. Suddenly, a loud, overly cheerful voice calls out from behind, "Hey friend!" Before Gio can even turn, Taegu slides up beside him, throwing a heavy arm around his shoulder with a snake-like grin. Taegu laughs, claiming that since they are in the same grade, they are basically best friends now. He says he feels terrible about the soccer ball incident and wants to make it up to him by buying him some bread. The absolute second Gio hears the word Brad. A mental image of sweet muffins and red bean buns flashes in his mind, and he literally starts drooling. Our guy's defensive instincts are completely neutralized by the promise of carbs, his eyes sparkling as he asks if he is serious. He eagerly asks if Taegu can buy something for Twigim to eat too, completely falling for the most obvious trap in high school history. Taegu grins, guiding him out of the school gates and toward a quiet, secluded alleyway behind the buildings. The moment they are out of sight of the public, Taegu's arm slips off Gio's shoulder. Without a single warning, Taegu unleashes a brutal, full-power kick straight into Gio's back. The impact sends Gio crashing to the concrete floor, though he instinctively rolls to shield Twigum from the fall. Gio looks up from the ground, his expression blank, as he stares at the group of boys surrounding him. Taegu's friends step out from the shadows, laughing hysterically at how easy it was to lure this kid out. Taegu looks down at him, his face twisted in a cruel, mocking smile. He tells Gio that since he is so hungry, they are going to feed him a massive knuckle sandwich. The alleyway is completely blocked off as Taegu's gang circles our protagonist, calling him a pathetic loser. Taegu grabs Gio by his tracksuit collar, lifting him slightly, demanding to know why he was trying to act big in front of Minjong. Gio just looks at him with those tired, heavy eyes, genuinely confused about what acting big even means in this context. Taegu winds up his fist, screaming that Gio is the type of weakling who would cry on the floor after a single punch. His friends laugh in the background, making jokes about how his thin legs look like they would snap from a simple low kick. Gio covers his face with one hand, letting out a heavy sigh as he realizes this wasn't a friendly bread invitation after all. He tells Taegu that if his presence is making them this uncomfortable, he will simply take his dog and leave. But the lackeys step in, blocking the alley exit, mocking him for trying to act casual to slip away. Gio's voice drops a few octaves as he tells them to move because the puppy is starting to get scared. One of the arrogant lackeys snarls, claiming that a stupid mutt shouldn't dare to bark at real people, and lunges forward to kick the dog. Our guy's facial expression goes completely vacant as his combat programming takes over. A loud impact echoes through the alley, and the lackey is suddenly flying backward, his face twisted in pure agony as blood sprays from his mouth. Taegu's eyes literally pop out of his head as he watches his friend slide across the pavement like a hockey puck. The other three gang members freeze, screaming in confusion, demanding to know what he just did. Gio is still standing in the exact same spot, holding Twigum protectively with one hand, his posture completely relaxed. Inside his chest, the heart of resurrection lets out a deep, heavy beat, channeling a surge of pure physical power. Before they can even register his movement, Gio blitzes forward, his fist connecting with the second lackey's face and launching him into the air. He does a quick pivot, dodging a swinging fist, and drives a devastating punch straight into the third thug's stomach. And then he turns his gaze to Taegu, his hand moving like a mechanical press as he grabs him by the hair. With a single, fluid motion, Gio slams Taegu's head directly into the solid brick wall behind him. Taegu's eyes go completely wide with terror as he feels the cold bricks against his skull, realizing he is completely outclassed. Gio stands over him, his fist still pressed against the wall, and quietly repeats that he told them to stop because the puppy was scared. The remaining gang members are trembling in the corner, staring at the wall in pure horror. They scream that he is a literal monster and sprint out of the alleyway, completely abandoning their leader. Taegu slowly looks up, and his jaw drops as he notices the brick wall is covered in a web of deep, spiderweb cracks. He realizes that if that fist had connected with his actual face instead of the bricks, his head would have been reduced to a puddle. A cold sweat covers his entire body, tears welling up in his eyes as he realizes he just picked a fight with a demon. Without a second thought, Taegu drops to his knees, performing a perfect 90-degree apologetic bow, begging for his life. In a desperate panic to find common ground, he pulls out his phone and shoves a photo of a small, fluffy white dog named Bobby in Gio's face. Gio tilts his head, his anger instantly vanishing as he looks at the photo, wondering if this kid might actually be a decent person because he owns a dog. The tense atmosphere is suddenly shattered by a loud, echoing rumble coming straight from Gio's stomach. Gio blushes, admitting that using his physical strength always makes him incredibly hungry, and he hasn't eaten all day. Taegu looks up from his bow, blinking in confusion at the sudden gear shift. He immediately assumes this is a highly calculated, high IQ threat from a boss-level mutant who is secretly demanding a food tribute. Meanwhile, we get a brief shot of Haiji sitting in her classroom, completely focused on her exams, unaware of the drama. We cut to the school store, where Gio is sitting in front of a literal mountain of hot dogs, chips, and banana milk. He is happily stuffing his face, feeding small pieces of sausage to Twigim, who is wagging his tail on the table. Taegu is standing in the corner, sweat dropping, as he watches this terrifying brick shatterer act like a complete dork over a hot dog. He tries to analyze the situation, remembering the sheer physical force of the punch that sent his friend flying into the sky. He realizes that even professional heavyweight boxers cannot shatter solid brick walls with their bare hands without breaking their fingers. As Gio is distracted by the milk, Taegu quietly pulls out his phone to make an urgent call. On the other end of the line is Na Youngchul, a massive 20-year-old gangster who is currently playing cards in a shady den. Taegu stutters into the phone, begging Youngchul to help him out because he is in deep trouble with a monster. Youngchul smokes a cigarette, mocking Taegu for being a halfwit who gets beat up and comes crying to his elders. Taegu begs, claiming this is his first and last request, and he just needs to save face this one time. Youngchul sighs, turning to his gang of club-wielding thugs who are currently training in the background. He laughs, wondering how tough a high school kid could possibly be, and says he'll swing by since he is bored anyway. Taegu lights up, thanking him profusely as he hangs up the phone. He glares at Gio from across the room, a malicious smirk returning to his face as he thinks the transfer student is finally cooked. But before he can even enjoy his evil plan, Gio walks over and holds out a warm piece of pastry, asking if he wants some. Taegu flinches, and Gio softly explains that he felt bad eating all this delicious food by himself, while Taegu just watched. Taegu waves his hands, nervously telling him to eat everything, including the extra drinks he bought. He watches Gio crouch down on the floor to feed Twigum, his mind completely unable to reconcile this gentle soul with the monster from earlier. Suddenly, Taegu notices Gio's hand as he feeds the puppy. He remembers that Gio's knuckles were clearly scraped and bleeding after hitting the brick wall. But now, there is not even a single mark on his skin, and his injuries have completely disappeared. Taegu remembers a viral video he saw about the legendary heart mutants, who possess supernatural abilities and hyper-regeneration. He suddenly blurts out the question, "Are you a heart mutant?" Gio instantly does a massive spit take, coughing frantically, loudly denying the accusation because he is terrified of being reported. But to Taegu, this panic is the ultimate confirmation. He realizes he is standing next to a literal 1 in a million mutant. He covers his mouth in pure terror, realizing that dealing with mutants is an entirely different level of danger. Back at the gambling den, Youngchul suddenly slams his fist on the table, scattering cards and poker chips everywhere. He screams into his phone, demanding to know if the kid Taegu mentioned is actually a certified heart mutant. Taegu whispers into his receiver, begging Youngchul to call off the hit because the mutant is too dangerous to fight. But Youngchul's face twists into a greedy grin. He tells Taegu that this is even better, ordering him to keep the mutant occupied until they arrive. Taegu hangs up, crouching in the corner of the store in pure despair as Gio wipes his mouth and announces he is ready to go home. Taegu panics, pointing out that there is still plenty of time left in their lunch break. Gio just smiles his pure, innocent smile, explaining that he needs to get Twigum back to the apartment safely. Taegu knows that if he lets the mutant leave, Youngchul will literally skin him alive for wasting his time. In a desperate bid to stall, Taegu lunges forward, suggesting they skip the rest of their classes and go hang out. We cut to a flashing neon sign reading Gameland, and Gio's jaw drops as he enters a massive, noisy arcade. His cheeks flush pink as he looks at the flashing lights, admitting he had no idea places like this even existed in the world. He wanders between the game cabinets like a child in a toy store, completely mesmerized by the sounds. He stops in front of a claw machine, pressing his face against the glass as he spots a purple cat plushie. He excitedly points out that it looks exactly like the cartoon keychain Haiji has on her backpack. Taegu slips a coin into the slot, telling the clueless dork to give it a try himself. Gio frantically wiggles the joystick, screaming in pure excitement as the metal claw begins to descend over the pile. With a loud clunk, the claw successfully grabs the purple cat, dropping it straight into the prize chute. Gio hugs the giant plushie to his chest, his face beaming with a level of pure joy that Taegu has never seen on a teenager. Taegu smirks, thinking that stalling this kid is going to be the easiest job of his life since he is so easily entertained. He points toward a row of flashing neon booths, asking if he has ever been to a coin karaoke room. They sit inside the tiny booth, and Taegu hands him the remote, telling him to pick any song he wants to sing. Gio scratches his head, embarrassedly admitting that he doesn't actually know any modern songs. He hesitates, but finally starts singing a very old, simple children's nursery rhyme about eating cotton candy with his mom. He sings with absolute sincerity, his voice echoing in the small booth, as Taegu stares at him in absolute disbelief. Gio stops, looking worried as he asks if he wasn't supposed to sing a childish song like this. He quietly explains that before he was taken away at age 7, this was the only song his mother ever had the chance to teach him. Taegu's eyes widen as he absorbs the heavy words, realizing what not living a normal life actually meant for this kid. He looks at Gio, gently petting the puppy in the dim neon light, his heart twisting with a sudden wave of heavy emotion. A single, dramatic tear slips down Taegu's cheek as he realizes this terrifying mutant is just a lonely kid who missed his mom. His protective instincts suddenly flare up. He slams a 10,001 bill onto the machine, declaring they are going to live an extraordinary life today. They sprint to the taiko drum machines, beating the drums like absolute maniacs as they scream together. They play fighting games, Taigu yelling at him for cheating, when Gio uses his mutant reaction time to spam the same high kick. They jump onto the Dance Dance Revolution pads, Gio slipping and falling flat on his back as the arrows move too fast. Taigu laughs hysterically, pointing out that for a superpowered mutant, his rhythm is absolutely hopeless. They finally stumble out of the arcade, Taigu leaning against the wall, completely exhausted from the physical exertion. Gio hands him a cold bottle of water, smiling as he declares that this was the most fun day of his entire life. But the happy moment is instantly ruined as a heavy vibration buzzes from Taigu's pocket. Taigu pulls out his phone, still smiling from the arcade, wondering who could possibly be calling him at this hour. The absolute second he answers, Youngchul's booming voice screams through the speaker, calling him a piece of trash. Taigu's face instantly drains of all color as he remembers the terrifying gangster he called earlier to beat up his new best friend. He looks down at the photo strip they just printed, showing the two of them making cute peace signs and posing with Twiggy. He stares at the photo of them making a heart shape over their heads, realizing he is the biggest idiot on the planet. He looks over at Gio, who is currently crouching on the pavement, gently letting Twiggy stretch his legs. 10 minutes later, Taigu stands alone in a dark, trash-filled alleyway behind the school, surrounded by Youngchul's gang. Taigu performs a deep, trembling bow, lying through his teeth, as he claims the kid wasn't actually a mutant after all. Youngchul steps forward, his massive frame towering over him, asking if Taigu is seriously trying to play games with his crew. Taigu grits his teeth, keeping his head down, thinking about how Gio has suffered since he was 7 years old. He remembers Gio singing that children's song, realizing that the tiny puppy is the only family the kid has left in this world. He covers his eyes, thinking to himself that the mutant's life is just too damn sad to be ruined by gangsters. He remembers his own old dog Bobby, realizing how devastated he would be if anyone tried to separate them. He remembers how he wanted to kill his own friends when they tried to mess with his dog, fully understanding Gio's protective rage. He resolves that even if he gets beaten to a pulp, he cannot let these gangsters find the pure-hearted kid. But before he can even finish his thought, Youngchul's massive fist connects with Taigu's jaw with a sickening crunch. The impact launches Taigu to the dirty asphalt, his body trembling as blood spills from his nose. Youngchul reaches down, violently grabbing Taigu by his red hair, lifting his face up. His eyes are dark and cold as he stares at the bleeding teenager, growling a single, terrifying question: where is the mutant? So we pick up right where we left off, with Na Youngchul showing us why he is the local heavyweight champion of being an absolute scumbag. He has got our guy Taigu by the hair, looking like he is about to reconstruct his face, demanding to know where the mutant is. Meanwhile, we get a quick flashback to the arcade, showing Taigu cheering Gio on, a stark contrast to the absolute nightmare Taigu is currently in. Youngchul's masked goons stand around with pipes and baseball bats, looking like they are waiting for their turn to collect some lunch money. Youngchul squats down, keeping a tight grip on Taigu's hair, asking him if he thinks this entire squad gathered here just to play a game of tag. Taigu is in full survival mode, begging and crying, trying to claim that he was with Gio all day and didn't feel anything weird from him. He even makes up a story about how they played Dance Dance Revolution at the arcade, and Gio got so out of breath, he practically collapsed. He calls Gio a totally pathetic nerd, apologizing to Youngchul for making him come all this way for a regular high school kid. Youngchul just scratches his head, letting out a loud sigh, pretending to buy the story for a brief second. He drops his hand, throwing his arm around Taigu's shoulder like a friendly older brother, asking if Taigu is upset because he hit him. But then the friendly act evaporates as he lights his cigarette, whispering that Taigu's face is basically a billboard when he is trying to lie. He asks him, very slowly, what the real reason is behind his sudden change of heart. He warns Taigu that mutants are not human and are incredibly dangerous to have roaming around the neighborhood. Then he starts laughing, asking Taigu if he was actually worried about the safety of a bunch of grown gangsters. Taigu keeps his head down, the fear completely paralyzing him as he stares at the pavement. Youngchul holds up his massive hand, flashing 5 fingers, and declares a price of 500. He explains that he is going to turn the mutant over to a specialized broker, and Taigu will get a sweet 500,000 won cut of the payout. Taigu's eyes widen in absolute horror as the realization hits him like a freight train. This isn't a high school rivalry anymore. This is literal human trafficking, the exact kind of dark underworld business he only saw on news reports. He starts trembling, realizing the cool older brothers he used to look up to are actually human trafficking monsters. He desperately tries to plead one last time, but Youngchul has officially run out of patience. Youngchul launches a brutal high kick, hitting Taigu square in the chest and sending him crashing into the trash bins behind him. Taigu curls up on the dirty pavement, clutching his ribs as his lungs desperately struggle for oxygen. Youngchul steps over him, his foot grinding into Taigu's shoulder as he tells him he is seriously getting on his nerves. He turns to his masked lackeys, ordering them to beat the kid until he finally decides to tell the truth. The gang immediately swarms him, kicking and stomping on Taigu as he curls into a defensive ball, crying out in pain. Each strike lands with a heavy thud, the physical pain finally clearing Taegu's mind of his childish delusions about gangsters. His mind flashes back to middle school, where he was the one getting bullied and beaten up in dark alleys just like this. He remembers screaming for them to stop, his face covered in dirt and tears, while his classmates just laughed. And then he remembers the day Youngchul and his crew showed up, chasing the bullies away and acting like his personal saviors. The bullies ran away screaming, and back then, Taegu thought he had finally found some real badass friends. Youngchul patted his head, telling him that since they trained at the same gym, they were brothers now. He told him that brothers from their gym shouldn't walk around getting beat up by weaklings. We return to the present, where those same brothers are currently using Taegu's body as a literal doormat. Taegu realizes how incredibly stupid he was for trying to act like them just to feel cool and powerful. He lies in a pool of his own blood, thinking that he is no different from these disgusting thugs, because he tried to sell out a kid who treated him like a friend. Youngchul squats down beside his bruised body, mockingly praising his loyalty, calling it totally badass. But then, he grins, telling him that if he tries to sell a mutant on his own, a broker will only give him a couple $100,000. He leans in, whispering that when your life is on the line, loyalty doesn't mean a single thing in the real world. He reaches back, snapping his fingers, ordering his men to bring out the heavy iron chains. He wraps the thick, cold chain around his fist, telling Taegu that making real money is the only way to live a truly cool life. He smiles his disgusting, greedy smile, inviting Taegu to live a big, rich life together with him. Taegu slowly looks up, blood dripping from his mouth, and spits out a weak, raspy sentence. He tells Youngchul that right now, he looks incredibly, unbelievably uncool. The entire alley goes dead silent, Taegu instantly regretting his big main character speech as he realizes what is about to happen. Youngchul's face goes completely dark, a vein pulsing on his forehead, as he calls Taegu a little piece of garbage. Taegu frantically covers his head, screaming that he misspoke, his survival instinct instantly overriding his bravery. Youngchul raises his chain-wrapped fist, launching it downward like a hydraulic hammer to finish the kid off, but the punch never lands. A pale, slender hand reaches out from the side, instantly clamping onto Youngchul's wrist like a steel vise. The impact splits the air, and Youngchul's eyes go wide as he realizes his arm is completely locked in place. Standing there with Twigum tucked under his arm is Kim Geo, his expression completely blank as he stops the gangster's full power strike. Geo inspects the chain, noting that it is about as thick as a pinky finger with rough, welded edges. He crouches down next to the bruised Taegu, casually mentioning that he came to find him because his lunch break was taking too long. Taegu is coughing up blood, frantically screaming at Geo to run because these guys are real, dangerous criminals. He confesses, crying, that he was the one who called them to rough Geo up because he was jealous and angry. He admits he even told them Geo was a mutant, his voice filled with pure guilt as he asks why Geo is even standing here. Taegu squeezes his eyes shut, apologizing for being a disgusting traitor, expecting Geo to abandon him. But Geo just looks at him, his voice soft, as he asks why Taegu is letting them hit him with chains, if he was the one who called them. Youngchul stares down at the kid, his face contorting in rage, as he realizes this is the unregistered jackpot he was looking for. Before anyone can move, a masked thug lunges from behind, slamming a heavy wooden bat directly over Geo's head. The wooden bat shatters on impact, but Geo's face doesn't even move an inch, his eyes narrowing. The thugs immediately swarm him, bats raining down on his back in a continuous, brutal barrage, while Twigim barks frantically from the side. One of the thugs stands over his bent body, laughing maniacally, mocking him for walking right into their trap. But on the pavement, Geo's fingers slide through the fresh puddles of Taegu's blood. The crimson fluid instantly defies gravity, flowing upward into his palm as his heart of resurrection flares to life. The thug's eyes go wide under his mask as he notices the blood literally flying off the floor. Before he can even scream, Geo's fist launches upward, a devastating uppercut shattering the thug's jaw and launching him into the sky. Geo spins on his heel, dodging a swinging pipe, and delivers a brutal roundhouse kick that sends another goon crashing into the stairs. The body lands with a heavy thud, completely motionless, as the rest of the gang backs away in absolute terror. Geo stands up, his tracksuit covered in dirt and blood, looking like a literal boss monster in a low-level dungeon. He taking a slow, heavy step forward, his shadow completely stretching over the remaining gangsters. Youngchul's face goes red with rage, screaming at his men to stop standing around and kill the brat. 5 thugs charge at once, swinging their bats and pipes from all directions to pin him down. But Geo moves like a glitching video game character, his body becoming a blur as he strikes all of them simultaneously. A heavy kick sends one thug flying through the air, crashing into the brick walls of the alley. Another goon is slammed headfirst into his partner's face, the impact creating a sickening crunch of breaking noses. Geo does a rapid slide, his elbow connecting with a thug's temple, knocking him out before he can even hit the floor. He launches another gang member into the trash bins, the entire alleyway turning into a graveyard of broken gangsters in less than 10 seconds. Geo stops, his eyes focusing on Youngchul, who is currently trembling in the center of the alley. One brave masked goon tries to sneak up from the side, swinging a heavy pipe with all his strength. The pipe connects with a loud thud, blood splattering from the side of Geo's neck. But Geo doesn't even blink. He immediately counters with a back fist so fast it creates a literal shockwave, launching the thug through a metal door. Youngchul's jaw drops to the floor as he watches his elite enforcers get dismantled like cardboard cutouts. Gio calmly reaches out, grabbing a thug's arm and snapping it like a twig, his face completely devoid of any emotion. Youngchul panics, drawing a massive tactical hunting knife from his pocket, screaming at his men to just stab the monster. He lunges forward, driving the blade deep into Gio's side with a sickening squelch. He grins like a madman, twisting the knife, claiming that mutants are still human and will bleed out all the same. Gio lets out a soft cough, a thin line of blood trickling from his lips as his head drops. Youngchul screams in triumph, stabbing him repeatedly, but suddenly, his arm stops, a pale hand clamping tightly onto the blade of his knife. Gio slowly raises his head, his crimson eyes locking onto Youngchul, and calmly tells him to stop stabbing him. With an effortless flex of his fingers, Gio shatters the steel blade of the tactical knife into tiny, metallic shards. Youngchul backs away, his legs shaking violently, screaming in pure terror, asking what kind of monster can take multiple knife wounds and stay fine. Gio looks down at the broken hilt of the knife in his hand, his expression completely blank. He steps forward, driving his fist straight into Youngchul's chest, the impact breaking several ribs and sending him crashing to the floor. The remaining two conscious thugs scream in absolute panic, turning around to sprint out of the alleyway. But Gio moves past them like a flash of lightning, instantly blocking their only escape route. He grabs one by the collar, slamming him into the concrete, his red eyes glowing in the shadow of the alley. The last thug drops his weapon, his face turning pale under his mask as he looks at the immortal monster standing in front of him. Gio leans in close, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, telling them that now that they know what he is, none of them are going to be allowed to run away from this alley alive. From the side, Twigum lets out a proud, happy bark, cheering on his invincible mother protector. A few minutes later, the alley is dead silent. Youngchul and his men piled on top of each other, completely bruised and unconscious. Gio stands over the pile like a victorious king, the bloodstain on his tracksuit already drying as his wounds seal up. Taegu stares at him from the ground, his eyes wide with a mixture of absolute awe and terror. He frantically tries to crawl over, sobbing as he yells that Gio got stabbed and needs to hold on while he calls an ambulance. Gio just pats his chest, calmly telling him that he is completely fine and there is no need to panic. Taegu blinks, pointing at Gio's stomach, his jaw dropping as he notices the knife wound is already completely gone. He looks at Gio's smooth, unblemished skin, realizing the sheer, terrifying scale of a heart mutant's hyper-recovery. He drops his head back to the pavement, weeping as he apologizes again for trying to sell him out to these monsters. He starts hitting his own head against the floor, calling himself a complete idiot who doesn't deserve to live. Gio looks at him, slightly surprised, asking if he was genuinely trying to sell his friend to traffickers. Taegu nods through his tears, admitting that he used to hang out with these gangsters all the time because he wanted to look cool. He cries, realizing he was just a disgusting thug who was no different from the scumbags who bullied him in middle school. Suddenly, a shadow falls over his face, and Taegu looks up to see Gio holding out a small, white quilted pad. Gio tells him he has a massive nosebleed and should probably wipe his face before it stains his clothes. Taegu stares at the pad, asking if he is genuinely giving him something to wipe the blood with after what he did. Gio nods, but as Taegu takes the pad, he notices the texture is slightly weird and highly absorbent. He realizes with a sweat drop that Gio just handed him a literal puppy pee pad to wipe his nose. But Gio just smiles his pure, genuine smile, noting that Taegu referred to him as a friend just now. He says that knowing Taegu actually considered him a friend is more than enough to forgive everything. Taegu stares at him, his face turning bright red as his heart completely melts under the weight of Gio's pure kindness. He launches himself forward, throwing his arms around Gio's neck, crying like a toddler who just got his favorite toy back. He screams through his tears, declaring that Gio is the most badass, coolest guy he has ever met in his entire life. We open with Youngchul kneeling on the pavement, his face covered in bruises as he begs Gio to let him go. He promises, with a trembling voice, that he won't tell a single soul that Gio is a heart mutant if they let him walk. Taegu's face instantly contorts in rage as he hears the gangster trying to play the victim card. He launches a brutal kick straight into Youngchul's face, screaming at him to shut his mouth and apologize properly first. He calls him a bloated fat pig, kicking him repeatedly, completely venting all the anger from his betrayal. Gio watches from the side, holding Twigum, deadpan asking Taegu if he didn't claim they were close brothers earlier. Taegu waves his fist, claiming this scumbag needs a proper beatdown, so he keeps his mouth shut about Gio's identity. But before he can launch another kick, a loud, echoing police siren cuts through the alleyway. Youngchul's face lights up as he drops to his knees, begging the approaching officers to save him from these crazy kids. Taegu and Gio turn toward the alley entrance as the flashing red and blue lights illuminate the walls. Two uniformed police officers walk down the steps, announcing they are from the Seodam police substation after receiving a report. Youngchul's masked goons freeze, their eyes widening under their hoods as they realize they are trapped in a dead end. Taegu immediately runs over, pointing at the gang, telling the officers they arrived just in time to arrest some real criminals. He screams that these bastards are professional human traffickers who are actively trying to kidnap high schoolers. He urges the cops to raid their hideout, promising they will find plenty of illegal evidence of mutant trading. Youngchul lies on the floor, holding his swollen cheek, looking like a pathetic, beaten dog. But suddenly, Youngchul lets out a loud, dramatic scream of agony, rolling on the pavement. He cries out for help, clutching his shoulder, pretending to be in extreme physical pain. Gio and Taegu stare at him in absolute disbelief, their jaws dropping at the gangster's sudden acting performance. Youngchul screams to the officers that this tracksuit kid is a monster who beat his entire crew half to death for no reason. Taegu goes ballistic, screaming that he is lying through his teeth, and they were the ones who initiated the fight. Our guy Gio just stands there with his innocent puppy, looking like a pure, harmless high school kid who wouldn't hurt a fly. Youngchul points a trembling finger at him, yelling that the kid doesn't have a single scratch on his body while his men are broken. His goons join in on the performance, groaning and clutching their stomachs, pretending they can't even breathe. The main officer sighs, rubbing his temple, telling everyone to calm down so they can sort out the details at the station. But Youngchul plays his final card, pointing aggressively at Gio, screaming that the kid is an unregistered heart mutant. The officer's expression instantly hardens, his eyes narrowing as he repeats the word mutant with a serious tone. He steps up to Gio, demanding to see his official state registration card or his mutant identification number. Gio scratches his neck, his voice trembling slightly as he admits he doesn't have anything like that. The cop's eyes flare with suspicion, warning him that operating as a mutant without state registration is a severe federal violation. He pulls out his notepad, ordering Gio to state his legal identity and the exact nature of his cardiac mutation. Gio stands frozen, a cold sweat dripping down his neck as the panic begins to set in. He knows that if his biological data is entered into the state database, the scientists at Hermes' lab will track him down instantly. He watches the officer's hand drift toward his holster, realizing his newly found peaceful life is about to end before it even started. Suddenly, a loud voice screams, "Wait!" from the top of the stairs, and a girl in a school uniform comes sprinting down. Haiji skids to a halt, completely out of breath, sweat dripping from her face as she waves her hand. The officers blink in confusion, asking who she is and why she is interrupting a police investigation. Haiji ignores them, thrusting her smartphone directly into the lead officer's face, demanding he take the call immediately. The officer frowns, taking the phone with an annoyed expression, asking who is on the other end of the line. A cold, commanding female voice speaks through the speaker, identifying herself as Superintendent Song Hye-in, leader of the mutant special team. The officer's eyes literally pop out of his head, his spine snapping into a perfect, terrified military salute as he screams his name and rank. Hye-in orders him to process the gangsters for attempted kidnapping of a mutant under standard emergency procedure. She commands them to release the tracksuit kid immediately without any further questioning, promising to take full responsibility. The officer yells, "Yes, ma'am," and immediately turns to his partner, ordering him to arrest Youngchul's crew and let the kids go. Youngchul screams in pure confusion as the handcuffs are slapped onto his wrists, demanding to know why they are only arresting his crew. He yells into the empty air, asking who on earth was on that phone to make the police flip their decisions so fast. Haiji stands in the background, giving a sweet, victorious smile as she waves her phone at the dragged away gangsters. Gio walks over, holding Twigim, asking her how on earth she knew to come to this specific alleyway. Haiji explains that she saw him walking toward the school from her classroom window and noticed some creeps surrounding him. Gio points at Taegu, who is currently squatting on the pavement in a very awkward defensive pose. Haiji looks at Taegu's comically swollen, bruised face, holding back a laugh as she asks what happened to his face. Taegu stares at her in absolute awe, his inner dialogue screaming that this is Song Hye-ji, the legendary school goddess. He starts crying in jealousy, realizing Gio lied about having no friends while secretly being close with the most popular girl in school. Meanwhile, Gio ignores the drama, walking up to the open door of the police cruiser where Youngchul is sitting in cuffs. His face goes completely dark, his voice chillingly cold, as he asks who Youngchul was planning to hand him over to. Youngchul stutters, claiming he has never heard of Hermes' lab and was just going to sell him to a local broker. He explains that there are underground brokers in every city who specialize in buying and selling unregistered mutants for cash. Gio's eyes narrow, a dangerous look returning to his face as he murmurs that he wants to meet these brokers. We get a quick shot of Youngchul sitting in the police station, surrounded by screaming detectives, his gangster career officially over. Later that evening, Hiji slams her milk carton on a convenience store table, screaming "No way" at Gio. She tells him that searching for illegal mutant brokers is absolute suicide, pointing out how dangerous these criminals are. She explains that her sister warned her that underground brokers are often highly powerful, mutant outlaws themselves. But Gio just eats his bread, calmly stating that if they are mutants, he wants to meet them even more now. Haiji sighs, looking at him across the table, asking why he is so obsessed with tracking down these brokers. Gio looks down, touching his cheek where a few crumbs are stuck, his eyes filled with a deep, quiet sadness. He confesses that he was thinking he might be able to find his lost friends through those brokers. Taegu flinches, pointing out that Gio literally claimed he had 0 friends before they met today. Gio smiles sadly, clarifying that he didn't have friends in the outside world, but he had them back in the laboratory. We flash back to his childhood inside Hermes' lab, showing a tiny, skeletal Gio standing between 2 massive, armed guards. He remembers being dragged through the dark, cold corridors, his heart pounding in absolute terror. He was thrown into a massive experimental chamber with shattered glass windows, expecting another round of painful torture. But as he looked up, his eyes widened as he spotted dozens of sharp steel swords floating in the air. The tiny skeleton curled up on the floor, crying in pure fear, thinking the guards were going to use the swords to stab him. The guards shoved him from behind, ordering him to get inside the room immediately. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind him with a loud clank, locking him in the experimental room. But as Gio looked around, he realized the swords weren't controlled by the guards. They were being manipulated by other kids in lab coats. The tiny skeleton stood frozen, his organic eye wide with shock as he looked at the children. A boy with lavender hair was holding a sharp blade, effortlessly guiding the floating swords with his fingers. A girl with long black hair stood nearby, her hands glowing with a bright blue ice energy. The flying swords sliced through the test dummies in the room, showing an incredible level of combat potential. Suddenly, a wave of solid ice shot across the room, completely freezing the floor around Gio's feet. The kids stopped their training, turning to look at the new skeleton kid, who had just entered their room. The ice variant girl yelled at the sword boy, calling him a psycho for almost hitting the new kid with his flying blades. The sword boy pointed at Gio's uniform, noting that he was wearing a test subject coat just like the rest of them. Gio stood trembling, his jaw shaking in fear, completely unable to understand what was happening. Dozens of children in identical lab coats walked over, whispering in curiosity about his unique skeletal body. Gio covered his skull face with his hands, crying, begging them not to look at his hideous, fleshless appearance. But a girl stepped up, gently pulling his hand away, smiling as she told him he looked completely fine. She explained that he only looked like a skeleton because of his heart mutation, asking him if it was his first time in the learning class. They all smiled warmly, introducing themselves as Lee Jun, Lee Chae-won, Yu Ha-na, and Shin Ha-yoon, welcoming him to their group. Gio smiled back through his tears, realizing for the first time in his life that he wasn't a lonely monster. We returned to the convenience store, Gio explaining that the lab gathered mutant kids from various branches to give them basic education. He says that because they all shared the same painful existence, they bonded almost instantly, despite only meeting a few times a year. He looks at the bread in his hand, his eyes distant, as he remembers the only family he ever had. Taegu is currently sobbing hysterically, wiping his tears with his sleeve, deeply touched by Gio's tragic backstory. Haiji looks at him with soft eyes, gently asking where those childhood friends are now. Gio explains that on the day of their escape, they all ran through the dark tunnels together to break out. But because the recovery squads were chasing them with heavy explosives, they had to scatter in different directions to survive. Haiji places her hand on the table, declaring with absolute determination that they are going to help him find his lost friends. Taegu snaps out of his crying fit, pulling out a smartphone, revealing he secretly swiped Youngchul's phone during the alley fight. He slides the screen, showing a chat log with the mutant broker, setting up a meeting to sell Gio for a massive payout. Taegu reads the final message, pointing out that the broker scheduled the meeting for exactly 7 o'clock tonight. Gio looks up at the sky, realizing the sun is already setting, and it is exactly 7 o'clock right now. We cut to a massive, dark industrial warehouse, where dozens of gangsters are currently screaming in pure terror. A hooded figure stands in the center of the room, moving like a ghost as he dodges their attacks. A gangster lunges with a knife, but the hooded kid catches the steel blade with his bare palm, shattering it into pieces. He whispers that if they swing their weapons with that little force, they won't be able to cut a single thing. Suddenly, a storm of sharp, silver steel blades erupts from his hand, slicing through the gangsters' weapons and sending them flying. The goons crash into the metal walls, blood splattering across the concrete as they collapse. The gang leader panics, pulling out a heavy automatic pistol, screaming at his remaining men that knives won't work. But before he can even pull the trigger, a silver streak of light cuts clean through his gun, splitting the barrel in half. The leader drops the broken weapon, staring at his hands in absolute horror as the hooded kid stands calmly in front of him. The kid slowly pulls back his hood, revealing short, lavender gray hair and a sharp X-shaped scar over his right eye. It is Lee Chae-won, his violet eyes glowing as his heart of the sword pulses with a dangerous, metallic light. A terrified gangster tries to sprint toward the warehouse exit, desperately trying to escape the slaughter. Chae-won doesn't even turn around. He simply flicks his finger, a flying steel blade tracking the runner and slamming him into the floor. The gangster collapses with a heavy thud, the warehouse finally going completely silent as the dust settles. Chae-won stands over the piles of bleeding gangsters, pointing his glowing steel blade at the camera, looking like an absolute menace. He pulls out a vibrating smartphone, a notification flashing on the screen from a contact named Pig. He narrows his sharp violet eyes, a dangerous smirk forming on his face as he looks at the coordinates. He reads the incoming message about a captured mutant, quietly whispering to himself that it looks like he just found a brand new customer to hunt. So, Chae-won is handled. Or rather, he's currently crouching in a dark, empty construction yard, looking like a low-budget Batman, waiting for a crime to happen. Gio is peeking around a shipping container, doing some high-level tactical scouting of the area. It is dead silent, and the entire site looks like a map straight out of a tactical shooter. He pulls out Na Youngchul's stolen phone to check the time. Still 30 minutes left. He stares at the chat log with the broker, his face going completely cold as he prepares himself. Haiji is grabbing his sleeve, her voice trembling as she asks if he is seriously going through with this crazy meeting. She reminds him that these brokers are actual criminals who specialize in hunting down variants for research money. But Gio just grabs her hands, his eyes sparkling, as he explains that this broker is his first real lead to finding his lost classmates. He tells her not to worry, promising he will just watch from a distance and scream for help if things go south. Our guy was lying, of course, because he is currently crouching in the dirt by himself. He grins, thinking that if the broker shows up, he is just going to bypass the talking and beat the locations out of him. He reaches down, grabbing a massive rusted iron wrench to use as a makeshift weapon. He grips the cold metal, telling himself that when you fight a mutant, the most important thing is to let them show their ability first. Suddenly, a sharp metallic whistle splits the quiet air. 3 steel knives shoot out of the shadows, slamming directly into the metal support pillar right next to his nose. Geo falls backward, his eyes wide as he looks at the vibrating metal blades. A cold, mocking voice calls out from the dark, calling him a pathetic rat who stands out like a neon sign. The hooded figure of Lee Chae-won steps forward, dragging a heavy blade across the gravel. Geo stares at the sword, his mind racing as he tries to identify the mysterious broker. He sees the physical weapon, mistakenly assuming his opponent is just a regular human using a normal sword. He slips his hand onto the concrete block, thinking a regular human is going to be incredibly easy to disarm. Geo charges forward, his sneakers kicking up a cloud of gray dust as he goes for a surprise punch. He closes the gap in a fraction of a second, aiming directly for the kid's face to end the fight instantly. But Chae-won doesn't even flinch. His violet eyes flash under his hood as he predicts the trajectory. He easily tilts his head to the side, his reaction speed completely matching Geo's supernatural momentum. He says his name, and a memory of a lavender-haired kid in a lab coat flashes in Geo's mind. Geo freezes in shock, his brain trying to connect the dots of how this broker knows his friend's name. But Chae-won is already spinning, his blade slicing through the air with a clean whoosh. The slash connects, and Geo is launched to the dirt floor, a heavy spray of blood painting the gravel. Geo groans, trying to push himself up, but his limbs are completely unresponsive. He looks down at his bleeding wrists and ankles, realizing Chae-won precisely sliced his tendons in a single pass. The cuts are deep and bleeding heavily, completely disabling his motor functions despite his muscular body. Geo grinds his teeth, realizing this kid's swordsmanship is way beyond normal human limits. As he lies there, his mind flashes back to the chaotic day of their escape from Hermes' lab. A group of children was sprinting through the dark tunnels as the security alarms screamed in the background. A massive concrete ceiling slab collapsed right in front of them, completely sealing their only exit. The kids cried in terror, but a young Chae-won stepped forward, his hands glowing with a metallic hum. He summoned dozens of steel rods to lift the heavy concrete, yelling at Geo to help guide the younger kids through. But the tiny skeleton Geo stood frozen in panic, his jaw trembling as he looked at the ticking explosives nearby. Chae-won screamed that he would hold the ceiling, ordering Geo to get the others out first. We cut back to the present, where Chae-won is standing over the fallen Geo, his blade dripping with blood. Geo slowly forces his body off the ground, his eyes wide as he recognizes the scar on Chae-won's face. Chae-won narrows his eyes in genuine surprise, wondering how this tracksuit kid is standing up with sliced tendons. Geo ignores the pain, screaming in excitement, calling out Chae-won's name, identifying himself as the skeleton. Chae-won blinks, his stoic assassin face completely cracking as he whispers, "Skeleton?" He points his finger at Geo, asking if he is seriously the same bone-faced kid from their old cell. Geo smiles brightly, tears welling in his eyes as he explains he has finally managed to completely regenerate. Chae-won stares at him for a long, quiet second, his expression unreadable under the shadow of his hood. Geo takes a step forward, laughing as he assumes his old classmate is just as happy to see him. But Chae-won's face turns incredibly dark, and he slides his hand down, summoning 5 sharp claws. Before Geo can even react, Chae-won lunges, a barrage of steel slashes tearing clean through his chest. Geo is thrown back, coughing up a mouthful of blood as his tracking suit is shredded into rags. He stumbles back, clutching his chest, screaming in confusion, asking why his childhood friend is trying to kill him. Chae-won watches his wounds close up, calmly noting that the hyper-regeneration proves he is indeed Kim Geo. Geo points at his closing chest, demanding to know why he is attacking him if he knows exactly who he is. Chae-won doesn't answer, he just does a low sweep, his blade slicing toward Geo's legs with lethal speed. Geo barely dodges, jumping backward as the blade cuts a deep groove into the concrete floor. He rolls across the dirt, his heart pounding as he realizes Chae-won is genuinely trying to end his life. He pushes himself up, screaming into the empty sky, asking what he did to deserve this hatred from his brother. Chae-won raises his sword, his eyes cold, as he tells Geo that he should know the answer to that better than anyone. He launches another vertical slash, the pressure of the wind splitting the dirt path between them. Geo blocks with his forearms, but the steel slices clean through his sleeves, drawing fresh lines of crimson. A heavy pool of blood splatters onto the gravel, fueling Geo's heart as he realizes he has no choice but to fight back. Geo clenches his fist, his red eyes flaring as he charges forward to disarm his old classmate. He drives a massive punch straight at Chae-won's face, but Chae-won blocks the strike with the flat of his blade. Chae-won smirks, mockingly asking if he genuinely thought a regular punch would work against a master of the sword. But Geo's hand suddenly opens, his fingers clamping onto the sharp blade with a bloody, iron grip. Chae-won's eyes widen in shock as Geo uses his physical weight to drag him forward, completely neutralizing his weapon. Before Chae-won can release the hilt, Geo launches a devastating kick straight into his jaw. The force of the kick is so immense, it creates a loud boom, launching Chae-won backward through a wooden scaffold. Chae-won slides through the dust, wiping a trail of blood from his lip, admitting that Geo is much tougher now. But then, his face turns into a mask of pure, bitter rage, asking why a kid who can fight like this chose to run away back then. Geo stands in the clearing, panting heavily, his jaw dropping as he hears the accusation of running away. Chaewon clenches his fists, screaming that on the day of their escape, Geo abandoned them all to save his own skin. We flash back to the dark corridor of the lab, showing the elite recovery squad surrounding the trapped mutant children. Chaewon was bleeding from his forehead, desperately reaching out his hand, begging Geo to pass him a steel pipe. But the tiny skeleton Geo was standing right next to a pile of ticking explosives, looking completely paralyzed. Chaewon remembers looking up just in time to see the skeleton kid turn around and sprint away into the darkness. He watched Geo's back disappear, while the rest of the kids were left behind to face the guards' heavy gunfire. Geo listens, his eyes filling with tears, as he realizes the horrific misunderstanding that has poisoned his friend's heart. He screams back, explaining that he didn't run away to save himself. He ran because if he had stayed, they all would have been blown to pieces. But Chaewon doesn't want to hear it. He calls him a coward, placing his palm flat against a massive steel support beam. His heart of the sword pulses, and thick, root-like metal veins violently erupt from the steel beam, tearing through the concrete. The metal veins spread across the entire construction yard, wrapping around the structures like a metallic spiderweb. Chaewon stands in the center of the metal forest, declaring that he knows Geo's regeneration limits inside and out. He warns him that if he is sliced into 1,000 pieces, even his mutated heart will take hours to stitch him back together. With a single gesture of his hand, dozens of sharp steel blades drop from the scaffolding, hovering over Geo like a silver ceiling. Geo crosses his arms, bracing for the impact as the metal blades rain down on his body in a silver blur. But instead of dodging, Geo steps forward, letting the blades pierce his shoulders as he charges straight at Chaewon. He closes the distance, his fist connecting with Chaewon's chest, the impact sending both of them crashing through a concrete wall. The wall crumbles into a massive cloud of gray dust, the sheer force of the collapse shaking the entire block. Nearby pedestrians on the street scream in panic, pointing at the rising smoke, wondering if an earthquake just hit the city. Down the block, Hyeji and Taegu stop running, their eyes wide as they realize the explosion came from the exact direction Geo went. Taegu pulls out his phone to call the police, but Hyeji grabs his jacket, urging him to go check the site first. In the center of the ruined construction site, Chaewon is pinned to the ground, staring up at Geo in absolute disbelief. Geo is holding his collar, blood dripping from his nose, as he explains that he never abandoned them on that day. He says he stayed behind to fight the guards, and only ran because he had to carry the ticking time bomb away from the kids. Chaewon stares into Geo's honest, tear-filled eyes, the cold anger in his violet eyes slowly melting away. He hears people approaching, and immediately releases his metallic grip, telling Geo they need to move. He pulls his hood back over his face, his tone returning to his usual cool, composed vibe as he walks away. Geo stands in the rubble, looking at Chaewon's back, realizing how incredibly much his friend has changed since they were kids. He remembers Chaewon as a bright, smiling boy who loved to cook and share his food with the other cellmates. He wonders what kind of horrific experiences his friend had to survive to turn into this cold, blade-wielding assassin. He quietly follows him out of the construction yard, wondering what kind of dark, underground hideout Chaewon has built for himself. Suddenly, we get a dramatic close-up of a silver spatula violently slicing through a purple-red onion. Geo's jaw literally drops to the floor, his eyes popping out of his head as he looks at the scene in front of him. A shower of sliced onions, tomatoes, and crispy lettuce flies through the air in a perfect, gravity-defying arc. Geo is standing in the middle of a brightly lit, clean restaurant kitchen, completely unable to process what he is seeing. Lee Chaewon, the lethal metal-manipulating mutant assassin, is currently wearing a red-striped McDonald's apron and cap. He is moving his hands like a blur, assembling 3 double cheeseburgers simultaneously with the precision of a surgeon. He wraps them in paper with a single, fluid motion, presenting them with a charming, professional customer service smile. Geo clutches his head, screaming in his mind, wondering what on earth happened to his terrifying rival's cool villain arc. The ingredients land perfectly on the bun, looking like a commercial. Chaewon wraps the burger in a second, his speed making the local staff look like they are moving in slow motion. He slides the tray across the counter, presenting it with a perfect customer service grin. The high school girls are calling him Appa, completely swooning over his fast burger flipping skills. Geo is standing in the lobby with literal question marks hovering over his head, his brain completely offline. We get a shot of a massive, modern McDonald's building, the absolute last place anyone would expect to find a mutant base. Inside the restroom, Chaewon is practicing his friendly customer service smile in the mirror. He walks back to the booth, collapsing onto the seat, letting out a tired sigh as he wipes his forehead. Geo scratches his cheek, asking him if he seriously has a normal job making fast food for a living. Chaewon rolls his eyes, pointing out that since Geo doesn't have a job, he is technically just a homeless, unemployed teenager. Suddenly, 2 heads pop up from behind the booth partition, looking incredibly tense and suspicious. Geo introduces them, pointing to Hyeji, who helped him, and Taegu, whom he met by chance at school. Chaewon narrows his violet eyes, mockingly muttering that it must be nice to be unemployed and still have time to make friends. Hyeji and Taegu get protective, Taegu screaming that he doesn't know anything about Geo's past and shouldn't talk down to him. Geo waves his hands, trying to calm everyone down, assuring them that Chaewon is actually a very good guy, deep down. Chaewon crosses his arms, leaning back against the cushion, ordering Gio to explain what happened after the blast. Gio sits at the table, taking a sip of warm hot chocolate, his expression turning serious as he begins his story. He explains that on the day of the escape, he heard the ticking of a heavy time explosive placed by the lab staff. The guards had surrounded the building, planning to detonate the entire facility to bury all the children under the heavy rubble. He knew that while the strongest mutants might survive the blast, the younger and weaker kids would have been crushed to death. So to save them, he grabbed the ticking bundle of dynamite, wrapping his arms around it, and ran as fast as his skeletal legs could carry him. He ran out of the facility gates, carrying the bomb into the deep, abandoned forest surrounding the area. And then, the explosives detonated, the blinding blast completely vaporizing his flesh and launching him into a deep ravine. He woke up weeks later in the middle of the woods, his body slowly regenerating from a bare skeleton over the course of 3 years. By the time he was able to walk back to the facility, the entire lab was empty, leaving him to believe his friends had successfully escaped. Chaewon listens in silence, remembering the distant boom of the explosion they heard while running through the tunnels. He looks at Gio's honest face, realizing the kid literally blew himself up to buy them enough time to escape the guards. He covers his eyes, his shoulders shaking, as the guilt of hating his savior for 3 years finally hits him. A single, heavy tear slips down Chaewon's cheek, and he quietly whispers that he believes him, apologizing for his blindness. Gio looks at him, completely surprised by his old friend's sudden emotional outburst. But Chaewon quickly recovers his cool manager persona, snapping his fingers to summon his metallic powers. The silver spatula moves like a flash of light, slicing through a fresh onion and tossing the slices into the air. He catches the falling ingredients, assembling a massive, picture-perfect double bacon cheeseburger meal combo. He presents the tray to Gio with a smooth, professional flourish, telling him to take it as a gift. Gio's eyes turn into literal stars as he looks at the golden fries, the sparkling cup of cola, and the giant burger. He starts stuffing his face, chewing happily, while Chaewon is distracted by a group of local girls asking for a photo. Chaewon flashes a perfect peace sign for their camera, looking like a professional social media star. He walks back to the booth, crossing his arms as he apologizes again for attacking Gio without listening first. Gio just waves his hand, his mouth full of beef, pointing out that Chaewon's metal blades didn't even hurt that much anyway. He continues to chew, tears of pure joy in his eyes, as he declares this is the most amazing meal he has had since escaping. Chaewon smiles softly, sliding an extra box of chicken nuggets toward him, telling him to eat as much as he wants. He proudly taps his plastic name tag, reminding Gio that he is the official store manager of this establishment. Gio stares at him in pure admiration, marveling at how easily Chaewon has managed to blend into normal human society. Chaewon clarifies that it is actually a piece of cake once you get the hang of it, offering Gio a job. He boasts that using his managerial authority, he can even offer Gio a sweet 151 above the minimum wage. Taegu and Heiji watch from the booth behind them, sweat dropping as they realize the cool sword mutant is actually kind of a weirdo. But Gio's expression suddenly turns serious, slamming his hand on the table, asking why they met at the broker's meeting point. He points a finger at Chaewon, demanding to know how he could possibly work as a broker after everything the lab did to them. Chaewon simply reaches up, gently scratching his temple, telling Gio to calm his voice down. He explains, with a cold look in his violet eyes, that his role as an underground broker is actually a complete act. He reveals that, in his spare time, he poses as a broker to lure out and capture the human traffickers who hunt mutants. He says his true mission is to completely wipe out those filthy animals who treat their kind like commodity items. Gio's jaw drops, a wave of pure relief washing over him as he realizes his childhood friend didn't turn into a criminal. He wipes his forehead, laughing as he admits he was terrified Chaewon had actually become a slave trader. Chaewon nods, explaining that someone has to clean up the trash in the city, and his metal manipulation is perfect for the job. Gio gives him a massive, enthusiastic double thumbs up, his cheeks flushing pink with pure pride. Chaewon blushes slightly, covering his nose, muttering that Gio is still the same emotional idiot he was in the lab. Gio swallows his bite, offering to help Chaewon with his hunts whenever he needs an extra hand. He explains that his main goal is to locate their other lost friends, and cornering the brokers is the fastest way to get intel. Chaewon looks at him, his expression softening, as he realizes Gio's heart hasn't changed a single bit since they were kids. He grins, slamming his fist onto the table, enthusiastically accepting the partnership. He tells Gio that he is currently tracking a high-profile broker, and with Gio's raw power, the operation will be an absolute breeze. Gio raises his cup, agreeing to the deal, his eyes filled with a new sense of hope. Chaewon holds out his fist, telling Gio that his strength is going to be a massive asset to their mission. The two young men share a firm, heavy fist bump over the greasy table, officially forming their mutant alliance. Chaewon looks at the clock, noting that the dinner rush is starting and he needs to get back to flipping burgers, promising to call later. Later that evening, the three teenagers walk down the quiet city streets under a dark purple sky. Taegu is walking behind them with a pouty face, muttering that 3 years is a long time, and Chaewon could easily be feeding him lies. Heiji agrees, admitting she was terrified when Gio claimed his childhood friend had turned into an underground underground mutant broker. But Gio just smiles, looking up at the streetlights, confidently stating that Chaewon is exactly the same bright kid he remembers. We get a quick mental image of a younger, smiling Chaewon in a lab coat, holding his hand out to welcome the new test subject. Heiji points out that Chaewon promised to message him, asking how he is going to do that when Gio doesn't even own a phone. Gio proudly pulls out Na Youngchul's stolen smartphone, waving it with a bright, innocent smile that makes Taigu's sweat drop. Meanwhile, we cut to a dark, industrial shipyard on the other side of the city, where footsteps are pounding against the concrete. A teenage boy in a blue athletic tracking suit is sprinting down a narrow corridor, panting heavily. Dozens of masked gangsters are chasing him with heavy wooden bats, yelling at him to stop running. The boy raises his hand, spraying a thick stream of yellow oil onto the concrete floor to make them slip. The gangsters curse, sliding across the slippery floor, crashing into each other in a messy pile. But as the boy turns the corner, a massive suit-clad thug steps out of the shadows, his fist already moving. A heavy punch lands directly on the boy's cheek, the immense force of the impact launching him to the floor. The boy crawls back in terror, crying that his oil heart mutation is completely useless, begging them to let him go. A scarred thug squats down, grabbing the boy by his hair, mocking his pathetic, weak cardiac mutation. The gang leader stands nearby, noting that even weak mutants are worth a fortune to the right underground buyers. He grins, mentioning that the black market labs are offering a cool 1 billion won for a single registered mutant. But suddenly, a cold, mocking voice speaks from the container shadows, asking if 1 billion won is really all they are offering. The thugs spin around in confusion, their eyes widening as they spot a hooded figure leaning casually against the scaffolding. Before they can even draw their weapons, a silver streak of light cuts through the air, slicing a thug's chest. The leader screams in panic, identifying the intruder as a mutant, ordering his remaining 10 men to charge. Chaewon's violet eyes glow under his hood as he leaps into the air, a storm of sharp steel blades spinning around him. He lands in the center of their circle, the flying blades slicing through the thug's weapons in a silver flash of blood. A heavy-set thug pulls out a semi-automatic pistol, aiming directly at Chaewon's chest from a close distance. But Chaewon moves like a ghost, instantly appearing in front of him, his hand clamping tightly around the gun's steel slide. Inside his chest, the heart of the sword beats with a heavy, metallic rhythm, channeling his magnetic energy into the gun. The gangster frantically pulls the trigger, but the metal hammer of the gun is completely locked in place. The gangster stares at his weapon in absolute horror, his face turning pale as he realizes his gun has been neutralized. Chaewon smiles, pointing out that since his gun is made of steel, it belongs to him now. Suddenly, dozens of sharp metal spikes violently erupt from the metal slide of the gun, piercing clean through the gangster's hands. The gangster lets out a blood-curdling scream, blood splattering across the floor as Chaewon kicks him to the concrete. Chaewon wipes a drop of blood from his cheek, looking at the unconscious bodies around him, muttering that they should choose better spots. The rescued oil mutant crawls over, crying in pure gratitude, thanking Chaewon for saving his life from the traffickers. He smiles through his tears, noting that Chaewon is a fellow heart mutant who understands their pain and suffering. But Chaewon's face remains completely cold and expressionless under his hood, and he flatly tells the boy to shut up. Chaewon pulls out his smartphone, answering a call, identifying the voice on the other end as his boss. He calmly reports into the receiver that he has successfully recovered the stolen mutant and is ready to send him back to the laboratory. The oil mutant freezes, his face turning pale as he realizes his savior is actually the main broker who is selling him out. Before he can even scream, Chaewon's heel connects with his jaw, knocking him unconscious with a heavy thud. We cut to a dark, high-tech laboratory where a shadow-cloaked scientist is taking notes next to rows of pickled mutant test subjects. The scientist smiles over the phone, praising Chaewon for being a highly efficient asset who is on a completely different level from the other lab rats. Chaewon listens to the praise in silence, his eyes narrow as he stands over the pile of bleeding, unconscious bodies. He adjusts his receiver, calmly stating that there is one more vital piece of information he needs to report tonight. He takes a deep breath, his voice dropping to a low, chilling whisper as he announces that he has officially located Kim Gio. The scientist's eyes widen in pure excitement, asking if he is talking about the legendary test subject 11101, who escaped years ago. He reminds Chaewon of the massive, unlimited reward promised by the higher-ups for the capture of the Heart of Resurrection. Chaewon's violet eyes glow in the dark shipyard, a chilling, dangerous smirk forming on his face as he promises to hand Gio over to them tomorrow. We start with a clean kitchen and a knife hitting a chopping board. Lee Chaewon is standing at the stove, casually stirring a pot of stew while planning a kidnapping. He is trying to figure out the easiest way to lure our guy into a trap without raising any red flags. The problem is that Gio is not the fragile skeleton he used to be back in the facility. He recovers instantly from wounds that would put anyone else in the ground, meaning Chaewon needs a location made entirely of metal to keep him pinned. But for now, the absolute menace of the underworld is serving up a fresh pot of curry. It turns out, this lethal assassin is actually a domestic king who cooks for his little sister, Chae-yoon. He even went heavy on the potatoes because he knows they are her favorite. Chae-yoon is absolutely thrilled, calling her brother the greatest chef alive. He gives her a gentle pat on the head, promising to make her whatever she wants next. She asks him to sit down and eat with her, but Chaewon hooks his apron on the wall and declines. He says he has some urgent business to take care of tonight. Chae-yoon looks disappointed, but he tells her to save the leftovers because he will finish them when he gets back. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, we check in on Heeji's apartment. Heiji is in the kitchen, peeling tangerines, and thinking about how hard Geo worked taking the puppy out today. She decides our guy needs a proper high-protein meal to recover from all that walking. Her logic is that meat and fruit are the ultimate recovery foods. So she decides to combine them into one dish. Behold the culinary disaster of the century, braised short ribs covered in fresh strawberries and tangerines. And yes, she is getting her cooking advice from ChatGPT, which is telling her this is a perfectly normal recipe. The AI is giving her exact water to soy sauce ratios for fruit-infused ribs, and she is entirely buying into it. She is tossing the pan like a professional chef, convinced she has a hidden talent for this. Suddenly, her phone buzzes with a message from her sister. Her sister says she won't be home until dawn, and when Hyeji tells her about the strawberry rib combination, her sister responds with a rabbit throwing up a rainbow. Hyeji thinks her sister just has zero taste, so she tells Geo he can relax and get some sleep. Geo is sitting on the floor with Twigim, staring at his phone and waiting for Chaewon to call. Haiji asks if he is really that excited about meeting his old lab friend again. Geo smiles, saying he really missed her. Haiji admits it is the first time she has ever seen him look this relaxed. We flash back to their childhood inside Hermes' lab, where a young Chaewon is wearing his hospital gown. Little skeleton Geo is hiding under a desk, looking terrified and alone. He is trying to make himself as small as possible so the other kids won't look at him. Chaewon notices he is missing an arm and demands to know what happened to it. Geo panicked, saying the wound from the latest experiment just hasn't healed yet and begging him not to look. Chaewon just smirks and says it is no big deal. He grabs Geo's sleeve and tells him to hand over the stump. With a sudden flash of light, Chaewon uses his magnetic sword power. He molds a massive metal blade directly onto Geo's arm, telling him it is a cool upgrade. Geo is absolutely stunned, staring at his new metallic limb. Just then, the ice girl Yuhana walks in, asking Chaewon if he is bullying the new kid again. Chaewon argues that he gave Geo a cool sword arm, and Geo eagerly nods along. He thinks having a giant blade for an arm is the most stylish thing ever. Hana is completely speechless, realizing both of these boys have negative fashion sense. Chaewon holds out his fist, telling Geo that he recognizes true style. Geo has no idea what a fist bump is, and just stares at it blankly. Chaewon explains that friends who trust each other bump fists to prove their bond. Geo taps his metal hand against Chaewon's, feeling like he is finally part of a real team. Back in the present, Geo tells Hyeji that Chaewon was always the coolest friend who he wanted to copy. Hyeji is quietly judging his taste, wondering why anyone would be happy about a blade arm, but she is glad to see him happy after everything he has been through. She sets the table and says it is time to eat, downplaying her own effort. She proudly serves the sweet and refreshing braised short ribs. Geo's jaw drops when he sees the actual contents of the pot. He asks what this is, and she happily explains her special recipe. He admits he has never seen meat mixed with strawberries and tangerines before. He takes a bite of the meat and fruit combo, braced for the worst. Hyeji leans in, anxiously waiting for his reaction. Geo literally sheds tears of joy, declaring it is fantastic. He says the fruit is delicious, the meat is delicious, and they somehow work perfectly together. Twigim is sitting under the table, looking up with giant puppy eyes. Geo asks if they can give the puppy a bite, but Hyeji immediately shuts it down. She kneels next to the dog, promising to make him something safe and tasty later. Geo keeps stuffing his face, thanking her repeatedly for cooking for him. She smiles and says she will make him even better meals in the future. Our guy is completely stuffed, looking happier than he has ever been in his life. Suddenly, his phone on the counter starts vibrating. It is Chaewon, and the second Geo answers, Chaewon screams for help. He claims he was chasing the laboratory recovery squads, but got cornered, and things are going south. The mention of the lab instantly triggers Geo's defensive instincts. Geo tells him he is on his way right now, and asks for the location. Chaewon gives him an address at an abandoned factory on Seodam Daro, before hanging off. Geo slams his phone down, telling Heeji that Chaewon is in serious danger. He swallows the last of his food in one giant gulp, refusing to waste a second. He apologizes to Hyeji for rushing out after she made him such a nice dinner. Hyeji offers to go with him, but he sprints out the door, telling her it is far too dangerous. We cut to the abandoned warehouse, a massive industrial site filled with shipping containers and steel scaffolding. Geo slips through the entrance, keeping low and looking for any signs of a struggle. He realizes the entire place is dead silent, which makes no sense for an active lab ambush. He steps forward, his foot making a metallic, clinking sound. He looks down and realizes he is walking on solid iron plates. The walls, the pipes, the pillars, every single surface in this building is made of heavy iron. A cold sweat drops down his neck as he realizes this is the ultimate home turf for Chaewon's magnetic ability. If Chaewon has a massive environmental advantage here, how could he have possibly been captured so easily? He realizes something is wrong and tells himself to stay sharp. He imagines Chaewon captured somewhere, trembling in fear under the enemy's hands. But suddenly, a low vibration ripples through the steel floor beneath his feet. A dozen sharp metal blades erupt directly from the iron plates, like steel spikes. They tear clean through Geo's chest, throwing him back in a spray of blood. Geo grits his teeth in agonizing pain, staring at the ceiling. He is suspended in the air, impaled by several steel swords. He struggles to look down to see where the attack came from. Chaewon is crouching on the iron floor, looking up at him with a cold, dead gaze. Geo asks what he is doing, reminding him that he said he was captured. Chaewon stands up, his expression completely blank under his hood. He looks up at his impaled friend with zero remorse. He flatly tells him that he was tricked. Geo grabs the blades, impaling his torso, pulling himself off them with a brutal, wet sound. He lands on his feet, blood dripping onto the cold steel floor. Chaewon doesn't hesitate, immediately leaping forward with his sword drawn. He delivers a high-speed kick to Geo's chest, launching him across the platform. Geo coughs up a spray of blood, his body sliding against the metal. He crashes into a pile of steel girders, the impact shaking the entire structure. Chaewon slowly walks over, dragging his blade along the ground. He admits it was nice seeing him today, even if it was a bit awkward after 7 years. He says laughing and chatting with him today really reminded him of the old days. He steps closer, his heavy boots echoing in the empty space. He says that is why he decided to tell him the truth. He really is a broker who captures variants, and he came here tonight to hand Geo back to Hermes' lab. Geo can't even process the words as Chaewon places his hand against a massive iron pillar. The metal starts to bend like liquid, spawning a flurry of steel blades that fly straight at Geo's head. Chaewon leaps from above, descending like a hawk, with his sword aimed at our guy's throat. Geo barely dodges, throwing a counter kick that Chaewon deflects with his forearms. Geo realizes the intensity of the attacks is completely different from their previous skirmish. He looks into Chaewon's eyes and sees absolutely zero hesitation. Our guy grabs a loose iron plate to use as a makeshift shield. Chaewon's blade strikes the plate, sending a shower of bright orange sparks into the air. Geo screams at him to snap out of it and at least explain why he is doing this. Chaewon's expression remains stone cold as he tells him there is no need. He tells him to just surrender and make this easy. Suddenly, the iron plate in Geo's hand starts to warp, sprouting sharp spikes that stab into his own arms. Geo drops the plate, sliding backward across the metal floor. He asks if Chaewon is seriously still aligned with that criminal lab. He grabs Chaewon by the collar, begging him to wake up. Chaewon responds by sweeping his leg, sending Geo flying through the air. Chaewon's eyes glow a faint violet under his hood as he maintains his focus. He uses his magnetic power to manipulate the metal pipes below, launching them like harpoons. Geo grits his teeth, realizing his words are completely falling on deaf ears. He realizes that talking won't work anymore, and leaps backward to create space. But Chaewon's voice echoes through the warehouse, telling him that running is completely useless. He slams his hand onto the floor, and the iron plates start to ripple like water. A massive steel spike shoots up from the ground, impaling Geo directly through the chest. Chaewon stands before his suspended friend, telling him he will never escape this metal cage. Our guy spits out a glob of blood, glaring at his childhood friend. He realizes Chaewon came completely prepared to drag him back to that living hell. He asks if Chaewon really doesn't care if he gets locked in a cage and tortured for the rest of his life. Chaewon raises his sword over his head, saying it doesn't matter. Geo's gray eyes flash a dangerous crimson as his heart beats with a heavy rhythm. He uses his raw strength to shatter the impaling spike, launching a massive right hook at Chaewon's face. Chaewon dodges and slices our guy's chest in a clean, horizontal arc, but Geo doesn't even flinch, stepping forward through the slash to deliver a punch. The impact of Geo's fist hits Chaewon's guard, sending a massive shockwave through his arms. Chaewon is pushed back, realizing that the physical damage isn't even slowing Geo down. He smiles faintly, expecting nothing less from the holder of the resurrection heart. He knows that after 10 years of daily torture, Geo has built up an insane resistance to physical pain. His body heals the instant he is cut, and he immediately uses that brief window to counterattack. Chaewon changes his stance, his sword heart pulsing with a rapid light. He decides to cut him so fast that his cells can't even keep up with the damage. A flurry of silver slashes rains down on Geo, shredding his clothes and skin. If Geo is constantly forced to regenerate, he won't have the biological energy to strike back. We flash back to Hermes' lab, where a young, skeletal Geo is bound to a metal table by heavy iron chains. The researchers slap a heavy metallic collar around his neck. The collar locks in place with a heavy metallic click. Over the speakers, the lead researcher announces the start of the 225th Regeneration Response Experiment. The massive laboratory doors slowly slide open. Lee Chaewon is pushed into the room, looking terrified and holding a training sword. Geo looks up from his chains, recognizing his friend. The researcher orders Chaewon to attack the test subject using his sword heart. Chaewon refuses, demanding to know why he has to hurt his friend. He screams at the observation window, asking if they are completely insane. He drops his sword and turns to leave, saying he is not doing this. Suddenly, Chaewon's collar flares with blue electricity, sending a high-voltage shock through his entire body. Geo watches in horror as his friend collapses, screaming that he is fine and telling Chaewon to just do it. Chaewon is on his knees, gasping for air as the collar shocks him again. Geo begs him to comply, saying the cuts don't even hurt him anyway. Chaewon grits his teeth through the electricity, saying he would rather just die than hurt his friend. The collar shocks him a third time, forcing him to clutch his throat. Geo's face goes completely vacant as he realizes Chaewon will actually die if this keeps up. So, he decides to play the villain, calling Chaewon a weakling whose metal ability is completely useless. Chaewon's eyes go wide in pure shock at the insult. Geo keeps taunting him, telling him to hurry up and finish it, because he will just regenerate anyway. Chaewon's fear turns into a burning rage, his sword heart flaring as he picks up his blade. He looks at Geo with a furious glare, and Geo prepares for the impact. Chaewon delivers a massive vertical slash, cutting clean through Geo's shoulder and chest. On the floor, Geo realizes he might have pushed his friend a little too far. Chaewon unleashes a relentless barrage of attacks, screaming to ask if it still doesn't hurt. Geo smiles through the blood, saying it doesn't hurt at all. Chaewon lands one final strike, sending the young skeleton crashing to the floor in a massive puddle of blood. The speaker overhead declares the 225th regeneration experiment complete. Chaewon stands over him, gasping for breath and covered in sweat. The researchers leave, and Geo lies in the dark, silently crying from the pain. Suddenly, he realizes the pain is starting to fade much faster than usual. He looks up and sees Chaewon crouching over him, his own arm bleeding heavily. Chaewon had cut his own wrist, letting his blood drip directly onto Geo's open wounds. He tells Geo to shut up and pretend nothing happened, so the researchers won't notice. Geo asks why he would do something so dangerous when he regenerates anyway. Chaewon snaps at him, saying he knows Geo's normal food recovery is slow as hell. He calls the laboratory bastards trash for barely giving Geo enough nutrients to heal. He tells Geo to stop trying to play the tragic, self-sacrificing hero. He says seeing him act like that is just embarrassing between friends. Back in the present, Chaewon's face is completely devoid of that childhood warmth. He delivers another massive slash that opens a deep wound across Geo's shoulder. Our guy collapses onto one knee, the blood loss finally starting to catch up with him. He looks up at Chaewon, asking why it had to be him, of all people, to betray him. Geo throws a desperate punch, but Chaewon easily tilts his head, dodging the blow. Chaewon raises his heavy blade over Geo's head to deliver the final strike, but suddenly, he hesitates, his blade stopping an inch from Geo's neck. Geo looks up, realizing his friend's hand is shaking. Even after all this fighting and cutting, Chaewon still can't bring himself to deliver a lethal blow. Chaewon clicks his tongue, admitting that this hesitation seriously hurts his pride. He delivers a heavy kick that sends Geo crashing back onto the iron floor. Geo tells him to get lost, saying he has no intention of fighting his friend. Chaewon's eyes narrow as he looks down at our guy. He tells him to stop playing around and just let himself be captured, because if Geo refuses to comply, Chaewon knows exactly how to make him. He drops two names that stop Geo's heart cold, Song Hyeji and Jo Taegu. He asks if he should go and capture his precious new high school friends first. A heavy silence falls over the warehouse as a drop of blood hits the iron plate. Chaewon smirks, noting that Geo is finally looking at him with actual killer intent. He says finding normal high school students in this city is incredibly easy, and if Geo runs away tonight, those kids will be the ones who pay the price instead. Before he can even finish his sentence, Geo's fist connects with Chaewon's jaw like a missile. The impact is so violent that Chaewon's teeth slam together, coughing up a spray of blood. Geo pins him to the ground, his eyes completely vacant and glowing a deadly crimson red. He tells Chaewon to never cross that line, reminding him that Hyeji and Taegu are his friends. He says he wanted to hear his friend's side of the story until the very end because he trusted him. But inside his chest, the heart of resurrection beats with a terrifying, metallic roar. Geo looks down at him with a chilling expression, declaring he is going to smash him to pieces. We start right where we left off, with Geo holding Chaewon's jaw in a steel grip. Our guy has officially run out of patience and is ready to deliver a beatdown. Chaewon is completely shocked as he realizes Geo is using his own bleeding mouth to absorb blood. The catalytic fluid flows directly into his system, triggering the vampiric regeneration mechanic. Inside his veins, the cells are working overtime, like a high-speed assembly line. His severed arm begins to reform from a mass of muscle and bone. A few seconds is all it takes to get a brand new hand ready for combat. Chaewon realizes his opponent just bypassed his elemental advantage with a literal biological cheat code. Geo swings. The impact sends Chaewon sliding across the iron plates. 3 of his ribs are completely shattered despite his iron-reinforced body. Geo closes the distance, hovering over him with pure predatory intent. He lands a direct punch to Chaewon's face. Chaewon's head snaps back as he flies into a pile of industrial scrap. The speed difference is too high for him to even track the movements. Before he can recover, Geo's silhouette appears right behind him like a ghost. Another punch connects. Chaewon goes tumbling across the warehouse floor. He pushes himself up, spitting blood and cursing his friend's ridiculous scaling. He realizes he needs to create some distance, or he is going to get comboed to death. He slams his hand onto the floor, summoning a forest of steel spikes. But Geo is already in the air, dodging every single blade with perfect precision. Chaewon can't believe his eyes. Geo isn't just predicting the attacks, he is actively seeing them and reacting. His reflexes are on a completely different level compared to his skeletal state. It turns out the Resurrection Heart doesn't just heal wounds, it buffs every physical stat. He is faster, stronger, and has infinite stamina to burn. Chaewon realizes that at this rate, he is going to take a massive loss. He decides to pull out his final card, even if it destroys his own body. He begins absorbing absorbing the surrounding iron particles directly into his bloodstream. The metal shreds his internal organs, but his sword heart starts vibrating with raw energy. A massive explosion of steel plates erupts from his body. He emerges covered in a terrifying suit of spiky metal armor. He yells at Geo, claiming his regeneration won't save him from hundreds of blades. Geo just looks at him, completely unimpressed by the theater. He charges straight into the storm of flying metal. The blades cut deep into his chest and face, but he keeps moving forward. He delivers a devastating kick that breaks through Chaewon's defense. Chaewon coughs up blood as his spiky armor starts to shatter. Geo's eyes are vacant as he states that physical cuts don't mean a thing to him. His heart beats behind his ribcage, fueled by pure determination. The reflection in his eye shows he is only focused on one target. He swings his fist, the impact echoing through the entire warehouse structure. Shards of Chaewon's iron armor scatter like broken glass. Chaewon's smug face is replaced by sheer terror. Geo yells that the only thing that actually hurts is being betrayed by his closest friend. He lands a clean right hook to Chaewon's jaw. The force of the blow cracks the iron floor below them. A massive shockwave clears the dust from the ring. Geo stands in the quiet ruins, his back to his fallen rival. Chaewon lies defeated, his eyes wide and vacant. Our guy looks down at him, his anger fading into deep disappointment. He asks him why he did it. He says he still doesn't understand what the lab could have possibly offered him. He clenches his bloody fist, remembering the torture they both escaped from. Chaewon states that talking about it now won't change anything. He admits he works for the lab now and was fully planning on selling him out. He tells Geo they can never go back to being friends. Geo's jaw tightens. He delivers another punch to Chaewon's face. He grabs his shirt, telling him not to make that decision by himself. He screams at him to stop running away behind excuses. He demands to know what Chaewon got in exchange for his soul. He looks into his eyes, searching for any trace of the boy he knew. The silence between them is heavier than the metal surrounding them. Chaewon turns his gaze away. He remembers. We see a memory of the children running down the laboratory hallways during a rare break. They were playing around, pretending to fight like normal kids. They posed for photos, smiling despite the collars on their necks. Chaewon used his metal power to peel an apple for Geo. Back in the present, Chaewon says he has nothing left to say. Suddenly, the sound of heavy tactical boots echoes from the entrance. Geo's head snaps around. A squad of heavily armed soldiers in black camo sprints into the warehouse. Our guy is confused, wondering who these new players are. Red laser sights paint his chest. Dozens of elite tactical officers raise their assault rifles. They form a firing line, completely surrounding the two variants. A SWAT officer reports that they have detected the high-risk heart mutants. Geo's eyes widen in terror. His mind flashes back to the lab's recovery teams trapping him in the courtyard. He remembers being shot repeatedly as a child, his skeleton shattering under the gunfire. The firing squad didn't stop until he was a pile of broken bones. The memory hits him like a physical blow. He realizes he needs to run, but he can't leave Chaewon behind. He grabs a metal support beam to clear a path. He swings it in a wide arc, forcing the front line to scatter. He leaps over a stack of crates, carrying Chaewon on his back. The tactical squad pursues them immediately, shouting orders to shoot. Geo slides to a halt at the exit, but another squad is already waiting for him in the doorway. They point their weapons directly at his face, sealing the escape route. Our guy is out of breath, his wounds still healing. He is completely surrounded in the middle of the warehouse floor. Tactical leader Im Jinwook steps forward, warning his men that both targets are high-tier variants. He orders Team B to load live ammunition and prepare to eliminate them. Geo realizes that if he is captured here, he is going straight back to that white room. Jinwook raises his hand to give the final order, but a pale hand suddenly reaches out and grabs his radio transmitter. A stylish woman in a pinstripe blazer stands behind him, flanked by assistants. It is Song Hai-in, leader of the Mutant Special Police Task Force. Jinwook's face goes pale as he recognizes her. The soldiers whisper in confusion as Hai-in calmly orders everyone to lower their guns. The tension in the room drops as the weapons are pointed at the floor. Her high heels click against the iron plates as she walks toward our guy. She looks at Geo's bloodstained face. She tells him not to be afraid, explaining that she came to help. Geo is stunned as she reveals she is Hyaji's older sister. She gives a confident, dark smile, introducing herself as Song Hai-in. Geo is still processing the fact that the terrifying woman standing in front of him is his roommate's sister. Hai-in leans in, telling him she has the situation under control. The SWAT squad salutes her, confirming they secured the perimeter. She orders them to call paramedics for Chaewon and block civilian access. But Jinwook screams in protest, claiming she is ignoring standard field protocols. He introduces himself as the captain of the police special assault team, demanding she back off. Hai-in looks at him with complete indifference. Her assistant steps up, holding a metal clipboard. He presents the official warrant and investigative data for Chaewon's arrest. Jinwook smiles, thinking he has a loophole. He points at Geo, who is standing quietly in the background. He says the kid in the black t-shirt is an unregistered mutant who isn't covered by their warrant. He claims unregistered variants fall under his squad's jurisdiction for immediate containment. The soldiers raise their rifles again, ready to seize Geo. Our guy is caught in the middle, looking at the laser sights on his chest. He wonders if he needs to fight his way out of a police blockade. Suddenly, Hai-in raises her hand and performs a simple snap of her fingers. A strange purple energy wraps around every single weapon held by the assault team. The air splits as all of their rifles and rocket launchers shatter into a million tiny pieces. The soldiers are left holding empty plastic handles, their faces pale under their helmets. They realize they just witnessed Team Leader Song's high-tier mutant ability. She tells Jinwook that he clearly has not grasped the scale of the situation. The captain is furious, asking if she just disarmed her own allies in the field. Hye-in snaps her fingers a second time. The shockwave pushes Jinwook back, forcing him to cover his ears. She explains that this case is a special investigation directly linked to Hermes' lab. The mention of the lab stops Jinwook shouting immediately. She tells him to look around the warehouse. The deep craters and shattered iron pillars are the traces of a high-tier mutant battle. Jinwook looks at the kids, realizing what they actually are. These are the high-risk Class A variants that the laboratory has been hunting for years. He immediately backs off, realizing his team is completely out of their depth. Two officers put handcuffs on the unconscious Chaewon, lifting him from the floor. Geo steps forward, asking where they are taking his friend. The assistant explains that Chaewon is a wanted criminal who must go through formal processing. Geo watches him get dragged away, wondering if Chaewon really did something unforgivable. The assistant turns to Geo, saying they need his testimony as well. He says the team leader wants to have a private interview with him in the interrogation room. Geo looks at Hye-in, feeling an intense, intimidating energy radiating from her. He realizes this woman is not someone you want to make an enemy of. A few hours later, we are inside a sterile interrogation room. Hye-in is sitting across the table, smiling at our guy in a way that makes him incredibly nervous. She tells him to relax, explaining she just has a few routine questions. She gets straight to the point, stating that her team is actively hunting down Hermes' lab. Geo nods, saying he escaped from that facility 3 years ago with his classmates. Hye-in slides a folder across the metal table, telling him he is still in the dark. She reveals that every single one of his childhood friends was recaptured by the lab long ago. She explains that the lab likely let them escape on purpose, just to hunt them down and break their spirits. They use their personal weaknesses to force them into committing black market crimes. Geo is stunned, realizing that is exactly what happened to Chaewon. Hye-in says Chaewon isn't talking, but their records paint a clear picture of his motive. The door creaks open, and her assistant enters. Geo turns his head to see who it is. A young girl in a wheelchair rolls into the room, looking terrified. It is Chae-yoon, Chaewon's younger sister. Hye-in kneels down, gently holding her hand and telling her she wants to understand her brother's choices. Chae-yoon looks at the floor, tears pooling in her eyes. She whispers that everything is entirely her fault. She says Chaewon wasn't a bad person until everything changed because of her. She starts crying, saying she is terrified of losing her brother to the system. Hye-in's expression remains calm, as she states that if Chae-yoon stays silent, her brother will take the fall alone. Chae-yoon wipes her face, deciding she can't let him carry that burden anymore. She looks up, preparing to tell the full story. We flash back to 3 years ago. Chaewon arrived at his childhood home after escaping the lab, but the house was in ruins, and his parents had already passed away. Chae-yoon was left alone, suffering from severe physical complications after a major accident. Chaewon was devastated, staring at his sister's state in pure shock. He hugged her tightly, weeping and promising that he would protect her no matter what. He worked day and night at construction sites, carrying heavy loads. But because he had no legal identity, his employers paid him pennies in cash. Every cent he earned went straight to Chae-yoon's expensive medical treatments. Then one day, the laboratory recovery team kicked their front door open. They pinned Chaewon to the floor, threatening to take his sister. Chae-yoon screamed for her brother as the guards held her back. Chaewon went wild, screaming that he would kill them all if they touched her. A clean-cut lab representative in a suit stepped into the room. He offered a deal. They wouldn't lock Chaewon up if he agreed to work for them. They promised him a legal identity, money, and medical care for his sister in exchange for capturing variants. Back in the interrogation room, Chae-yoon explains that the lab paid for everything, including her school. She cries, saying she feels immense guilt, knowing her life was funded by her brother's crimes. Geo stands in the corner of the room, looking down at his hands in silence. He finally understands why Chaewon became a double agent. The assistant wheels Chae-yoon out of the room, leaving the two of them alone. Hye-in holds up a document, her tone shifting back to professional. She states that even with a tragic motive, Chaewon still tried to hand Geo over to a torture facility. She says he is scheduled for transfer and will be punished for multiple black market captures. She points to a phone on the wall, asking if Geo wants to have one final call before the transfer. Geo looks at the phone, his expression unreadable. He walks over and picks up the receiver. He waits as the line connects to Chaewon's holding cell. On the other end, Chaewon answers, his voice quiet. Geo tells him he just heard the entire story. He says he knows about his sister, the deal, and why he tried to sell him out. He asks him why he didn't just tell him the truth from the start. Chaewon let out a tired sigh. Geo's voice starts to shake with anger. He demands that his friend say something instead of staying silent. He yells into the receiver, calling him a traitorous piece of trash. He grips the plastic phone, asking if he is too ashamed to even make an excuse. He says Chaewon tried to drag his childhood friend back to a living hell. He tells him he is a complete L of a human being. He tells him to spend the rest of his life rotting in regret behind bars. Chaewon looks down at the cell floor, accepting the words. He whispers that Geo's anger is entirely fair. He prepares to hang up the phone, ending the connection. But Gio stops him, stating that the police promised to take care of his sister's medical treatments. He says Chaewon is definitely trash, but Chaeyoon is innocent. He tells him to pay for his crimes and get out of prison as fast as possible. He says once he is free, he needs to make him another double cheeseburger, because the first one was delicious. We see a memory of little skeleton Gio pointing at Chaewon in the training room. Little Chaewon was sitting on the floor with a swollen face after their childhood fight. In the holding cell, Chaewon starts crying silently, whispering a thank you to his friend. Gio hangs up the receiver with a heavy click. Hyeon looks at him from her chair, noting that our guy is far more generous than she expected. Gio turns around, his eyes dark, with a new purpose. He realizes his other friends are still locked in cages, being used as weapons. He tells Hyeon he wants to save them, asking her to let him help her team. Hyeon gives a slow, satisfied smile, setting her phone on the desk. She says they would welcome his strength, but asks if he is going to be okay facing those monsters. Gio clenches his fist, his veins bulging with power. He states he is not some weak skeleton anymore. He is going to save his friends and tear that laboratory to absolute pieces. We return to the apartment complex under a quiet night sky. Hyeon steps through the door and immediately drops her intimidating special task force persona. She leaps at Haiji, wrapping her in a suffocating hug like a giant teddy bear. Hyeji is trying to survive the sheer kinetic force of her older sister's affection. Jiro is standing in the doorway, completely bewildered by the contrast. It turns out, the woman who just dismantled a squad of military rifles with a snap is a helicopter sister at home. Hyeon looks over at Gio, asking if he is doing all right after the warehouse mess. Gio scratches his neck, looking a bit awkward. He smiles and says he is fine because she handled everything so cleanly. Haiji smiles too, relieved that our guy made it back in one piece. Haiji then asks if he wants some of the galbi-jejim he had to abandon earlier. Gio's face instantly turns bright red, with excitement at the thought of actual food. Haiji proudly brings out the massive pot of sweet and sour galbi-jejim. Hyeon picks up a piece of cooked tangerine with her chopsticks, looking highly suspicious. She asks her sister who on earth taught her to put oysters, strawberries, and tangerines in a meat stew. Haiji confidently whips out her phone, showing the ChatGPT recipe that promised a high-end restaurant experience. Hyeon stares at the tangerine, wondering if the AI is actively trying to poison humanity. She explains that putting soggy fruit soaked in fat and soy sauce into meat is a culinary crime. Haiji blushes, admitting she tweaked the recipe just a little bit to add more vitamin C. She says she just wanted her older sister to feel energized after a long shift. Hyeon's heart melts instantly, completely neutralizing her logical brain. She stares at the tangerine, her internal gears grinding as she prepares for the ultimate sacrifice. She stuffs the massive piece of fruit and meat into her mouth before anyone can stop her. She gives a thumbs up, declaring with a strained face that it is delicious. Haiji's eyes light up with pure joy as she hears the review. Hyeon forces a smile through the taste, telling her it is just a perfect mix of everything tasty. Haiji is absolutely thrilled, celebrating her cooking success. Gio happily joins in, taking a massive bite and giving a matching thumbs up. He starts devouring the food like a vacuum, saying he could eat this literal biohazard every single day. Hyeon watches him eat, wondering if his taste buds failed to regenerate during his transition to human form. Within minutes, the bowls are licked completely clean. Hyeon wipes her mouth, deciding it is time to address the actual elephant in the room. She points her chopsticks at Gio, bringing up his living situation. She notes that having a healthy teenage guy living with two young women is a serious security risk. Haiji looks panicked, pointing out that Gio is actively being hunted by black market brokers. Hyeon says she considered having him stay at the police headquarters, but it is too dangerous to expose his identity. She whips out her phone, making a quick call to check on official police residences. She asks if there are any vacant rooms available for an urgent transfer. Unfortunately, the voice on the other end confirms that all official facilities are completely full. She hangs up, telling them it will take a few days for a spot to open up. So, she decides to allow Gio to stay on their living room sofa as a temporary measure. Gio and Twigim celebrate like they just won the lottery, but Hyeon raises her pen, telling him she is not finished. Gio's smile vanishes, replaced by a cold sweat. She slams a laminated sheet of paper onto the table with a loud thud. She tells him that if he is staying here, he must follow the ground rules. We see the list, 10 rules for Gio to live in this house, including a literal death penalty for entering Haiji's room. She leans in close, telling him the consequences of breaking them will exceed his worst nightmares. Her eyes go dark as she emphasizes the rule about staying away from her little sister. Gio is trembling, looking like he is back in a Hermes lab isolation chamber. He quickly signs the paper, promising to follow every single line. Hyeon stands up, her tone shifting back to her professional commander voice. She tells Gio to follow her outside immediately. She says she needs to check the actual extent of his heart mutation before they start the investigation. They walk to a quiet, empty construction yard in the early hours of the morning. She arms her crossed, telling him that if he wants to help crush the lab, she needs to know his stats. Gio explains that his main ability is regenerating his body when he gets injured. He says his cells require blood to regenerate instantly, and without it, his healing factor drops to a normal rate. Hyeon looks at him skeptically, saying she doesn't think healing is his only power. She points out that the deep cracks in the warehouse walls could only be left by superhuman strength. Gio flexes his hand, saying he always assumed his high physical stats were just a passive side effect of his heart. He admits he never fully regenerated in the lab, so he only realized his true strength during the fight with Chaewon. Hyeon processes this, realizing blood acts as both a healing medicine and an active power source for him. She walks over to her bag, deciding to test his limits. She tosses a heavy metallic device onto the dirt. She tells him it is a grip dynamometer and orders him to squeeze it with all his might. Geo looks at the grip tester, remembering seeing similar devices used during his childhood lab trials. He grips the handle, trying to figure out how to maximize his output. He takes a deep breath, focusing his mind on his hand. He concentrates his blood flow directly into his forearm, his veins bulging with sudden energy. He lets out a loud shout, squeezing the metal handle with terrifying force. The device instantly explodes in his hand, gears and springs flying in all directions. Hyen's eyes go wide as she realizes the dynamometer was built to measure up to 500 kilograms. She realizes our guy's raw grip strength is actually higher than a silverback gorilla's. Geo panics, apologizing for breaking her machine and explaining that his stats must have been boosted by Chaewon's blood. Hyen smirks, noting that he is far more dangerous than she thought. Suddenly, she raises her hand, and several heavy concrete stones rise into the air around her. Geo looks up, his defensive instincts instantly taking over. She launches the stones at him like high-speed missiles. Geo moves like a blur, twisting his body to dodge the incoming projectiles with perfect reflexes. But one stray stone catches him right on the head, making a loud thumping sound. Hyen lowers her hand, admitting she was controlling them in a random trajectory to test his reaction speed. She says his ability to dodge almost all of them proves he is a high-rank mutant. Geo rubs his bruised head, asking if her ability to float stones is some kind of magic superpower. Hyen stares at him with a deadpan expression. She tells him not to be stupid, explaining that all mutant abilities are strictly within the laws of science. She adds that her specific mutation is a highly classified national secret, so she can't explain the mechanics. She warns him that he needs to keep his own abilities hidden as much as possible to avoid attracting attention. She notes that he probably knows the consequences of being captured better than anyone. Geo looks down, realizing she is entirely right. We see a montage of his recent fights, and Geo realizes he has been using his powers far too recklessly in public. Just then, Haiji's voice echoes through the empty yard. She runs over to them, holding a plastic bag filled with cold drinks. Geo's serious expression instantly vanishes as he drools at the thought of cold sugar. Hyen smiles softly, realizing that despite his terrifying power, Geo is still just a kid who missed out on childhood. She tells them she has to take an urgent work call and walks away, telling them to save a drink for her. Haiji hands Geo a red can, explaining it is a brand new carbonated soda. Geo takes a massive gulp, and his eyes literally sparkle. He describes the tingling sensation on his tongue, declaring it is the most delicious thing he has ever tasted. He says drinking it feels like a physical switch just flipped inside his brain. But as he stares at the red can, a sudden wave of familiarity hits him. He remembers Chaewon serving him a picture-perfect burger in his McDonald's apron. He realizes this is the exact same drink Chaewon served him during their brief alliance. Haiji notices his sudden silence, asking what is wrong. Geo looks away, his expression turning somber. He whispers that it is nothing. He admits he was just thinking about his friend and the rest of his old classmates. They sit together on a wooden bench, the towering apartment buildings silhouetted against the morning sky. Haiji tells him she can see how deeply he cherishes his friends, noting how happy he looked at the burger shop. Geo says they were like a real family to him. We see a horrific memory of kids being subjected to daily chemical and physical torture in the lab. But we also see them gathering in a dark cell to celebrate a birthday with a tiny piece of bread. Geo says those shared moments of warmth were the only reason he kept breathing in that hellhole. He says he wanted all of them to escape together and live happy lives. He grittily notes that knowing he was the only one who made it out while they are still in cages is unbearable. He clenches his fist so hard his knuckles turn white. He repeats his vow to find them all and tear the entire laboratory structure to the ground. Haiji looks at his profile, her expression soft. She gives a bright, supportive smile, telling him she is always ready to help in any way she can. Geo looks at her, the heavy weight on his shoulders lifting just a little bit. He smiles back, thanking her for being there. We cut to a few days later, showing the towering brick building of Seodom High School. Inside the classroom, a group of high school girls is gossiping about a rumored transfer student with insane visuals. The homeroom teacher enters, slamming his book on the podium and ordering everyone to quiet down. Behind the door, Geo's resurrection heart is beating like a drum. He is wearing a crisp, white school uniform and tie, looking incredibly nervous as he steps up to the podium. He stammers out a greeting, his eyes darting across the rows of staring students. He introduces himself as Kim Geo, wondering if this crazy plan of Hyen's will actually lead him to his friends. Geo is sitting at his new desk, staring at his notebook in absolute disbelief that he is actually in a normal school. His face is pale, and he is so nervous he feels like he might puke right on his desk. The girls behind him are already whispering, pointing out his sharp jawline and calling him cute. The guys in the back row are leaning over, asking where he transferred from and if he is good at sports. Geo feels like there is a giant spotlight shining directly on him, exposing his secrets. We flash back to a few days ago at the apartment. Hyen handed him a brown paper bag, telling him she had planned his first official mission. Jiro opened the bag, expecting a weapon or a tactical tracking device. He pulled out a crisp white school uniform, his jaw dropping in shock. Hyen smiled, telling him his mission was to attend the same high school as Haiji. We see a shot of Geo walking through the school gates, attracting stares from the local students. Back in the present, the loud school bell rings, signaling the start of the first break. The sound of high school students running down the hallway echoes through the room. Geo is sitting stiffly, his hands clenched on his knees. Immediately, a crowd of students surrounds his desk, bombarding him with a barrage of questions. They ask for his Instagram ID, his height, his old school, and even his MBTI personality type. Gio remembers Hyen's warning from the kitchen that he reeks of the lab and needs to learn to blend in. She told him he must act like a normal person at all costs to avoid raising suspicions about being a mutant. But our guy has absolutely zero social skills and is sweating under the pressure. He panics as the questions keep piling up, screaming for Hyen's help in his head. He is convinced his cover is already completely busted on day one. Suddenly, a massive hand slams onto his wooden desk with a loud bang. It is Joe Taegu, wearing his signature keep moving tracksuit and looking incredibly intimidating. He screams at the crowd, telling them they are talking so much, they are freaking the new kid out. He wraps his arm around Gio's shoulder, smoothly making up a detailed cover story on the fly. He tells them Gio transferred from the next town over, doesn't use social media, and used to play Valorant. The other students back off, complaining that Taegu is always ruining the fun. Gio looks up at him, his face filled with pure gratitude for the save. Taegu whispers that Haiji explained the entire situation to him and told him to manage his cover. Gio smiles brightly, realizing Taegu is the most reliable sidekick he could have asked for. Taegu gives a thumbs up, proudly telling Gio to ask him if he ever needs help with school life. But the absolute next second, we cut to Taegu standing in class with a completely pale, defeated face. The teacher is pointing a wooden pointer at the blackboard, lecturing the class about the upcoming exams. The teacher looks at Taegu, asking a simple history question: what bacteria causes the Black Death? Taegu strikes a dramatic pose, confidently shouting COVID with absolute certainty. The teacher immediately whacks him on the head with the pointer, and the entire class erupts into laughter. Gio sits at his desk, watching the comedy show with a polite smile. The teacher sighs, then points his stick at the new transfer student, asking him to try answering. Taegu panic sweats, thinking Gio is a total dummy, who doesn't even know what high school is. But Gio raises his hand, calmly stating, "It's Yersinia pestis." The class goes dead silent, the teacher's jaw dropping in shock. The teacher narrows his eyes, asking what the ancient Indian social hierarchy is called. Gio instantly responds, "It is the caste system." We see a high-speed montage of the teacher throwing increasingly difficult questions at him. He asks about the Crusades, the division of Rome, the French Revolution, and the spark of WWI. Gio answers every single one of them in milliseconds, causing the teacher to push up his glasses in disbelief. The teacher orders the class to give the new genius a round of applause, assuming he was top of his class. Taegu's eyes are practically popping out of his skull as he realizes his mutant friend is a literal academic weapon. We cut to the school courtyard after the lesson ends. Taegu grabs Gio's shoulders, demanding to know how on earth he memorized all of those complex terms. He asks what the Sarajevo incident even is, looking completely lost. Gio looks at him blankly, admitting he doesn't know either. He smiles brightly, saying he has absolutely zero idea what any of those historical events actually mean. Taegu freezes, his brain completely short-circuiting. He asks how he got all of the answers right if he doesn't know the meaning. We see a flashback of little skeleton Gio sitting in a padded cell, surrounded by a mountain of school textbooks. Gio explains that the Hermes Lab researchers let him borrow old textbooks because they wanted to test his cognitive limits. He says he just read them over and over again for 10 years because he had literally nothing else to do. He admits that thinking about making friends while reading those books was the only thing that made him happy. Taegu's tough exterior completely crumbles as tears stream down his face at the absolute tragedy of his friend's study habits. He quickly wipes his tears, pointing at his tracksuit and declaring that the next period is PE class. He promises to show him something way more fun than reading dry textbooks. We cut to the crowded gymnasium, where the PE teacher holds a volleyball. The teacher announces that today's class is a joint dodgeball game between Class 1 and Class 2. The competitive students immediately start trash-talking each other, ready to crush their rivals. Gio leans in, asking Taegu what dodgeball actually is. Taegu explains that it's simple. You throw the ball from your zone and dodge the balls coming at you. Gio nods, wondering if his super strength is going to be an issue in a civilian game. Taegu tells him to just trust his lead and keep his head down. But the absolute second the whistle blows, a high-speed ball blasts Taegu directly in the nose. The referee shouts, "Joe Taegu, out!" as the opposing class laughs hysterically. Gio runs over, asking if he is okay as blood drips from Taegu's nose. Taegu tries to act tough, claiming it was just a tickle, but his nose is completely crooked. He grabs Gio's arm, warning him that he is now the only one left on their team. He whispers that if he is worried about exposing his mutant powers, he should try moving with only half of his strength. He tells him to remember the half rule as the referee orders him off the court. Gio stands alone on the wooden floor, trying to calculate what half strength actually means. We see a mental image of a gorilla scratching its head, representing Gio's complete lack of scale. Across the court, a muscular player from Class 2 winds up a full power throw, targeting the transfer student. The ball streaks through the air like a cannonball, aimed straight at Gio's chest. Gio watches it approach, his perception of time slowing down. He remembers Taegu's advice to use only half of his body's power. He decides to interpret half, literally. He keeps his legs completely locked to the floor, only moving his upper torso. He matrix bends his spine backward at a terrifying 90-degree angle, letting the ball pass inches from his nose. The spectators gasp in shock as he dodges another ball by twisting his neck like a rubber band. He is moving like a literal breakdancer, his legs staying completely stationary, while his upper body performs impossible contortions. The opposing class throws a barrage of balls, but Gio's upper body dodge creates a literal blur of movement. Taegu is screaming from the benches, asking who told him to split his actual body in half. Geo is confused by the feedback, wondering if he did something wrong. Because of the distraction, a heavy dodgeball blasts him directly in the face with a loud smack. The throwing player celebrates his successful hit, thinking he finally downed the monster. Geo goes flying backward, landing flat on his back in the middle of the court. The students run over, asking if the transfer student is dead after taking a hit like that. But Geo sits up, rubbing his nose and laughing hysterically, completely unbothered by the impact. On the benches, a girl tells Hyeji that her new classmate is handsome, athletic, and incredibly unique. Hyeji rests her chin on her hands, smiling softly, as she notes that he is adjusting to normal life surprisingly well. We cut to the evening sky, the clouds painted in bright shades of orange and pink. Geo, Hyeji, and Taegu are walking home together after their first day of school. Taegu throws his hands behind his head, asking how it felt to live like a normal high schooler for once. He tells Geo he can always count on him as his official guide to the outside world. Geo smiles, admitting that school life is completely different from the cages of Hermes' lab. We see a quick memory of them playing soccer and sharing a video game console in class. He says buying snacks at the local convenience store with his own money felt like a dream. He admits that while everything still feels a bit awkward, he had the most fun day of his life today. He looks at his friends, telling them he never would have experienced any of this if he hadn't met them. He gives them a genuine, warm smile, thanking them from the bottom of his heart. Taegu blushes, telling him to stop being sappy because they still have a lot of things to do together. Suddenly, we transition to a dark, concrete warehouse on the outskirts of the city. A massive, suit-clad gangster boss is walking down a hallway, flanked by his muscular enforcers. His lackey reports that the lab hasn't realized they are skimming a portion of the mutant goods yet. The boss grins, saying they just need to keep playing nice for a few more days before they disappear with the cash. But suddenly, the boss stops, spotting a strange figure sitting on the concrete floor in the dark. The man has long black hair tied in a ponytail, wears sunglasses indoors, and is calmly slurping a cup of instant noodles. The gangster boss clicks his tongue, assuming the intruder is just a homeless bum who wandered into his territory. He orders his enforcer to throw him out, but the mysterious man complains that they are spilling his noodle soup. The muscular enforcer grabs his collar, asking if he wants his head cracked open over a cup of noodles. The intruder ignores the threat, calmly pulling a corn dog from his pocket and taking a bite. He adjusts his sunglasses, complaining that it is too hard to see in this dark warehouse. He takes off his sunglasses, revealing a pair of cold, dead eyes. Before the enforcer can even blink, the intruder strikes with lightning speed. The gangster boss steps forward, telling him to get lost before he gets killed. But the enforcer suddenly screams in pure agony, holding up his hand. The boss looks in horror as the enforcer's hand and face are turning into solid, gray, cracked stone. The petrified man collapses to the floor, shattering into several gray pieces. The ponytail man stands up, dusts off his pants, and asks how much cash they just received from Hermes' lab. We see a close-up of a structurally abnormal, pulsing gray heart inside his chest cavity. This is Do-young Kong, the holder of the Heart of Rock, and he has just decided to claim their entire operation as his personal payment. So, our guy is currently playing soccer on the school field. It has been exactly 1 week since he started attending classes. The first mission Hyen gave him was simple: act like a normal high schooler and blend into civilian life. At first, he was absolutely terrified his mutant identity would get exposed during normal activities. But as he spent his days studying, eating, and hanging out with kids his own age, he realized school is actually a pretty nice place. Taegu kicks the ball his way, yelling at him to take the shot. Geo runs up to the ball, still unable to believe he is allowed to play like a normal kid. He attempts a professional-looking chest trap, but his coordination is completely off. He misses the ball entirely, landing flat on his back in front of the goal. The other students start laughing, calling him a certified clown. Geo just sits on the grass and laughs along, completely unbothered. Hyeji walks over, telling them cleaning duty is finished and it is time to go home. They walk out of the school gates together, a normal group of high school friends. On the street, Geo is drooling over a street-side chicken skewer. Taegu sighs, noting that Geo does this dramatic staring routine every time he buys him food. Taegu threatens to eat it himself, but Geo says he wants to save some for Twigum. Hyeji immediately shuts it down, warning him that seasoned street food is toxic for puppies. Suddenly, a low, pathetic groan echoes from a nearby sidewalk. They look down and see a man lying face down on the concrete, looking like a discarded laundry bag. It is Do-young Kong, and his internal thoughts confirm he exhausted his stone energy fighting bikers all night. He spots a public flower bed nearby. He sees the dirt and the white daisies. He reaches out his hand, thinking he can use his mutation to absorb minerals from the soil. But before his hand can touch the dirt, Geo grabs his wrist. Do-young is startled, as our guy tells him eating dirt is a bad idea. Geo speaks from experience, explaining that eating dirt only leads to a severe stomachache. He crouches down and points to the dandelions, suggesting he eat the weeds instead. Taegu and Hyeji stare at him, wondering what kind of childhood Geo actually had to know that. Do-young sits up, waving his hands and claiming there is a massive misunderstanding. He realizes his ponytail and dirty clothes make him look like a homeless person. Suddenly, Do-young's nose twitches. He points at the chicken skewer in Geo's hand, begging for a single bite. Geo looks at the skewer, realizing he hasn't even taken a bite yet. But looking at the hungry guy reminds him of his own skeletal days in the dumpster. He decides to pay it forward, offering the skewer to the stranger. Do-young opens his mouth to an impossible width, looking like a python swallowing a goat. He chomps down, sliding the entire stick clean in one bite. He lets out a massive burp, looking completely satisfied. He collapses onto his back, saying he finally feels like a living human again. Gio is staring at the empty wooden stick, his soul leaving his body. Do-young sits up, saying he always pays back his debts. He unzips his black duffel bag, revealing stacks of 50,000 won bills. He pulls out a thick stack of cash and hands it to Gio. Taegu's eyes pop out of his head as he realizes this guy is loaded. Gio tries to decline, but Taegu tells him to take it because they can buy 30 skewers with this. Suddenly, a gloved hand snatches the duffel bag from Do-young's lap. A motorcycle roars past, the passenger holding the stolen bag of cash. Two pickpockets on a sports bike accelerate down the sidewalk, laughing at their easy target. Hee-ji pulls out her phone, saying she is going to call the police. But when she looks up, the entire street is completely empty. Do-young and Gio are already sprinting down the street at insane speeds. The bikers look back, laughing at the idea of pedestrians chasing a motorcycle. Gio runs alongside Taegu, telling him he needs to chase them alone. Taegu realizes Gio can't use his mutant speed with people watching him. To slow Do-young down, Taegu grabs his shirt, faking a dramatic fall. Do-young's shirt rips with a loud sound, and he yells at the high schooler. With the road clear, Gio begins his chase. His resurrection heart pulses with a deep crimson light. He leans forward, his posture shifting into a predatory sprint. He explodes forward, leaving a trail of dust behind his sneakers. The pickpockets look in their rearview mirror, their smirks vanishing. They can't understand how a kid in a school uniform is keeping pace with an engine. Gio's eyes glow red as he closes the gap to their rear tire. The passenger screams at the driver to go faster, panicking. Gio leaps, performing a high-speed dash across the concrete. The driver swerves into a narrow alleyway, trying to shake him off. The passenger looks back, his visor fogging up with sweat. He realizes this kid is definitely not a normal human. Suddenly, the driver spots a construction site ahead. There is a massive stack of heavy concrete hollow blocks resting on a scaffold. The passenger swings his arm, kicking the support beam as they roar past. The stack of heavy concrete blocks begins to slide. Gio is running too fast to stop, looking up at the falling debris. The concrete blocks crash down in a massive explosion of gray dust. The pickpockets laugh, giving him the middle finger as they disappear around the corner. A thick cloud of dust settles over the pile of rubble. Suddenly, Gio pops his head out of the concrete blocks, looking completely unbothered. He rubs his hair, saying he needs to hurry up before he loses them. But he looks around and realizes he is surrounded by local pedestrians. The civilians are staring at him in shock, wondering how a kid survived a concrete collapse. Meanwhile, the pickpockets arrive at their abandoned warehouse hideout. The driver turns off the engine, sighing in relief that the chase is over. He brags about the profit, but the passenger points a trembling finger ahead. Do-young is standing in the doorway, his hands in his pockets. He steps forward, delivering a casual punch that shatters their motorcycle helmet. The impact sends the bikers flying across the concrete floor. They crash into the metal shelves, screaming in pain. Do-young walks over, asking why they ran so desperately. He takes off his sunglasses, explaining that he can sense their location through ground vibrations anyway. The gang leader pushes himself up, cursing under his breath. Do-young's face starts to calcify, turning into cracked gray stone. He holds out his hand, calmly telling them to return his duffel bag. The leader refuses to back down, calling him a freak. He asks if being a mutant means his belly is wrapped in iron plates. Suddenly, several motorcycle headlights illuminate the dark warehouse. The gang's backup has arrived, roaring their engines. Do-young is surrounded by a circle of armed bikers in their hideout. The leader smirks, saying they are going to capture him and sell him to the lab too. Do-young's expression doesn't even flicker. He crouches down, placing his bare hand against the concrete floor. Deep inside his chest, his gray heart of rock beats with a heavy vibration. The concrete floor begins to crack, glowing with a faint gray energy. The bikers accelerate, trying to ram him before he can trigger his power. But the ground beneath their tires suddenly begins to warp. A massive localized earthquake shakes the entire building. Dozens of sharp stone pillars shoot up from the concrete floor like jagged teeth. The bikers are launched into the air as the pillars smash their vehicles to pieces. Do-young watches the collapse, declaring he is going to bury their entire operation. We cut to Song Hye-in's brightly lit office. Her assistant slides a file onto her desk, saying they found the target. Hye-in looks at the file, reading the name, Technical Team Leader of Hodun Construction. She looks at the photo of Do-young Kong, noting he looks incredibly young. She decides she needs to contact Gio immediately. Her assistant asks if this guy is related to the childhood friends Gio is searching for. Hye-in narrows her eyes, staring at the photo. She says it is impossible to be certain from a simple profile. She gives a small, confident smile. But her intuition tells her this is exactly the friend their guy is looking for. We open with Gio leaning over Hye-in's desk, shouting in excitement. Hye-in tells him to calm down, because nothing is confirmed yet. She scrolls through her phone, asking how his school life has been going. Gio smiles, saying it has been fun, but being there makes him miss his old family even more. He asks her what she meant when she said she might have located one of his friends. Hye-in slides a paper across the desk, saying they are currently investigating a young contractor. Gio picks up the photo of the ponytail man sitting on the dirt. His eyes go wide as he recognizes the face. He screams that this is the homeless guy he met on the street earlier today. He explains that the guy ate his entire chicken skewer after trying to eat dirt in the flower bed. Hye-in is confused by the description, noting his official name is Kang Dong-wook. Gio shakes his head, saying he doesn't recognize that name at all. He stares at the photo, trying to match it to his childhood memories. Suddenly, his face turns pale as he notices a detail detail in the secondary file. He zooms in on a photo of the warehouse crime scene. He sees a close-up of a hand completely transformed into gray cracked stone. He screams that this is Kang Do-hyung, his close classmate from the lab. He asks Hye-in if she is absolutely sure this guy uses a stone-manipulating mutation. Hye-in confirms it, stating he possesses the heart of stone. Geo stands up, demanding to know where he is right now. Hye-in explains that Do-hyung is actively helping the lab, running a construction firm worth billions. She says his company is on their official investigation list for black market transactions. Geo looks devastated, realizing another one of his friends has been corrupted by the lab. Hye-in leans back, offering him a special infiltration mission to investigate the site. She gives a sharp smile, waiting for his decision. Geo slams his hand on the desk, declaring that of course he will do it. We cut to a massive, dusty construction site filled with cranes and excavators. Hye-in's voiceover explains that Geo will be hiding his identity to work as a manual laborer at Hoden Construction. He needs to blend in and investigate what kind of business Do-hyung is running with Hermes' lab. But she warns him that his friends are no longer the innocent children he remembers. She notes that Do-hyung is much more deeply involved in the lab's crimes than Chae-won ever was. She says if he can persuade Do-hyung to turn, they might have a chance to strike. She wants to use his connection to drag the masterminds out of the shadows. Geo looks determined, staring at the concrete structures. But suddenly, a loud scream of agony shatters the serious mood. It is Jo Taegu, carrying a massive wooden crate and crying about the manual labor. Geo jogs behind him, telling him he doesn't have to go this far to help. Taegu tries to act cool, wiping his sweat and giving a thumbs up. He says infiltrating a corrupt corporate firm is basically a high-stakes spy mission. Geo smiles, thanking him for the support. Taegu asks when they are going to see his friend, but Geo admits he doesn't know where the boss actually works. Taegu screams in frustration, asking if his entire plan was to just wander around a giant construction yard. Geo shrugs, wondering if that is a bad approach. Taegu points to a group of older workers sitting in the shade, saying they should ask them. He smirks, claiming he knows exactly how to handle grumpy old-timers by kissing their boots. But the second they approach, the senior worker glares at them, calling them useless brats who are trying to slack off. He crushes his juice box, telling them to use their brains and figure things out themselves. He launches into a classic rant about how kids these days are the reason the country is going to hell. He points a dirty finger at Geo, calling him a pretty boy gigolo who will cause an accident. He points to a massive wall of heavy cement bags, ordering them to move all of them within an hour. Geo and Taegu nod politely, accepting the task. The senior worker walks away, complaining about the company hiring high schoolers. Taegu grumbles that they need to finish the task if they want to get any information out of them. He looks at the towering pile of cement, wondering how two kids can move this in 60 minutes. Geo remembers that running with heavy weights gets them yelled at, so he decides to just carry more weight and walk slowly. Taegu screams as Geo easily lifts 8 massive bags of cement, weighing 160 kilograms. The senior workers look back, their eyes wide with disbelief. Geo starts moving, carrying the mountain of cement on his shoulders. He insists he is not running, he is just speed walking. He moves like a literal freight train, dust flying from his boots. The workers stare in pure horror, wondering what kind of mutant strength they just hired. In less than 10 minutes, the entire pile of cement is perfectly stacked on the other side. Taegu strikes a proud pose, asking what their next task is. The senior worker is trembling, holding his hands out in confusion. He points to another pile on the far side, and Geo immediately sprints off to grab it. He carries another 8 bags, shouting a polite, "Excuse me, coming through," as he passes. The workers can only scream in sheer bewilderment. Within half an hour, both sides of the yard are completely cleared of materials. Geo smiles brightly, his face sparkling, as he asks what else he can help with. The old workers look at each other, realizing these kids have infinite energy to spare. We see a montage of Geo and Taegu pouring concrete, carrying heavy steel beams, and hammering bolts. Taegu is enjoying the praise, proudly presenting his toolbox. Geo carries 3 massive wooden pillars single-handedly, leaving the site crew speechless. The senior worker admits these kids are actually pretty tough and diligent. He says if all youngsters were like them, the construction industry would have no issues. Later, they are working on overhead electrical cables. Suddenly, a massive high-voltage cable snaps from its reel, whipping down towards a worker on the ground. The old worker frozen in fear as the live wire streaks toward his face. Geo dives, catching the thick black cable with both hands to shield the worker. The old worker screams for him to drop it, realizing the line is live. A massive blue electrical current courses through Geo's body, briefly illuminating his bare skeleton. Another worker sprints to the main breaker, slamming the emergency switch down. The electricity stops, and Geo collapses onto the dirt, smoke rising from his skin. Taegu and the workers run over, panicking and asking if he was electrocuted. But Geo sits up, rubbing his head and laughing happily. He realizes the current wasn't strong enough to burn his flesh, so his secret is still safe. The workers let out a collective sigh of relief, praising his wildcat reflexes. They pat his shoulders, saying he looks like he could wrestle a cow to the ground. Geo smiles, but notes to himself that this site is far more dangerous than he anticipated. He realizes why the senior workers are always so stressed and angry. Taegu whispers that the workers seem to trust them now, so they should ask about Do-hyung's firm. He says asking directly might raise suspicions, so they need a roundabout approach. Taegu steps up, asking the old worker if there is a crew here with lots of guys their age. The worker points to the crew in the distance, saying they are all around 40. The other workers laugh, joking that 40 is basically their age group. Taegu screams that he is only 17, but Geo quickly covers his mouth to silence him. Gio laughs it off, saying they are looking for the Hodon construction crew. He asks where they can find their headquarters on this massive site. The worker's expression turns serious, saying that crew is insanely tough and covered in money. He says their work is twice as rough, but they get paid fortunes. Suddenly, he points towards the entrance, saying they just arrived. A sleek, white luxury van screeches to a halt nearby. Gio and Taegu watch as the doors slide open, their jaws dropping in shock. A group of young, muscular workers steps out of the vehicle. But instead of standard overalls, they are wearing expensive designer brands like Louis Vuitton and Gucci. Taegu is speechless, wondering how much money these construction workers are actually making. A heavy boot steps out of the front passenger seat. A man with a ponytail and round sunglasses steps into the sunlight. It is Do-young Kong, looking like a corporate kingpin in his black jacket. He lowers his sunglasses, immediately recognizing the kid in the dusty PE tracksuit. He walks over, asking if he is the kid who gave him the chicken skewer earlier today. He gets close, staring intently at Gio's face. We see a childhood memory of the two of them sitting in the lab, holding concrete stones. Gio smiles warmly, his gray eyes shining with recognition. He looks at his childhood friend, stating that it has been over 10 years since they first met. Do-young Kong leans in, sliding his sunglasses down just enough to lock eyes with Gio. He asks if they have met before. And just like that, we get a quick mental flash of the good old days in the lab, where two test subjects in hospital gowns were casually bonding over solid blocks of concrete. Gio flashes a bright, innocent smile, confirming that they definitely go back. Do-young drops his serious face instantly, laughing about how Gio is the same kid who bought him those chicken skewers back in the day, calling it a crazy coincidence. But Gio is not here to play games. He deadpans, telling him it is not a coincidence at all, and that he specifically came to find him because he knew he worked here. Do-young's smile fades slightly as he raises his glasses back up, processing the fact that our guy tracked him down on purpose. Gio looks him dead in the eye and declares he is joining his company to figure out exactly how Do-young is connected to the lab. No matter if Do-young is being blackmailed or is actively cooperating with those monsters, Gio is determined to get to the bottom of it. He remembers their childhood, back when they promised they would escape and be normal friends again. And Gio is fully prepared to sever whatever toxic leash the lab has on his old buddy. Cut back to the present reality, where Do-young is lounging on a leather sofa inside the shady warehouse office, looking like a mob boss on a budget. He asks if Gio seriously wants to join his crew just for that. Sitcom rules are now in full effect as Taegu and Gio sit side by side on the opposite couch, looking like two kids who got sent to the principal's office. Taegu is sweating bullets because he still thinks they are dealing with a regular construction mafia. Do-young smiles, telling Gio that while he appreciates the sentiment, hiring him is going to be a hard pass, so they should just go home. Gio does not even flinch. He matches Do-young's smirk, telling him he knew he would say that because Do-young is a man of principles, but eventually he will have no choice. He leans forward, telling Do-young that he is going to need him whether he likes it or not. Do-young scoff laughs, asking why on earth a billionaire construction president would need a random high school kid. Gio simply tells him that he will show him right now. The entire room of gangster enforcers looks on, completely baffled, wondering what this puny kid is planning to pull in a room full of grown men. Do-young sighs, picking up a paper cup from the table, telling Gio to stop wasting his time and get lost before things get ugly. Suddenly, Gio slides a stack of folders across the glass table, and then the laws of physics are politely asked to leave the room. Gio turns into an absolute blur, moving around the office at high speed. Taegu freaks out, yelling at Gio to stop touching things randomly because they are already on thin ice. The other gangsters are equally confused, watching this kid speedrun interior design right in front of their eyes. Gio literally lifts a massive metal cabinet that easily weighs several hundred pounds, sliding it across the floor with zero effort. He stops, dusts off his hands, and calmly says he is all done. We get a bird's eye view of the office, which has been rearranged into a perfectly optimized workspace. The gangsters are absolutely fuming, yelling that this is complete nonsense and ordering the guards to drag this crazy kid out. But Do-young holds up a hand, his curiosity piqued. He stares at the new layout and asks Gio to explain exactly how this is efficient. Gio starts breaking down the ergonomics like a certified corporate consultant. First, since Do-young is right-handed, his coffee cup should be placed on the right. Second, the documents on the table are now organized chronologically by the date they were received, so he does not have to dig through them. The pen holder is placed exactly at arm's reach, without blocking his natural arm movement. Do-young points toward the giant metal locker, asking why Gio went through the trouble of dragging that heavy thing to the corner. Gio points out that the locker was previously covering the window, a window that offers a direct, unobstructed view of the entire active construction site below. The foreman steps forward, red-faced, yelling that they arranged things their own way and did not need some punk telling them how to run an office. Gio looks him dead in the eye and says that if they actually cared about efficiency, the near-fatal accident on the site earlier today would have never happened. He explains that true efficiency is not just about speed. It is about designing a workflow where anyone can spot a safety hazard instantly and react before someone gets hurt. The foreman's jaw drops. He stammers, completely caught off guard, while the rest of the thugs murmur in confusion about an accident. Do-young's eyes narrow behind his sunglasses. He realizes his own management has been keeping him in the dark. He points a finger at the sweating foreman, asking him if he knew about this accident or not. The foreman starts sweating buckets, stammering that he has not received an official written report yet, so he did not know. Do-young unloads on him, yelling that he should have known just by looking at the scattered materials and delayed workflow, calling him a completely incompetent manager. Then, Do-young turns around and points his finger directly at Geo. Geo stands there blankly, wondering if he is about to get blasted. Do-young's face slowly twists into a wide, menacing grin, and then he bursts out laughing hysterically, praising Geo for thoroughly exposing a massive blind spot that even he had overlooked. He admits that he needs to reevaluate his entire safety protocol from scratch. And we get another quick childhood flashback, where a young Do-young is pushing a heavy metal bar in the lab hospital, explaining to Skeleton Geo that widening the pathways keeps the other kids from tripping and getting hurt. Back then, Skeleton Geo's mind was completely blown by this revolutionary concept of not letting people get hurt, begging Do-young to teach him more. Young Do-young looked away, blushing slightly, acting like a classic tsundere as he agreed to teach him. Cut back to the present, where Do-young points at Geo and tells him he is hired starting today, though he will have to start as a lowly intern. Do-young waves dismissively as he walks out, telling Geo to learn the ropes from the guys, and that they will sign the contract once he gets back. Geo and Taegu bow deeply, thanking him, while Taegu whispers in absolute awe that Geo somehow managed to charm the boss all by himself. Geo smiles, thinking that his plan is working perfectly, and he is one step closer to uncovering Do-young's secret operations. But as they stand up, the camera zooms in on Taegu's tense face. He notices something is very wrong. The local gangster thugs are standing in the shadows, smoking cigarettes and looking like they want to commit a felony. The foreman is practically vibrating with rage, calling Geo an arrogant little brat who needs to be put in his place. Taegu looks at the hostile crowd and swallows hard, realizing they just made some very dangerous enemies. 1 hour later, we see the actual construction site, where workers are digging trenches and laying massive steel pipes. Taegu and Geo are back to doing manual labor, carrying heavy corrugated pipes on their shoulders. Taegu tries to stay positive, saying that getting close to the boss is still a massive win. Suddenly, a beefy site manager kicks the pipe right out of Geo's hands, screaming at them for laying it down like that. He gets right in Geo's face, veins popping on his forehead, yelling that it is supposed to be laid down the exact opposite way. Geo looks completely bewildered, pointing out that they were literally just following the exact instructions they were given. The manager barks at him to stop talking back and flip the entire run of pipes immediately. Another hour passes, and we see Taegu collapsed on the dirt, gasping for air, having spent the last 60 minutes relaying heavy steel. And on cue, the exact same manager walks up and kicks another pipe, screaming at them for laying the drainage pipe already. Taegu's face goes completely pale as his brain short circuits. The manager points an angry finger, yelling that they have not even leveled the slope yet, asking if they have actual rocks in their heads. Taegu snaps, standing up and arguing that the manager literally told them to lay the pipe first just an hour ago. The manager grabs Taegu by his shirt collar, pulling him close and snarling that if he has a problem with how things are run around here, he can pack his bags and get lost. He shoves Taegu to the ground, spitting on the dirt, giving them exactly 1 hour to pull all the pipes back out. Taegu grits his teeth, staring at the dirt, his pride taking a massive hit. The manager turns away with a smug, disgusting smirk on his face. Taegu looks over and sees the rest of the site crew standing around, drinking sodas and snickering at them, confirming that this is a coordinated bullying campaign. Taegu's inner gamer rage finally erupts, his aura turning into a literal roaring grizzly bear as he fumes over being treated like a pushover. But instead of throwing a punch, he turns to Geo and says he needs to go use the restroom. Geo looks at him, completely oblivious, asking if he is mad. Taegu caplees, saying he just needs to take a massive dump. Taegu struts off, thinking to himself that a real bro is about to handle this business. He tracks the laughing voices of the managers back to their private break room. Inside, the managers are sitting around a table, laughing about how stupid Geo's efficiency speech was. They are currently boiling a pot of ramen, casually discussing how they already have too many mouths to feed and have zero intention of sharing their financial cut with some high school punk. The head manager takes a drag of his cigarette, smirk explaining that as long as they keep making life a living hell for the kids and blaming all on-site mistakes on them, they will quit in no time. The door is slammed open. Taegu screams, his fist meeting the wooden door frame with a loud crack. He barks at them, asking if they honestly thought he would just sit around and take their garbage, declaring he is about to beat the brakes off every single one of them. The managers jump up in surprise, completely baffled by how this kid managed to sneak up on them without making a single sound. Taegu lunges forward, grabbing the lead manager by his shirt, asking him what he is going to do about it now that his little scheme has been exposed. The manager grits his teeth, looking slightly intimidated by Taegu's size, muttering that he cannot just beat up a kid on the clock. Taegu cocks back his fist, yelling that the manager is the one who started this fight anyway. Suddenly, another worker steps between them, trying to play peacemaker, telling them to calm down and stop acting crazy. The manager brushes him off, adjusting his collar, sneering at Taegu that he does not even know how to do basic labor, and that if he got this job through his friend's charity, he should shut up and get back to work. He adds that Geo is at least smart, whereas Taegu is completely useless, which makes Taegu's eye twitch with absolute fury. Taegu yells that he is way stronger than any of these lazy, out-of-shape, middle-aged men. The manager's face darkens, a predatory grin spreading across his face as he asks Taegu if he thinks he is strong. He slams his beefy elbow onto the wooden table, challenging Taegu to a classic round of arm wrestling. He smugly promises promises that if Taegu wins, they will acknowledge him and never mess with them again. Taegu stares at the hand, his brain trying to calculate the odds. Then, his inner high school bully ego takes over. He smirks, thinking this is incredibly childish, and bragging to himself that he has literally never lost a single arm wrestling match in his entire high school career. He grabs the manager's hand, thinking he is about to wipe that smug grin off his face. The match starts, and we get a massive shockwave as their hands lock in a high-speed struggle. Taegu's face instantly goes red, his veins bulging as he struggles to hold his ground, realizing the manager's grip is like a vice. His hand starts shaking violently, slowly being pressed down toward the table. He looks up at the manager's face, realizing this man possesses terrifying, freakish strength. Taegu's hand is slammed onto the wood. The manager smiles, telling them they lost, so both of them need to pack their trash and get out. Taegu protests, but the foreman steps forward, telling him that rules are rules, and since he lost, they both need to get lost. Taegu realizes, with horror, that this entire challenge was just a trap to give them a valid excuse to fire them. He looks down at his hand, which is trembling uncontrollably, his capillaries literally bursting as the skin turns a nasty shade of purple. The manager grabs Taegu's injured hand again, squeezing it slowly, making Taegu scream in absolute agony. He mockingly suggests that they should keep playing, since it would be a shame to end the fun so quickly. Taegu cries out, apologizing and begging them to stop, saying he will leave quietly. But then he realizes something. He stammers that while he is fine with leaving, he does not think his friend Gio will agree to it. The manager stops, asking if he means that little pretty boy who was carrying pipes earlier. He tells Taegu to go ahead and persuade his friend to join the game then. Taegu's internal voice is screaming in absolute terror. We get a quick mental montage of Gio effortlessly destroying street gangs, shattering concrete walls, and leaving trails of destruction in his wake. Taegu knows that if Gio walks into this room, these gangsters are not going to fire them. They are going to get sent to the intensive care unit in one punch. Taegu literally begs the manager to just beat him up instead, crying that they should break his own stubbornness and leave Gio out of this. The manager scoff laughs, asking why he should care, squeezing Taegu's hand even harder. He grins, saying that Taegu will leave on his own anyway, once his hand is completely crushed. He starts pressing down with bone-snapping force, the table creaking under the pressure as Taegu screams in pure agony. The manager laughs, telling him to clench his fist tight or prepare to get his bones turned to dust. Taegu is crying, screaming out for his mother and father like a kid who lost his map in a supermarket. He screams for Gio to save him. And suddenly, a pale, slender hand reaches out from the shadows, clamping onto the manager's wrist like a steel cuff. The entire room goes dead silent. The managers freeze, looking at the door. Gio is standing there, his face completely shadowed, his eyes cold and empty. Taegu looks up, tears streaming down his face, gasping Gio's name like he just saw an angel. Gio looks down at the manager's hand, his voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. He says that the rules of arm wrestling are a bit different where he comes from. He tells the manager to do it with him instead. Gio repeats his offer, his grip on the manager's wrist tightening, his eyes flashing with a cold, predatory light. The manager looks up, slightly annoyed but mostly amused by this skinny kid trying to act tough. We get a stylized splash page of young Do-young sitting in the lab, a reminder that the kid who learned efficiency to save his friends is now the guy standing in this room. The other gangster enforcers in the room exchange amused looks, holding their cigarettes and sodas. And then they burst into hysterical laughter, calling Gio a complete lunatic for volunteering to get his hand shattered. Taegu is still crying on the floor, pointing at his swollen, purple hand, trying to warn Gio that these guys are not playing around. The foreman smirk steps forward, saying that their little game has its own set of rules, and warning Gio that if he gets hurt, he is paying his own medical bills. The manager sits back down, cracking his knuckles, telling Gio he was going to go easy on them out of pity. But now, the kid has officially lost his talking privileges. He reaches his hand out, warning Gio that his arm might get completely wrecked. Gio calmly locks hands with him. The manager's forearm is twice the size of Gio's, veins bulging like tree roots. The manager thinks to himself that this brat has zero situational awareness and is about to get a painful reality check. He decides he is going to screw up Gio's hand so badly he will never forget it, and then he will do the same to Taegu. He counts down, promising to finish this match in under a single second. He screams "Go!" and slams his hand down with all his strength, expecting the satisfying sound of Gio's knuckles hitting the wood. Instead, we get a sickening, wet cracking sound. The manager's face goes completely blank as a wave of pure agony hits his brain. Gio does not even look at him. His hand has not moved a single millimeter. He calmly tells the manager to reset his grip. And then, Gio slams his hand down. The solid wooden table literally explodes into splinters, sending wood chunks and dust flying across the room. The manager is thrown backward, clutching his arm, which is bent at a horrific, unnatural angle, screaming like a dying animal. The other gangsters freeze, their eyes wide as saucers, staring at their top enforcer, who is currently writhing in the dirt with a shattered arm. They snap out of their shock and draw their weapons, one grab lifting a heavy wooden club, another charging forward with bare fists, screaming at Gio. Gio stands his ground, the shadows covering his eyes as the first gangster swings. Gio dodges the swing effortlessly and counters with a swift, brutal strike to the second gangster's jaw, sending teeth and blood flying. He follows up with a spin kick that launches two grown men across the room, like Team Rocket. The last gangster swings the heavy wooden club at Gio's head, calling him a complete psycho. Gio tilts his head slightly, the wind from the swing ruffling his black hair, his face completely expressionless. He catches the swing with his bare hand and delivers a devastating straight punch directly to the gangster's nose. The impact literally flattens the man's face, sending him crashing onto the concrete floor in a pool of his own blood. The foreman is trembling in the corner, holding his hands up as the remaining thugs back away in absolute terror. The foreman screams that this kid is not human and orders everyone to jump him at once. The remaining crowd of enforcers raises their weapons, preparing to mob him. Suddenly, a cold, authoritative voice echoes from the doorway, telling them to stop. The gangsters freeze mid-swing, looking back in surprise. The foreman and the workers look like they just saw a ghost. Gio turns his head slowly, his crimson eye glow fading back to gray. Do-young is standing at the door, his hands in his pockets, his eyes glowing with a terrifying, white-hot fury as he calls them all idiots. He walks into the room, asking them what on earth they think they are doing on his site. The foreman starts stammering, waving his hands, trying to explain that the kids started it. Do-young does not even listen. He blitzes forward, grabbing the foreman by his hair and slamming his face directly into the wooden wall. The wood cracks under the impact. Do-young growls, telling the foreman that his job was to train the new recruits properly, not to torment them like low-life bullies. Taegu is watching this, sweating bullets, thinking to himself that if this situation escalates any further, Gio is going to get fired on his very first day. Taegu raises his hand, capping that it was all just a friendly, high-stakes arm wrestling match and nothing serious. But Gio is not about to let these trash-tier bullies off the hook. He points a finger at the groaning manager on the floor, telling Do-young that this bastard was the one who started bullying his friend first. Do-young sighs, letting go of the foreman, looking down at the bloody mess. He says Gio does not need to explain. But then, Do-young turns to Gio, his tone turning cold. He points out that while the foreman's crew are indeed pathetic, Gio went way too far. He points to the bodies on the floor, noting that one guy has a shattered arm, and the other's nose has been reduced to mush. Taegu steps in, holding up his swollen, bruised hand, arguing that the manager did the exact same thing to him. Gio looks at his hand, then back to Do-young, calmly stating that he simply paid them back in full, so they would never think about trying it again. Do-young's eyes narrow behind his sunglasses, his voice dropping to a dangerous level as he asks Gio if he is actively begging to get his face rearranged. He steps closer, towering over Gio, the tension in the room reaching a boiling point. Gio does not back down. He looks up and says he does not want to get hit. But nothing changes if you just stay quiet and let people walk over you. Do-young's eye widens behind his lens, and those exact words trigger a deep, buried memory of a dark, sterile lab room, where a young, human-looking Do-young was huddled in a corner, crying that nothing changes no matter what they say. And back then, a half-fleshed skeleton Gio stood over him, pointing a finger and screaming that nothing changes if they stay quiet. Young Gio told him that he can easily endure the torture when it is just him, but he will never, ever tolerate seeing his friends get hurt. Do-young stares at Gio, realizing that this kid is the exact same self-sacrificing idiot from his childhood. He lets out a soft sigh, his anger seemingly evaporating. Taegu is hanging his head, whispering to Gio that they are definitely done for and are about to get fired. Do-young's smirk asks who said anything about firing them, asking if they seriously think they can cause a massive mess like this and just run off. Taegu looks up, completely baffled, asking if they are actually keeping their jobs. Do-young explains that since Gio broke the manager's arm, the guy is going to be stuck in a hospital bed for a long time, which means they are down a key worker. The foreman tries to protest, saying his other men can easily handle the workload. Do-young snaps at him to shut up, his aura turning incredibly oppressive, warning him that he is already holding back his temper. Gio looks at Do-young, asking what kind of job the manager was actually doing. Do-young turns his back, telling Gio he does not need to know that yet, ordering him to show up at the site at 500 a.m. tomorrow morning with no questions asked, promising to personally train him. The next morning, at exactly 500 a.m., the sun is not even up yet, as Gio stands alone, in the middle of the massive, quiet construction site. He thinks to himself that calling him out this early must mean the job is highly secretive, and that it might lead him directly to Hodan's illegal lab connection. Do-young steps out of the shadows, a cigarette dangling from his mouth, calmly noting that Gio actually showed up on time. He tells Gio to stay close, because they are going pretty far in. Do-young walks over to a rusty control panel on a temporary wooden wall, pressing a red button. A heavy metal freight elevator creaks to life, and Gio watches in surprise as they begin sinking deep underground. Gio looks down through the metal mesh, noting that the shaft is sinking so deep into the darkness that he cannot even see the bottom, wondering what kind of secret facility Do-young is hiding down here. Do-young glances over, smirk asking if our brave little high schooler is finally getting nervous. He mockingly notes that Gio was brave enough to mouth off to him yesterday, but is now suddenly acting scared. Gio keeps his eyes forward, calmly stating that he only did what he did because he cannot stand seeing his friends get hurt. Do-young looks away, his expression softening slightly as he mutters that he does not hate that kind of attitude. But then, he turns back to Gio, pointing a sharp finger right at his nose. His tone turns dead serious, warning Gio that if he pulls any of his reckless stunts down here, he will personally kill him. The elevator finally stops with a loud metallic clang, the heavy gates sliding open to reveal a massive, dimly lit concrete vault. Do-young steps out, telling Gio they have arrived. Gio's jaw literally drops as he looks at the scale of the facility. Beneath the regular muddy construction site lies a high-tech, massive underground tunnel. The concrete tunnel stretches so far into the darkness that the end is completely invisible, lined with hundreds of stacked black industrial drums. Gio's mind is racing, wondering what kind of massive operation Do-young is running with the lab that requires an underground highway of this scale. Do-young walks past the stacks, warning Gio that everything he sees down here is a strictly classified company secret. He adds that the work itself is very simple. He points to a massive pile of black steel drums, instructing Gio to move all of them to the marked locations across the tunnel. Gio tilts his head, asking what exactly is inside these drums. Do-young cuts him off instantly, saying no questions. He grins, reminding Gio that he is the one who put his manager in the hospital, so he has no right to complain, promising to pay him a mountain of cash once the job is done. Do-young waves as he heads back to the elevator, telling Gio to get to work. Gio watches the elevator doors close, leaving him alone in the quiet tunnel. Gio stands in the silence, thinking about how strange it is to see Do-young again in person, and how he almost let his real identity slip yesterday. He realizes he needs to gather concrete evidence of Do-young's illegal dealings with the lab as fast as possible before he can reveal who he really is. He turns toward the massive mountain of black drums, staring at them curiously, wondering what kind of hazardous cargo they are smuggling. He approaches one of the drums, noting that the metal lids are sealed incredibly tight, clearly not meant to be opened by regular workers. But Gio is not a regular worker. His eyes flash a menacing, crimson red as he digs his fingers into the solid steel lid like it is cardboard. With a loud pop, he rips the heavy metal lid clean off. He leans over to look inside, but the second the air hits the container, Gio's face goes completely pale. A thick, bubbling green liquid is swirling inside the drum, releasing a faint, sweet, chemical vapor. Gio's eyes widen as he recognizes the distinct, metallic smell. He grits his teeth, realizing he needs to confirm his suspicion. Without hesitation, he plunges his entire bare hand directly into the glowing green liquid. He knows that his mutated heart will process the chemical if it enters his bloodstream, allowing him to identify the exact compound instantly. The second the liquid touches his skin, a wave of horrific pain jolts through his body. We get a terrifying, bloody flashback of a skeletal young Gio chained to a lab table, screaming as scientists pour that exact same green acid over his body to test his regeneration limits. Gio pulls his hand back out of the drum, splashing the green liquid across the concrete floor. He looks down at his arm, and we see a truly horrific sight. The flesh, muscle, and skin have been completely melted away, leaving only his raw, gleaming white skeletal hand and arm bones exposed. Gio stares at his bare bones, his teeth gritted in pure rage. He mutters that there is no doubt about it. This is the exact same synthetic poison the lab used to torture him for years. He looks down the dark, seemingly endless tunnel, realizing that Do-young is actively smuggling weapons-grade mutant poison on a massive scale. He decides he needs to contact Hyen immediately to raid this place, but cut back to a sleek, high-tech control room above ground, where a security monitor is displaying a crystal-clear, high-definition feed of Gio looking at his melted arm. And watching that monitor is Do-young. He sits on his sofa, his hands locked together, and we see his fingers slowly calcifying into solid, cracked gray stone. He smirks, noting that his intuition was spot on, and that he knew this kid was not some ordinary high schooler. Do-young's eyes gleam with a predatory light behind his sunglasses as he whispers that Gio is a heart mutant. He wonders if Gio is an undercover police agent, or perhaps a spy from a rival syndicate targeting his chemical supply. We get a detailed, anatomical view of Do-young's chest, where his mutated stone heart is pulsing with massive, gray shockwaves. Do-young speaks into his radio, instructing his entire army of enforcers, now armed to the teeth, with baseball bats, steel pipes, and tactical knives, to prepare for a raid. He confirms Gio's ability is high-speed regeneration. He orders his men to go down there and show zero mercy, stab him, smash him, and tear him apart until they find the absolute limit of his healing factor. Do-young looks at the screen, a chilling, stone-cold smile on his face, as he says he will be the one to personally deliver the final blow. Do-young watches the security feed in absolute silence. Gio is frantically waving his phone around, trying to find a signal. Do-young's mind is racing. He realizes Gio was never just some naive kid. He played the idiot, rearranged the office, and got close to the chest entirely on purpose. It was a calculated infiltration, and now the entire construction mob is waiting at the elevator doors. They step out into the underground tunnel, armed with metal pipes and bats. The lead enforcer steps forward, spinning a butterfly knife. Gio looks up, completely caught off guard. They tell him his little sneaking mission is officially over. They call him a mutant freak. They charge. Geo ducks, sweeps their legs, and Do-young watches the first wave hit the concrete. Geo cracks his neck, preparing for a long night. He throws a straight punch, shattering the lead guy's nose, and pivots instantly to launch another enforcer into the scaffolding. But 3 men leap onto his back, pinning his arms to his sides. A blonde thug swings a baseball bat, cracking it directly across Geo's face. The wood splintering is the only sound in the tunnel. Geo does not even blink. Upstairs, Do-young watches Geo's head snap back into place. He wants to see what this kid is actually made of. The mob wraps heavy industrial chains around Geo's neck, pulling with everything they have. They pile on top of him, but Geo slowly starts standing back up. One of the thugs pulls out a tactical blade, plunging it straight through Geo's forearm. Blood sprays across the concrete floor. The thug smiles, thinking he just severed a nerve. Then, he looks at Geo's face. Our guy is staring back with completely dead, empty eyes. The absolute lack of pain is terrifying. Geo lets his hand drop to the floor. Deep inside his chest, his crimson heart begins to thud. The spilled blood on the concrete starts flowing backward. Do-young's jaw drops as he watches the monitors. The puddle is literally being vacuumed into Geo's skin. This is not normal. The flesh on Geo's arm rapidly knits itself back together, closing the wound in a fraction of a second. Do-young has never seen a regeneration factor this fast. And then, Geo's physical stats multiply. He flexes, snapping the heavy iron chains like cheap plastic, and the shockwave flings the entire mob backward. He blitzes, his fist connecting with a guard's ribs, sending 3 men flying through the air. The blonde enforcer tries to swing again, but Geo is already inside his guard, delivering a liver blow, coughing up blood. Done. Geo slides under a pipe swing, drops both palms to the floor, and digs his fingers deep into the solid concrete. He literally rips up a massive slab of the floor, lifting it over his head like a prop, and hurls it. The guards scream. The impact shatters the slab into a million pieces, filling the entire tunnel with thick dust. The surviving guards are coughing, completely disoriented. Through the smoke, a gray, petrified hand reaches out. Do-young Kong has finally entered the chat. He brushes the debris off his shoulder. He asks Geo what kind of heart he is carrying. He admits he has never seen healing at this tier. It is easily Class A potential. And yet, his mind keeps drifting to a ghost. Only one kid he knew had a regeneration heart, but that kid was weak, fragile, and could barely heal a cut in a day. And most importantly, that kid died in a massive explosion years ago. Do-young cracks his stone fingers. He decides to stop thinking. He lunges. Geo realizes he cannot reveal his identity yet. He has to play defense. Do-young throws a heavy, calcified left hook, but Geo leans back, letting the wind pass his face. Do-young warns him that regeneration means nothing, because if his fist connects, there will not be enough of Geo left to heal. He slams his palm into the concrete, sprouting massive stone pillars from the floor. Geo is forced back, his spine hitting the vault wall. Do-young charges his right fist, the gray stone expanding, turning his arm into a literal wrecking ball. He demands to know who sent Geo. Suddenly, the earth rises around Geo's feet, locking his boots in solid rock. He is completely stuck. Do-young swings. The stone fist obliterates the wall. The shockwave throws dust past the remaining guards. They look on in absolute awe. Do-young stands in the crater. Geo's upper torso is completely gone, a massive fountain of blood painting the ceiling. The headless body stands frozen for a split second. The guards look like they are about to throw up. They think it is over, but then the blood stops falling. It starts swirling back toward the neck. Do-young flinches. Flesh, bone, and eyes are rapidly weaving themselves out of thin air. Geo's head is fully formed before the blood even hits the floor. Geo does not even wait for his skin to finish knitting. He swings a counterattack, his fist meeting Do-young's stone-clad chest, and the impact rattles the entire concrete vault. Do-young slides back 10 feet, his boots leaving black marks on the floor. Geo stands there, his shirt completely stained red. Do-young smirks, noting that regular human fists cannot break his rock skin. And indeed, Geo's arm is completely shattered, hanging limp like a rag doll. But Do-young's smile fades. The bones in Geo's arm are already popping back into place. This is getting ridiculous. The image of that little skeleton kid from the lab keeps flashing in his mind. He remembers how it used to take Geo hours to heal a finger, but the sheer resilience is identical. Do-young shakes his head, trying to snap out of it. He decides this mutant must be a government agent or a high-ranking spy. He slams his hands down. A massive stone spike erupts, launching Geo into the air. Geo lands on top of the spike, balancing perfectly. He drops down, his fist aimed directly at Do-young's face. The punch cracks Do-young's signature sunglasses. The glasses shatter, revealing a layer of cracked stone armor protecting his face. Do-young sneers, saying that once he hands him over to Hermes' lab, they will easily extract his identity. Geo's broken fingers snap back into place with a wet click. His eyes darken as he asks if Do-young has been kidnapping and selling their kind to the lab. Do-young does not deny it. He says money is the only thing that matters in this world. Geo's aura flares with crimson light. He throws a punch, asking Do-young if he ever thinks about the sins he committed. Do-young blocks, muttering that morality is a luxury for the weak. He plans to sell Geo for billions. Geo tells him it is time to beat some sense into him. He holds his palm out. Every drop of spilled blood from the fallen mob is drawn into his body. His muscles swell, veins pulsing with high-octane energy. Do-young stands firm, confident in his defense. He says human bones cannot shatter geological structures. Geo unleashes a barrage of rapid-fire punches, each strike splintering his own hands, but they regenerate before the next punch even lands. He is using his healing factor to bypass physical limits. The sheer volume of strikes is like an industrial drill. Do-young's eyes widen. A sharp crack appears on his stone collarbone. Geo tells him he can do this all day. Do-young grits his teeth, his armor chipping away. He tries to swipe, but Geo's speed has doubled. The pressure is overwhelming. Do-young realizes that once a crack appears in stone, it only keeps growing. Geo delivers a dual palm strike, shattering the chest plate completely. He grabs Do-young's collar and slams him into the floor. Do-young slides back, coughing. He looks at Geo, who is standing calmly. The kid is a complete monster. Geo's hands are fully healed, not a single scratch remaining. Do-young reaches into the rubble, grabbing a handful of gravel. He shoves the rocks directly into his mouth, chewing them like candy. Geo watches, completely bewildered by this absolute goblin behavior. Do-young's stone heart pulses with blinding red light. He tells the remaining guards to run, if they want to live. The thugs do not need to be told twice. His system analyzes the mineral content. Silicon dioxide 62%. He slams his palm into the earth. A periodic ground vibration of 7.2 Hz ripples through the tunnel. The concrete floor begins to liquefy. Two massive, jagged boulders rise from the floor, towering over Geo. Geo looks up at the ceiling-high structures. If those slam together, he will be completely flattened. He tries to run, but Do-young clamps his hands together. The two massive boulders crash into each other, sandwiching Geo in the middle. The impact shakes the entire underground facility. Smuggling drums are tossed around like tin cans. The dust cloud is thick enough to choke a horse. Do-young drops to one knee, breathing heavily. He coughs up a pool of blood onto the concrete. He thinks to himself that using his ultimate technique was a waste of resources. He wanted to capture him alive, but there is no way anyone survives that. Through the dust, a silhouette begins to rise. Do-young's eyes go completely still. Standing in the rubble is a bare, ivory-white skeleton, dripping with dark blood. Do-young smirks eyes, thinking the kid's ability has finally hit its limit. He admits he got goosebumps for a second, but a dead skeleton is still a dead skeleton. At least he can still sell the bones to the lab. Suddenly, the skeletal arm raises. The skeleton grips the ground, pulling itself forward. Do-young's heart skips a beat, and then, the blood pooling in the tunnel begins to rise. It flows upward, wrapping around the white bones like red ribbons. The blood acting as a catalyst triggers an explosive reconstruction. Muscles, tendons, and skin are woven back over the skull at warp speed. This is not ordinary regeneration. This is a literal resurrection. Geo leaps, his fist fully formed, and connects directly with Do-young's jaw. The stone armor shatters like glass. Do-young is launched through the air, crashing into the concrete vault wall, leaving a massive spiderweb crack. He slides down, spitting blood, completely incapacitated. He looks up, his vision blurry. A pair of legs steps into view. Do-young stammers, asking what kind of monster he is fighting. He stares at the face. The shadow slowly clears, and his brain completely short-circuits. He recognizes that half-fleshed skull, the raw muscular structure weaving over the jaw. It is the exact same face from his childhood in the lab, the skeleton kid who supposedly blew himself up. Do-young's voice trembles as he asks if it is really him. He whispers the name, Kim Geo. So, Do-young is currently questioning his entire life. Geo is standing right over him, fist raised, and the air pressure in the tunnel is literally vibrating. Do-young thinks this is the end. He thinks Geo is about to put him in the ground. He knows he cannot survive a clean hit from a guy who just regenerated from a bare skeleton. He screams Geo's name. The massive fist stops exactly 1 inch from his nose. Do-young sigh scoffs, telling Geo to stop hitting him. Geo slowly pulls his fist back, his crimson eyes fading to gray. A few minutes later, we transition to the quiet warehouse office. Do-young is quietly brewing coffee, trying to act casual. Geo is sitting on the couch, looking at his hands. Do-young's internal monologue is on life support. He realizes this is not the weak, fragile No. 10101 he used to know. The raw physical power required to shatter stone skin is completely unnatural. He hands Geo a steaming mug, telling him to drink. He thinks to himself that Geo's soft-hearted nature makes him a massive asset. If he can keep Geo on his side, his own survival rate goes up. He sits down opposite him, asking why Geo hid his identity to work as a low-level construction worker. He acts offended, drinking his coffee. Geo does not answer. He just reaches his hand out. Do-young looks at the open palm, confused. Geo grabs Do-young's hand, holding it tight. He closes his eyes, and we get a quick mental flashback to the night Geo talked to Song Hyein. Geo is lying on the grass, looking up at her commanding silhouette. He asks her what he should do if his old friends try to kill him again. Hyein does not offer empty comfort. She tells him he has to fight. Geo complains that the thought of hurting his childhood friends is too painful. He asks if there is any way to just talk to them and convince them to stop. She literally smacks him across the forehead with a loud slap. She tells him to grow up. Geo rubs his head, muttering that he just wants to rescue them. Hyein says he is completely delusional. She explains that his friends are high-ranking test subjects holding elite positions inside the lab. They are likely cold-blooded killers who have spent the last few years committing felonies. She leans in, asking Geo if he honestly thinks mass murderers are going to listen to his emotional pleas. She warns him that if he remains naive, his friends will simply exploit his kindness and lead him to his death. She reminds him of how Lee Chae-won betrayed him without a second thought. She says his friends are no longer victims. They are the ones who will drive him to his grave. Gio stares at the ground, processing the harsh truth. He realizes the kids he played with in the hospital wards are gone. If he does not change his approach, he will lose them all. He asks how he is supposed to change his mindset. Hye-in smiles slightly. She tells him he has to change his perspective entirely. She tells him to stop thinking of them as friends. If he truly wants to save them, he needs to stand above them and overpower them. Gio asks how he can possibly do that. Hye-in bites her own finger, drawing a small bead of blood. She tells him to try absorbing her blood. Cut back to the present office, where Gio releases Do-young's hand. He looks up with a completely different, mature look in his eyes. He tells Do-young his heart rate is currently 80 beats per minute. Do-young's gray stone heart skips a beat. He jumps back, asking if Gio seriously just read his pulse through his skin. Gio looks at his palm, confirming he can hear the rhythmic beat of Do-young's heart. He recalls Hye-in explaining that blood catalyst mutants can sometimes develop sensory resonance. If he can read their heart rate, he can detect lies and gain the upper hand in any negotiation. Gio's face goes completely dark. He asks Do-young why he is working with the lab. He reminds him that the lab tortured them for a decade, demanding an answer. Do-young takes a long, slow sip of his coffee, trying to keep his pulse steady. He thinks to himself that Gio has returned as an absolute monster. He lowers his cup, telling Gio he will answer one question. He asks Gio what his ultimate goal is. Gio says he is going to take down the lab. Do-young literally chokes on his coffee, coughing hysterically. Gio ignores the dramatic reaction, asking how deep Do-young's involvement goes. Do-young stands up, telling Gio he is being reckless, and that the lab is not some local gang he can just punch out. He points out that all their surviving friends are tied to the syndicate, asking if Gio plans to fight them all alone. Gio says yes. He is going to destroy the lab and pull their friends out of the fire. Do-young raises his hands, saying he is officially out, and that he has zero desire to stand against the lab. Gio tilts his head, telling Do-young that if he is out, Gio will simply take his research data by force and tear the office apart to find it. Do-young flinches, his hands remaining in the air. He lets out a frustrated sigh. He walks over to his desk, pulling out a thick stack of documents. He slams them onto the glass table, admitting he has been secretly gathering data from inside the lab. Gio flips through the files, finding partial blueprints, mutant codenames, and lists of missing persons. Do-young says it contains almost everything except Class 1 confidential files, telling Gio to take it and leave him out of his crusade. Gio looks at the papers, then back at Do-young. He says something is off. Do-young asks what. Gio notes that Do-young has gathered way too much high-level intel for someone who supposedly wants nothing to do with the lab. He adds that Do-young's heart rate spiked the second Gio mentioned attacking the lab. He asks if Do-young secretly wants to take down the lab too. We see a quick flashback of a young Do-young chained to a chair in the lab, screaming in agony. Do-young's eye twitches. He flops back onto the couch, defeated, muttering that Gio's lie detector ability is completely unfair. He rubs his temples, admitting Gio is right. He wants to destroy the lab too, but says it is realistically a suicide mission. He explains that the lab's influence is tied into national politics, massive conglomerates, and the underworld, with core facilities buried deep underground. He points to a document listing their old friends. He says the entire foundation of the lab's power is built on using their childhood friends as weapons. They use weaknesses and rewards to manipulate high-tier mutants into controlling the country from the shadows. He asks Gio if he still plans to charge in blindly knowing the scale of the enemy. Gio says yes. He will rescue the captives and make sure the lab can never use them again. He says his mind is made up, but he looks at Do-young and says he needs his help. Do-young scoffs, saying no matter how strong Gio is, two teenagers cannot take on a global syndicate. Gio smiles, telling him they are not alone. He asks Do-young if he knows the name Song Hye-in. Do-young's jaw drops. He stammers, asking if he means the legendary leader of the mutant special team. We see a stylized silhouette of Hye-in standing over defeated variants, looking like a literal boss fight. Do-young's inner monologue is screaming, wondering why Gio is casually name-dropping the strongest mutant in the country. He asks if the special task force is actually backing him. Gio says yes, and offers to introduce them right now, if Do-young cooperates. Do-young's mind is blown. He realizes that with the police task force on their side, and Gio's insane power, they actually have a realistic shot at saving their friends. He looks at Gio's confident smile. Gio tells him that if he cannot trust himself, he should just trust him. Do-young sighs, muttering that Gio always turns everything upside down. He reaches his hand out, and they lock hands in a solid handshake, cementing their alliance. Meanwhile, we transition to a dark, cold laboratory cell. A scientist in a bloody lab coat walks into a pink-lit room. Chained to the ceiling by her wrists is Lim Na-rin, test subject 0032. The scientist looks at her cold, empty expression, whispering that she is the regeneration subject meant to replace Gio, and that no one is coming to save her. We open with Song Hye-in sitting in the warehouse office, reviewing Do-young's file. Do-young is sitting on the couch in a black tank top, looking incredibly tense. Hye-in looks up, asking if her information on subject 0442 is correct. Do-young admits she knows a lot, asking if she has been investigating him from the very beginning. She takes a sip of coffee, confirming his company has been on their watch list for months. Do-young's face goes completely dark. He asks if it is standard police procedure to use a civilian friend as bait. He tells her she is crossing a serious line. Hyein doesn't even flinch. She just giggles behind her papers, calling him a cute little bristling hedgehog. Do-young's eye twitches, completely embarrassed, while Jio stands in the background, looking slightly confused. Jio whispers to Do-young that his heartbeat is so loud, he does not even need his mutant ability to hear it, asking if he is really that scared. Do-young's internal voice is screaming that he is absolutely terrified. He looks at Hyein, who is casually sipping coffee with her legs crossed. Her sheer presence and overwhelming aura make it feel like she is reading his mind. Hyein lowers her mug, telling him not to think so badly of her, since they are ultimately after the same enemy. Do-young crosses his arms, muttering that it is not easy to trust the police, asking what guarantees he has that she won't just use him and throw him away. Hyein gives him a sweet, fake smile, claiming she is actually a very warm and gentle person. Do-young is not buying it. He says her words offer zero reassurance. Hyen's eyes go cold. Her smile turns into a chilling, polite grin, as she suggests that maybe he would prefer to share a cell with Lee Chae-won. She notes that she was trying to find a legal loophole to clean his record, but since he wants to be difficult, prison is always an option. Do-young's face goes completely pale as he realizes she is not playing games. He immediately backtracks, stammering that he was planning to cooperate from the very start. Hyein gets serious, stating that aiding Hermes' lab is a high-level terrorist offense, meaning she could lock him up indefinitely right now if she wanted to. But as long as he stays within acceptable limits, she is willing to overlook his past activities, because her ultimate goal is the complete destruction of the lab. Do-young swallows hard, nodding, promising to cooperate fully. Hyein taps her pen, telling him to get straight to business and share his most valuable piece of intelligence. Do-young pulls out a file, sliding a photo of a young girl across the table, saying there is one old friend they can save immediately. The photo shows a gloomy-looking girl with long twin tails, wearing a red and black striped sweater. He tells Jio that he must remember her. Na-rin. Jio's face lights up instantly, smiling as he remembers her as a super energetic, kind, and bubbly girl. Do-young's jaw drops. He looks at Jio like he has lost his mind, arguing that Na-rin was always cold, silent, and gloomy. They stare at each other in complete, awkward silence for a long moment. Do-young barks, asking what Jio is talking about, calling Na-rin an absolute psychopath. Jio looks genuinely confused, insisting she was a total angel. And we get a quick flashback of the lab, where a young Na-rin is running up and hugging a half-fleshed skeleton Jio from behind. She is smiling brightly, asking Jio why he is sitting all alone, and begging him to play with her. Young skeleton Jio looked away, embarrassed, saying his regenerating skin looked gross and he was too shy to play. But Na-rin's face lit up with a slightly unhinged grin. She screamed that she loved it and that watching his flesh knit together made her feel incredibly good. Cut back to the present, where Do-hyung is yelling that she was clearly a crazy brat, while Jio stands by his defense that she was just energetic. Hyein slaps her hand onto a blueprint map, cutting off their bickering. She notes that since Na-rin is close to Jio, she will be easy to persuade once they intercept her. She circles a route on the map, explaining that they are going to block off the main highway. Do-young's intel suggests the lab's transport convoy will be routed through Eunbaek-ro. Jio and Do-young's job is to ambush the transport trucks, wipe out the escort, and rescue Na-rin. Do-young frowns, noting that if he makes a loud move like that, the lab will suspect his betrayal, asking about his personal protection. Hyein leans in, her eyes cold as ice, giving them exactly 10 minutes. She explains that the police will fully jam all local communications and block any reinforcements from entering the sector for 10 minutes. Do-young realizes that having a corrupt or highly placed police official on their side is incredibly convenient. Jio nods, declaring they will get the job done. Later that night, we see a dark, winding forest road. Jio and Do-young are crouched in the bushes on a cliff, overlooking the highway. Do-young is still whispering, asking Jio if Na-rin was seriously not a psychopath in his eyes. Jio defends her, saying that when she stabbed them with scalpels, it was just wholesome scientific curiosity, and when she pushed him off the roof, they jumped together. Do-young sighs, muttering that she is still weird, but admits her regeneration potential makes her too valuable to leave in the lab's hands. Jio looks at him silently. Do-young's face goes solemn as he asks if Chae-won really ended up in a maximum security prison. Jio looks down, whispering that Chae-won's criminal record was too heavy for Hyein to simply overlook. Do-young nods slowly, admitting he heard rumors about Chae-won doing dirty work, agreeing that she deserves to be locked up. He stares at his own stone hands. He mutters that so much has changed over the past few years while Jio was gone. Jio looks up at the moon, saying he was equally surprised to find Do-young alive. Do-young says he thought Jio was dead because he assumed his regeneration heart was too weak to survive the explosion. Jio admits that back then, his regeneration was incredibly slow, taking hours just to heal a finger. Do-young looks away, his hand gripping a tree trunk. His fingers start digging into the bark as he remembers the terrifying armed recovery squads and the sound of their friends screaming as they were dragged away. He admits that just hearing the word, the lab, makes his body react in fear. His eyes narrow, confessing that terrifying memories flash in his mind like Pavlov's dog. He crouches down, his hand trembling, whispering that even now, he is so insanely nervous, he feels like he is going crazy. He looks up at Gio, asking if Gio is not scared of the lab at all. Gio is silent for a long moment. He looks down, whispering that he is terrified too, but he has already watched a friend die, right in front of his eyes. We see a quick flashback of a young skeleton Gio, surrounded by bones, screaming in pure grief. Gio grits his teeth, declaring that losing a friend hurts infinitely more than having his own body torn to shreds. His hand grips the grass, ripping it out by the roots, growling that he is sick and tired of running. He looks at the highway, his eyes glowing crimson, as he says it is finally the lab's turn to pay. Do-young smiles slightly, his fear seeming to vanish, as he mutters that this time, they will become the lab's worst nightmare. Suddenly, a convoy of heavily armored black trucks appears in the distance through Hyen's sniper scope. Hyen speaks into her radio, ordering the blockade team to close the road. The police special forces slide heavy steel barricades across the highway, activating the high-power signal jammers. Up on the cliff, Gio stands up, tying his shoelaces, telling Do-young they are ready. Hyen's voice echoes through the earpiece one last time, warning them that they are cutting all comms to avoid interception, telling Gio to act on his own judgment. Gio looks down at the approaching headlights, whispering that he understands. Suddenly, a massive geological tremor ripples through the highway, shattering the asphalt. The lead transport driver's eyes widen in surprise as the road literally collapses beneath his tires. Do-young drops from the cliff, landing on the hood of the second truck in a crouch. He mutters that he is going to overcome his fear right now. He slams his petrified hand into the engine block. The driver screams that they are being attacked by a heart variant. Massive jagged rock pillars erupt from the concrete, launching the transport trucks into the air and flipping them onto their sides. Do-young looks at the main containment truck, noting that the armored plating is tough, just as he expected. Despite the crash, there is not a single scratch on the reinforced container. Inside the driver's cabin, the guard is frantically screaming into his dead radio, calling for backup. He screams at his men to secure the transport container and protect the variant at all costs. Suddenly, a shadow blocks the moonlight above the container roof. Gio drops down, landing on top of the armored container with a heavy thud. The guards inside look up, their faces pale with shock. They yell at each other to lock the reinforced doors. Gio looks down, his hand calcifying slightly as he whispers that there is no need to lock it. He punches the solid steel roof with a bone-shattering blow. The force of the punch is so intense that Gio's fingers are completely stripped of flesh, exposing raw white bone. But the steel roof is torn open, leaving a gaping hole. Gio digs his raw skeletal fingers into the torn steel edges, peeling the heavy armor plate back like a tin can. He peers down into the dark, cold container interior, and there, sitting in the shadows, chained to the floor, is Nerin. Suddenly, the heavy back doors of the convoy are slammed open. A squad of elite, heavily armed lab mercenaries rushes out, weapons drawn, yelling that they have 2 variants on site. Gio jumps down, his arm already fully regenerated, looking at the guards with a cold, confident smirk. He says he found her, and suggests they wrap this up in 5 minutes. The tactical squad immediately locks onto their targets, coordinating their automatic gunfire. Do-young does not even wait for them to finish their call-out, slamming his hand onto the cracked pavement. Massive, jagged stone pillars erupt from the asphalt, shattering the road and forcing the guards to scramble to the right. The squad commander barks orders to maintain distance until they can analyze the variant's capabilities. A high-caliber round hits Do-young directly in the forehead, sending a spray of blood backward, but his skin instantly calcifies into solid stone, confirming his high-tier rock armor. The tactical team realizes they are dealing with a Class A defense type, switching their focus entirely to Gio. The sniper locks his red crosshairs directly onto Gio's chest. Gio moves like a glitching speedrunner, sliding under the hail of bullets behind the armored truck. The guards try to adjust, assuming they are dealing with a standard physical reinforcement variant. But Gio is already using Do-young's stone pillars as tactical cover, closing the gap at high speed. The guards realize they have been flanked, but it is already too late. Gio launches a devastating spin kick, sending weapons and tactical gear flying through the air. He drives a solid fist straight through a guard's reinforced face shield. The impact literally shatters the visor, launching the man into the pavement. A sudden automatic burst hits Gio directly in the head. The impact is brutal, multiple rounds tearing through his upper body, torso, and legs. He drops to his knees in a massive pool of his own blood, looking completely finished. The shooter lowers his weapon, expecting a clean kill. But Gio's eyes flare crimson, and his flesh rapidly knits back together. He pivots instantly, launching a counterpunch that lifts a guard clean off his feet. He systematically dismantles the remaining perimeter squad with effortless close-quarters strikes. Suddenly, a metallic clicking sound echoes from the roof of the armored transport. 3 heavy steel grapple claws erupt from a launcher, piercing deep into Gio's shoulders. The cables surge with brilliant blue electricity, anchoring him to the pavement. The commander authorizes the deployment of their heavy suppression generator, dialing the voltage to maximum. 50,000 volts of electricity surge through the lines, exposing Gio's raw white skeletal frame underneath. Do-young watches from the sidelines, his face turning completely pale with terror. The blinding light triggers a deep, visceral memory. He remembers the heavy industrial generators the lab used to keep them contained. We flash back to their childhood escape attempt, where young Do-young was desperately trying to hold the security gates. He screamed at Nae-rin and Chae-won to carry the injured children and escape through the emergency exit. Chae-won was hesitant, pointing out the overwhelming number of armed recovery squads. Do-young gave a confident, brave smile, claiming his stone walls would protect them easily. But then, the lab tactical squads authorized their electric suppression devices. Do-young was hit with a high-voltage surge, his stone armor instantly crumbling as his nervous system overloaded. The sheer agony of that moment is burned into his brain. Without his defense, his stone barrier shattered, and the recovery squads recaptured everyone. Back in the present, Do-young drops to his knees, trembling as the smell of ozone fills the air. His body still physically reacts to the sound of those charging generators. The guards spot him, aiming their weapons at his unprotected joints, where the hardening is weakest. Do-young is frozen, realizing that if he gets electrocuted again, he will be completely helpless. A second set of grapple claws is fired directly at his chest. Gio's voice suddenly echoes through the static, calling him an idiot for overthinking in the middle of a fight. Gio tells him to stop dwelling on the past. He says these weapons are useless if they simply destroy the power source. Do-young snaps out of his panic, launching a high-speed kick to dodge the incoming claws. He slides across the asphalt, trying to find a clear path to the generator. The commander authorizes the use of high-explosive rounds to suppress him. A hail of explosive bullets tears up the road, cutting off Do-young's path. Do-young is forced to guard, realizing the guards are actively protecting their equipment. He gets pinned down by a crossfire he did not anticipate. Suddenly, 3 more electric claws are launched from his blind spot, aiming directly for his throat. Do-young's eyes widen, realizing he cannot dodge in time. The claws pierce through his shoulder armor, threatening to disable his nervous system. But the cables are suddenly caught by a bare, bloody hand. Gio is standing right beside him, holding all the active electric lines in his grip. 50,000 volts of raw electricity surge directly through Gio's body once again, lighting up his skeleton. The generator's display screen glitters, confirming the output has hit its absolute peak. The operators scream to maintain the current until Gio is completely neutralized. They dump an insane 50,000 volts of current straight into the line. The commander's eyes widen under his helmet as he looks at the monitor. Gio's hand is charred black, but his grip on the steel cables only tightens. With a sudden massive flex, he pulls the lines, dragging 3 fully geared guards across the asphalt. The operators are in absolute disbelief, realizing they are dealing with something that defies basic human biology. Do-young stares in absolute awe, wondering if Gio has developed an actual immunity to electricity. Gio's flesh rapidly regenerates over his charred face as he sighs, complaining that it actually hurts. He looks down at the remaining guard, telling him they should not use such dangerous toys on people. The terrified commander drops his weapon, stammering, asking where this monster came from. Gio looks him dead in the eye, calmly stating he is just here to pick up a friend. The commander realizes his entire squad has been systematically wiped out by 2 teenagers. He scrambles backward, muttering that they picked the wrong targets. Gio steps forward, his fist cocked back. He launches a devastating punch that sends the commander flying into a highway sign. With the perimeter cleared, Do-young suggests they tie them up so they cannot call for backup. Gio shakes his head, walking toward the main transport truck, saying they do not have a single second to waste. Do-young is confused, arguing that they rescued Nae-rin, so they have plenty of time. He pulls open the container door and freezes. Inside, tied up and gagged, is a random, terrified male guard. It is a decoy. Do-young stammers in shock, but Gio admits he knew it was a fake since the moment they launched their first strike. Gio walks over to the truck's driver cabin, grabbing the handle. He literally rips the reinforced door clean off its hinges with his bare hand. He grabs the driver by his collar, dragging him out. The driver is shaking violently, begging for his life, claiming he is just a low-level worker. Gio looks at him with cold, empty eyes, asking if he knows Nae-rin's actual location. He squeezes the steering wheel, bending the solid steel like plastic, demanding a clear answer. The driver stammers that the route was swapped at the last second to throw off any pursuit. Gio leans in, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, telling him to speak fast, because their time is up. He asks one final time where they took Lim Nae-rin. Cut to the Mutant Transport Temporary Holding Center, a high-security warehouse buried in snow. Inside, a researcher is presenting a clipboard to Director Han Ki-cheol, confirming test subject 0321's vitals are stable. The researcher notes that her pain response is almost non-existent, but her pupils are still reacting. As the researcher reaches out to examine her, a sharp metallic thorn suddenly erupts from her neck. The thorn pierces the doctor's hand, sending him stumbling back, screaming in pain. The doctor is terrified, wondering how an unconscious subject can still activate her mutation. Han Ki-cheol looks down, noting that her primal defensive instinct remains active even under heavy sedation. He notes that her heart is reacting purely on biological autopilot. He identifies her mutation as the heart of the cactus, praising her rapid thorn generation. He leans close, a sadistic, cold expression on his face. He says her thorns are not what he is interested in. He grabs Nae-rin by her throat, squeezing tightly. He whispers that her true value lies in her high-speed cellular regeneration. He notes it is not quite as perfect as that guy's, but more than enough for their next phase of experiments. He tells her to make sure she does not die, since dead subjects are useless to the company. Suddenly, the lab doors are thrown open, and a panicked security officer screams that they have an emergency. He reports that Transport Team 1 has been completely wiped out by a coordinated variant attack. Han Ki-cheol's face goes dark, calling the situation a massive nuisance. He orders them to postpone Team 2's transport. He decides to pack up their research data and head back to the main facility immediately. The staff frantically gathers files, preparing to evacuate the building. Suddenly, a massive, seismic rumble shakes the entire warehouse. The ceiling collapses in a shower of concrete and steel, burying the transport trucks in debris. Through the thick dust, Geo speaks into his radio, reporting to Hyen that they have successfully located the temporary base. Do-young stands beside him, looking like an absolute menace, confirming the perimeter guards have been neutralized. Han Ki-cheol turns slowly, his eyes wide with disbelief as he looks at the two intruders. He grits his teeth, wondering how they dared to launch such a reckless frontal assault on his facility. Do-young leans over the driver, demanding the exact coordinates and transport schedule for Team 2. The trembling driver reaches into his glove box, handing over a sheet of paper. He begs for his life, claiming he has zero knowledge of the actual experiments. Geo looks at the paper, his face instantly turning serious. He stares at the supervisor's name, printed at the bottom, Han Ki-cheol. Inside the breached facility, the alarm system is blaring as tactical guards scramble down the stairs. Do-young and Geo slide down the structural girders, dropping straight into the security zone. Geo notes that Han Ki-cheol was a high-clearance researcher back when they were kids. Do-young grits his teeth, noting that the bastard must have climbed the corporate ladder fast after the escape 3 years ago. We get a quick flashback of Han Ki-cheol smiling sadistically as young variants are dragged back in heavy chains. Geo says they need to split up to cover more ground. Do-young is slightly hesitant, but Geo points out that his rock spikes are perfect for pinning down large crowds of guards. He tells Do-young to act as the loud distraction, while he slips into the back to extract Naren. Do-young look offended, asking if Geo seriously expects him to fight an entire army of armed mercenaries by himself. Geo slips his face mask on, offering to switch roles if Do-young thinks he cannot handle the heat. Do-young smirks, slamming his hands onto the concrete floor. A massive, ceiling-high stone spire erupts behind the guards, proving he is more than suited to be the distraction. He pulls his mask up, telling Geo to get moving and leave the crowd to him. Geo bolts down the corridor, telling him to stay safe. The tactical squad spots Do-young, immediately raising their weapons. The squad commander barks orders to open fire on the target. A bullet hits Do-young directly in the temple, but the impact only chips his hardened rock armor. Do-young raises a massive, petrified stone fist, telling them they picked the wrong place to start a fight. He driving his fist into the ground, creating a localized shockwave. The impact launches several armed guards across the corridor like ragdolls. The survivors call out his rock ability, reclassifying him as a high-risk combatant. They order the squad to switch to high-powered heavy rounds. Suddenly, a massive bundle of heavy steel chains whips through the air, wrapping around Do-young's arms. Han Ki-cheol stands at the end of the hall, holding the Master Link, ordering his men to cease fire. He looks at Do-young, identifying him as Test Subject 0072. He notes that Do-young's mask is torn, revealing the cracked stone skin underneath. He mocks him, reminding him of how he begged for his life and swore loyalty after being recaptured 3 years ago. He calls him a pathetic, hopeless coward who is about to learn his lesson all over again. We flash back to 3 years ago, where a young Do-young is wrapped in heavy iron chains, crying in agony. He is screaming for mercy, begging Han Ki-cheol not to kill him. Han Ki-cheol remembers how easily Do-young's stone armor dissolved under the influence of pure terror. He mocks his useful mutation, calling him pathetic for being too paralyzed by fear to even use it properly. He asks if Do-young honestly thought a coward like him could survive outside the laboratory. He tells him to devote his body entirely to their experiments if he wants to keep breathing. He asks which idiot forced him to participate in this foolish rescue mission this time. Back in the present, Do-young's eyes turn sharp behind his mask. He declares that no one forced him. With a sudden, explosive surge of strength, he rips the chains forward, dragging Han Ki-cheol off his feet. Han Ki-cheol is shocked by the sudden change in power, but he quickly recovers, swinging from the rafters, mocking Do-young for following his stronger friends out of fear. Do-young flinches, realizing Han Ki-cheol's words are targeting his deepest insecurities. The tactical squad uses the opening to position their heavy stun generators. They prepare their stun guns for a coordinated volley fire. A storm of electric grapple claws is launched directly at Do-young. Do-young is forced to retreat, sliding under the cables to avoid getting disabled. The commander calls out his movement, ordering his men to cut off his escape route. Han Ki-cheol launches another heavy iron chain, aiming directly for Do-young's back. The chains wrap around his shoulders, digging deep into his skin. Do-young struggles against the physical constraints, his boots sliding backward. He slams his hand down, summoning a defensive stone wall to block the guard's line of sight. He gasps for air, his body trembling as the memories of the laboratory electrocutions flood his mind. He looks through the cracks in his stone armor, realizing his fear has not disappeared. 3 more chains whip through the smoke, shattering his defensive wall. Do-young is pinned to the ground, the heavy iron links wrapping around his neck and limbs. Han Ki-cheol walks forward, a sadistic smile on his face, asking if he honestly thought his resolve could change his nature. He says Do-young's fear of the lab has simply not been carved deep enough yet. He raises his hand, the chains tightening around Do-young's throat. He promises to make sure Do-young's body remembers the pain of disobedience first. Do-young looks down at the cracked concrete floor, admitting that Han Ki-cheol is right. He admits that his body is still terrified and wants to run away right now. He admits he spent his entire life running, surviving, and doing nothing while his friends were dragged away. His internal metrics flash on screen. Calcium 55%, adrenaline 25%, crystallized nerve mass 7.1%. He grabs a handful of raw brick debris, stuffing it into his mouth and chewing it to fuel his stone core. With a sudden, earth-shaking roar, he declares he is officially done running. Do-young's right arm transforms into a massive, brick-reinforced geological fist. He launches a devastating straight punch, shattering the iron chains in a single blow. The impact creates a massive shockwave that tears up the concrete floor and launches brick shrapnel across the corridor. The guards are caught in the blast, screaming as the high-velocity debris shreds their tactical armor. The entire corridor is completely devastated by the sheer force of Do-young's attack. Do-young drops to one knee, breathing heavily, his arm slowly reverting to its normal state. He looks at the massive crater, thinking he finally did enough to protect his friends. But through the thick dust, Han Ki-cheol is still suspended on his chains, completely untouched. He mocks Do-young's slow speed, sitting on his chains like a gargoyle, claiming his efforts are useless. Do-young grits his teeth, realizing he has exhausted his energy. Han Ki-cheol smiles, pointing out that his plan was obvious from the start, and that the other intruder went after Narin. He claims he has already dispatched an elite squad to dog Gio's heels, so the rescue has already failed. Do-young collapses onto the floor, but a sudden smirk spreads across his face. Suddenly, Han's radio crackles to life, a panicked voice screaming that their entire internal security team has been wiped out. Han Ki-cheol's face goes pale, grabbing his radio in disbelief. The operator screams that the other intruder is an absolute monster, and they cannot hold him. Han Ki-cheol stammers, asking what they mean by a high-risk mutant. Do-young looks up from the dirt, a triumphant smile on his face, enjoying Han Ki-cheol's panic. Han Ki-cheol realizes Gio is the actual primary threat in this facility. He orders his remaining guards to finish Do-young while he runs toward Narin's containment chamber. Inside the chamber, Gio effortlessly snaps the heavy steel chains, restraining Narin. He kneels beside her, telling her to wake up because they are here to get her out. Narin slowly opens her eyes, looking at Gio's smiling face in confusion. Suddenly, a thick steel chain whips out from the ceiling, wrapping tightly around Gio's neck. Gio is pulled backward, the heavy links tightening as Han Ki-cheol emerges from the shadows. Han Ki-cheol smiles sadistically, calling it his lucky day, noting that 2 prime test subjects have rolled right into his hands.